Our story begins with a monologue. He says his mother told him that no matter how hard life was, he should dream big. If he kept moving forward, chasing his dream, eventually he would become the protagonist of his own life, and he believed her. Unfortunately, he now feels foolish for believing in those stories, because at that moment he was choking on his own blood and spitting it out. His legs no longer obeyed his commands, and he was lying on the ground. Leaning against a random piece of rubble, he wondered if that was the place where he would perish. He had a wound caused by a demonic spear, and it couldn't be healed by potions or magic. Maybe an elixir could fix it, but he didn't have one. Maybe he did, the MC thinks as a group of people approaches. This group had 4 people, 1 man and 3 women. The man, named Choi Do-yoon, looked at him in that miserable state. Stopping in front of the MC, he said that he could have defeated the monster alone. He didn't even need to interfere, but he chose to anyway. The MC gave a weak chuckle, and the man asked what was so funny. He simply replied that the man said exactly what he thought he would. In his thoughts, he says he worked himself to exhaustion there. He even teamed up with that psychopath just to survive. Still, it was insane to think he would lose his life trying to save him. Ordinary people, in the middle of that disaster, hugged each other and cried. The boy asked if Do-yoon had an elixir, and he replied that he did. The MC then asked if he intended to use it to save his life. Do-yoon responded that the price of an elixir was astronomical, so if he was saving that one for himself, he wouldn't waste it like that. To complete the humiliation, he added that the protagonist wasn't worth enough for him to use the elixir on. The boy gave a weak laugh. Almost losing consciousness, he said that the world was completely screwed up. The divine spirits, the greatest beings in the heavens, they enjoyed watching humans struggle for their own entertainment, handing out challenges and rewards. They saw that bastard Do-yoon as great entertainment and didn't care about someone like him. No one ever cared about him. The MC cursed that world, Do-yoon, and the divine spirits to hell as his final words. One of the women scolded him, but Do-yoon interrupted her. Raising his hand, he asked the protagonist why he had done it. He only needed to provide intel and watch the fights. Why did he choose to fight? The boy replied that he was tired of staying in the shadows and tired of life. He had reached his limit, and so he started laughing again. Do-yoon asked if he did it just to save some civilians. He was probably going to say more, but something interrupted him. A being appeared above them, and everyone looked up. It was a teller, a race that intermediated between humans and divine spirits, and they were the ones who sold humanity out to the other beings. Excited, the messenger said they had done well in the survival task. The MC just thought they didn't care about their suffering. The messenger then said the next challenge awaited. The end was near, and they should do their best. The MC told Do-yoon to go. He just wanted him and his group to leave. The redhead complained about being called a minion by him, but the other girl told her to let it go. Do-yoon's face looked angry, which made the MC curious. He asked the man if he would use the elixir on him because he was sad about his death, but that didn't seem to be the case. The man turned around, and together with his group, turned their backs on the protagonist, leaving him where he was. His true last words were goodbye. Once again, he felt excruciating pain and vomited blood again. All he could think was that in the end, he failed to be the MC of his own story. He failed both in that world and in his story. He was never the protagonist of either. He truly thought it was the end, but then a blue light approached him, and he opened his eyes to see what it was. The boy then wondered what he had been living for. He at least hoped paradise was real at the end of this life. Regretfully, the MC said that if he had a second chance, if he could fix his mistakes, he would rise higher than anyone in that world. So high that he wouldn't need to envy anyone and could be proud of himself. He just wanted to live a life like that. Raising his hands to the sky, he sheds tears as his vision fades away forever. The scene changes, and now we see an absurd number of tiny little creatures with their little holes showing. A bunch of small ghosts. The MC opens his eyes and wonders where the hell he was. Was he still alive? That was impossible. He had been pierced by the cursed demonic blade. There was no way he could have survived that attack. Suddenly, he seems to see his own reflection and is shocked. He was now one of those little creatures we saw at the beginning of the scene. Frightened, he screams, asking what the hell all those things were. A voice says it seems they're all here now, and that catches the protagonist's attention. The MC sees a humanoid creature with the head of a deer. It was a teller, but this one seemed different from the ones who used to appear to humans. Turning to the little creatures, he says he's going to briefly explain the situation they're all in. Now they were going to be their messengers. Everyone was there to prove their worth. This nonsense confuses the protagonist. There was a company called Celestial Corp ANC. Even without fully understanding the situation, the messenger says the explanation ends there, and suddenly a portal opens beneath all of them. As the creatures fall into the vortex, the teller tells them to show what they got. The creatures scream while falling into the endless void of space. The protagonist wonders what was happening. Was he going to die again? A system screen appears in front of him, with the message activating Genesis Blessing. Several bubbles form around the creatures, protecting them and stopping their fall into the void. The protagonist starts to panic because he can't breathe inside the bubble. But then again, he doesn't even have a nose. How was he breathing before? The system screen displays his first mission. He was now a teller, and he needed to gift the divine spirits with good stories. He had 1 hour. If he failed the mission, he would lose his life for good. That makes the protagonist furious. How could they be put in such a situation? Before he could complain more, he sees something that grabs his attention. From a distance, he could see Earth, but that planet had been destroyed years ago. How was that even possible? The MC realizes he truly is in the afterlife, but he's been reincarnated as a storyteller, and he notices that he's in the past. Still unsure of what was going on, he decides to focus on his mission, especially since the countdown was already at 57 minutes. If he was in the past, back when Earth still existed, then this must be the era when the collectors were still active. Even before it was destroyed, life there wasn't normal. Several gates had opened, and monsters started coming out. The collectors hunted them. The protagonist thinks that he should choose one of those collectors who didn't have a contract yet. But something about the mission felt off. Every collector needs a contract with a teller in order to grow stronger and gain sponsorship from the divine spirits. This didn't seem like such a hard mission to complete. He presses the Accept Mission button. The system screen gives him his destination. He had to go to Seoul, South Korea. Why am I not surprised? They always go there. The protagonist was struggling to press the mission button on the system screen because of how short his arms were. Shaking with the effort to press the button, he also complains about not having fingers. Something strange happens, and the protagonist's attention shifts. Meanwhile, watching through system screens, the teller becomes curious. He notices that most of those little creatures didn't really understand the situation they were in, and he already thought this batch wouldn't be very promising. Then something catches his attention. Suddenly, the little creature that was our protagonist transforms into a human. Even he is shocked by the transformation and wonders if it happened because he really wanted it, due to the lack of fingers. Before he could get lost in thoughts about it, he decides to focus on the mission. It was far more important. After pressing the button, he vanishes. The other little creatures also notice the MC's transformation and wonder how he managed to do it. The teller who hired them was stunned to see that the MC had turned into a human. It happened way too fast. This wasn't normal. In just 3 minutes, he had achieved a transformation that usually took 2 to 4 weeks. Things were now looking a lot more interesting from that teller's perspective. This mission wasn't going to be as boring as he'd have thought. We are now in the capital of South Korea. The protagonist was on a street, observing, still unaware of where exactly he was, but something caught his attention the very next moment. He was standing in front of the Collectors Association, and that was impressive because they had ceased to exist after the apocalypse began. In the end, the MC decided to stop thinking about it because he needed to focus on finding a collector first, so he opened the system window. There were some red dots on the map, probably already contracted collectors, and the blue dots were the ones without a contract. If his assumptions were correct, he needed to sign a contract with a collector who had at least some talent, or he would have serious problems. He was still thinking about how difficult that would be when a police officer approached him and called for his attention. Looking back, he saw the officer asking who he was and if he was a collector, but the MC simply replied that he was looking for someone. The officer got furious at his attitude, so he grabbed the MC by the shoulder to get him out of there. Immediately, the system reacted and the officer received a powerful electric shock, making him pull his hand away from the protagonist at once. Shocked, the officer asked if he was a teller, to which the MC answered yes. He apologized, saying he thought he was human. As the officer ran off, the MC realized that he truly was in the past because tellers were treated with great respect during that time. That wasn't important to him, so he left and began searching for a collector with whom he could sign a contract. Looking at people through the system window, he could see their names and ages, but that didn't seem to help him at all. Closing the system window, he thought he didn't have time to be interviewing every collector he ran into. Looking ahead, he noticed something that caught his attention. A woman in the crowd with her hand inside her boyfriend's pants. No, wait. Actually, it turned out to be something else. There were some books there, but it seemed only the MC could see them. That wasn't a system window. It seemed to be something else, and he wondered if it was a skill unique to him. Time was running out. He had about 37 minutes left until the mission ended. It wasn't a lot, but he believed he still had time. He tried to grab the book with his hands, and the book started trembling before him. Apparently, his assumption was correct, and grabbing it worked. Curious, the MC picked up one of the books within reach to see what was written in it, but what he saw left him completely shocked. The ability he had was extremely powerful, and that excited him. Could this ability really be exclusive to him? There were 3 minutes left before the mission time limit ended. The other tellers had already found people to sign contracts with. Only the MC was left. The teller seemed disappointed in the protagonist. There was 1 minute left, and he already believed the MC was going to die. No matter how talented he was, there was no way to complete the mission in 1 minute. Switching to Yu-Yan's perspective, we see him looking at a girl eating instant noodles who was surprised to see him. Frightened, the girl fell back and asked what he was. She said she would call the police if he didn't leave her house immediately. The MC said nothing, which made the girl even more scared, asking if he could even hear her. A book appeared in front of her, and we see she looked a lot like the Dokebi from Rainbow Six Siege. She was left speechless by the sight. Smiling weirdly, the MC simply said that he had found her. Could it be that he knew her from the past? The world the MC was in was a mixed world, where reality and the abstract coexisted. The physical and spiritual realms were intertwined. Thinking about this, he realized that the contents of the book were so powerful they could be considered a cheat, but he was excited by it. Reading the contents of the book, he saw Kim Sang-duk, awakened 5 years ago with the water cannon skill. They showed others lives and pasts. Looking up, he wondered if there wasn't a book for him as well, but that didn't seem to be the case, and that made him a bit sad. Even so, he grabbed someone else's book and wondered why each one had different colors. He began reading the new book. The contents of this book led him to form a theory in his mind. If it was correct, then there weren't just bronze and silver books. It was quite possible he could find a gold-colored book, and the better the color, the more valuable the life the person had lived. The aura of the books showed him the person's innate abilities and their growth potential. So the aura was even more important than the color. And to think he could see people's potential long before they signed contracts, that was incredible. It would put him ahead of everyone. Realizing he still had time to find someone, he understood there was only one thing to do: look for the highest potential possible out there. Teleporting, he said he was sure he'd be able to find the best possible option with this ability he had. 10 minutes until the end of the mission. The protagonist was on the ground, frustrated for not having found anyone truly promising to contract. He started to get worried because his time was running out, but he was still determined. It was hard, but he didn't want to settle for lesser potential, knowing he might find the best one of all. So he began searching again. A woman walked past him, and the man asked her what year it was. She replied that it was the year 20XX. He thanked her and began to think. There were still 5 years before everything started to fall apart. He wondered who might awaken during this period with great potential. He remembered 3 who were known as the 3 Miraculous: the Saint Bang Sang, the Fire Knight Inbium, and the Sword Empress, Kang Hyrum. Yu-Yan opened the system to recall the 3. Bang Sang was an anonymous figure, impossible to locate, and Inbium lived in the US, which made things harder for him. The only option left was the Sword Empress, Kang Hyrum. Was she the girl we saw eating instant noodles? My goodness. She was the strongest of the 3, and he remembered an interview where she said she stayed hidden until her early days, so the MC went to find her. Arriving at the place where she was hiding, he was a bit confused, trying to understand where the system had sent him. It was a simple dormitory, and he found it hard to believe someone like the Sword Empress could live in such a filthy place. She hadn't noticed his presence yet and was calmly eating her noodles until he called her by name. Immediately, the girl looked back, startled, and we saw that the time left before the protagonist's mission ended was 4 minutes. We returned to the scene where she fell back, scared, trying to understand who he was and how he got inside her dorm room. The golden book appeared above the girl, but she wasn't aware of its presence and kept staring at the protagonist, frightened. Smiling, even while sweating, the man finally said that he had found her. Placing himself in a respectful posture, he introduced himself as a teller from Celestial Body Inc. and asked if she was Kang Hyrum. She said yes. Yu-Yan said he was there to sign a contract with her, and she, moved, asked if he was being serious. At that moment, the MC wondered if he had really found the right person. The girl was thrilled to see someone interested in making a contract with her. The MC was uneasy, but it was too late to back out now. He had no more time to look for anyone else, so he said that was exactly why he was there. She got nervous and said her abilities were bad. Yu-Yan asked who told her that, and she replied that everyone around her had said so she had given up on becoming a collector. That's when the MC understood why she lived in that place. She still had no idea of the level of her talent, and he explained that to her. Excited, the girl asked again if he was serious, and he confirmed it, approaching her in a slightly seductive way. He explained that he would help her awaken her true potential. She just needed to sign the contract he had brought out in his hands. He had only 15 seconds left, but she still hadn't signed the contract, which started to make the boy very nervous. The next moment, she asked where her pen was, and immediately the protagonist handed one to her. As she was signing her name on the contract, the MC urged her to be quick, otherwise we already know where he'd be going. She finally finished signing the contract, but it was already too late. Time had run out, and the story ends here. Just kidding. With only 2 seconds left before his life timer expired, the system window showed that he had successfully completed the mission. Satisfied, the MC thought about the promise he made before becoming a teller, that he would live a life with no regrets. Yuyan told the girl he was excited to work with her, and she lit up with joy, asking him to take good care of her. He was still impressed by what he had seen about her. In his previous life, she was so noble that people theorized she came from a wealthy family, but that wasn't the case. The MC pulled out the golden book containing the girl's past and opened it to see what might be in there to use, but something left him completely shocked. She had not 1, but 3 main character specializations, and only one of them had been awakened. Her level was already absurd. These specializations were so impressive that one of them was even the same as the one in Chuck Junkyun's story. 3 of the highest ranked talents, and only 1 had awakened. If she managed to awaken all 3 at once, just how powerful would she be? Yuyan asked her if she was aware of her talents. Hiram still believed her talents were weak, and the protagonist could hardly believe she thought that. She said that during her training, she had been instructed not to talk about her talents, but the MC reminded her that they had a contract now. Laughing, she said the name of the talent was Goryeo-era Sword Master, and claimed the name sounded like a joke. Yuyan was stunned by her attitude. He asked her to confirm whether she had ever told anyone about her abilities, and she said no. Besides, people didn't usually ask. The MC could only think that ignorance really was something frightening. She began to suspect he wanted to cancel the contract and said she wouldn't allow that, but he reassured her that he wasn't disappointed. Opening the system window, he received a notification that he had been officially hired by the teller's company and had a mission to attend the opening ceremony. He informed the girl that he'd have to leave for a bit, and she asked for how long. He said he didn't know, but it didn't seem like it would be quick. Yuyan asked what kind of equipment the girl used, and she said she used a shield. He asked why she had chosen that as her weapon. She explained that even though she didn't have combat talents, she was physically strong, so she figured she could serve on the front lines as a shield. During her training, she had used a spear because her instructors recommended it. This frustrated the MC. She'd avoided using a sword until now. Placing the shield in her hands, he asked her to listen to what he was going to say. He told her to trade the shield for a sword and train a lot. She asked if that was all she had to do, and he said yes, because only then would she truly grasp the extent of her talent's power. Pressing the button to accept the opening ceremony, he told her to make sure she did what he had told her to do. Hiram still tried to ask him to wait, but it was already too late. He had teleported and left her alone at that moment. After trading the shield for a sword, the girl was in a construction area, preparing to begin her sword training. Still uncertain, she wondered if she could really learn the art of the sword just by swinging it around. She had never done this before. She commented that she had never swung a sword in her life, then started making several random movements to see what would happen. Suddenly, something made her realize that her movements were getting better and more precise, and she began to feel something new. It was increasingly noticeable that her movements were becoming more graceful, and she couldn't quite understand what was happening. Yuyan returned from his mission saying he didn't expect it to take so long. He had teleported to where Hiram was, wanting to see her progress, and when he looked in her direction, he saw she was doing very well. Her stance was solid, and she could already perform several movements, even though no one had taught her anything so far. No wonder she would be known as the Sword Empress in the near future. Just thinking about that made him excited for what was to come. Hiram was startled by the MC's presence and screamed, asking how long he had been standing there. He even thought he might be disturbing her because of that. Looking at his system screen, he said he just didn't want to interrupt her training, and she replied that she wasn't even training seriously yet. His next mission was his life's mission, to collect various stories and build a library with them so that he could eventually earn a promotion. Hiram asked what he was doing since she couldn't see her system window, which made sense, and he said he wanted to make a library. Surprised, the girl asked if that wasn't the first thing a teller did, and he explained that he had just started this job, but she didn't believe him. He said he had nothing to gain by lying to her, and then a text box appeared in front of him so he could choose the name of his library. Looking through a list of suggestions, he saw that they were all terrible, and he got annoyed with the trolls who made that list. Yuyan asked if he really had to pick one of those names just to attract the spirit's attention. One name caught his eye, and he opened it to see. Looking at the library, he saw a collector being crushed by several small monsters, while receiving countless comments telling him to give up. That story wasn't pleasing any of the divine spirits, and Yuyan understood the problem of making a contract with a bad collector. He decided to leave the library's name for later, but began creating his own right away. He asked Hiram if she was ready to swing her sword a bit, and she looked confused. The two of them teleported to another location where there was a portal. The girl asked what place that was, and he explained it was the entrance to the world of thoughts, a place of myths, legends, and stories. Contemplating the portal, the MC explained the teller's role, to tell stories to the higher spirits, and this was how they did it. Turning to Hiram, He said he had a question to ask. Did she know what the implications were of the stories they were about to show? She asked if it was the story of a main character, and he said it was something like that, but each story could belong to a different genre. Still, among so many stories, there was one genre that truly stood out above the rest, the heroic tales. Standing before the portal, Yuyan said that from now on, she would be the protagonist of heroic tales. She still doubted that, but he said he would help her. The scene shifted, and they were now on a kobold mountain. The MC asked if she knew anything about them, and she said she knew a little. Opening the system window, the protagonist then opened his library. Immediately, some higher spirits began entering it. Already interested in seeing what kinds of stories would be told there, he began speaking to them, introducing himself. Soon he realized they were the same ones who had been leaving negative comments in the other library. They started making negative remarks before the story had even begun, which made the MC realize they were there just to watch him fail. Taking a step back, the MC explained that he would go to the observation room to tell her story, so she'd have to fight alone. This scared the girl. Trying to calm her down, he said she'd do fine. She just had to swing the sword the same way she had before. The next instant, 2 monstrous feet appeared. Hiram was terrified and started screaming, but the MC told her she could do this. She just needed to believe in herself. Nervously, she said that even if he said that, she was still scared. Then the monster prepared to strike as she whimpered in fear. The kobold wasted no time and delivered its first blow, while Hiram managed to dodge clumsily by throwing herself to the ground. The kobold launched more attacks, and the girl started screaming for help because she was so frightened. She stumbled and fell backward, which ended up saving her from a horizontal strike that would have likely cut her in half. Negative comments from the spirits began to appear, saying they expected her to head straight to her coffin, leaving her completely frozen. Voices began to echo in her mind, and we saw a flashback where people mocked her skills and her raw strength. Laughter and scornful remarks came her way, saying she didn't even have the ability to make a contract with a teller. She began to cry in those memories, holding her shield as if it were some sort of protection against those bullies. At that moment, she was sitting in her room, staring at the shield on her bed, too depressed to even want to leave the house. Hiram started to wonder if she had what it took to keep going on this journey, or if she would run away. Back to the present, she was still frozen on the ground, paralyzed by her memories. The sword slashed her arm, just a graze, drawing a bit of blood, but her motivation had changed. She didn't want to run anymore. If she ran again, she'd be a useless human being. Even in that state of poverty, she had to do something, because he had found her. That teller who appeared, saying he wanted to make a contract with her. If she ran away, she wouldn't be able to face Mr. Yuyan. Gripping her sword tightly, she realized that no matter what happened to her, she would never again be as cowardly as she had just been. Watching that scene nervously, the MC shouted her name. He yelled at her to dodge the kobold's strike, as she seemed to be standing still, looking down, just waiting to be sliced to pieces. But the next moment, looking up, we see her eyes shine, and we all know when the eye glows, things are about to get serious. Raising her sword above her head, she managed to parry the kobold's attack with incredible strength. The sword didn't even tilt from horizontal. Looking up, blood in her eyes, hatred fueling her strength, she struck with an incredible blow, defeating it instantly. The divine spirits were completely stunned by everything that had just happened. Not even the MC could believe what he had witnessed. On her knees after finishing the battle, Hiram was only thinking that she would never run away again. She would never be afraid again. Yuyan was satisfied. This was the real Kang Hiram. That was the proper way to wield the sword. A yellow light emerged from the kobold's body. It slowly made its way to the girl's chest plate, and a system message informed her that she had earned 7 points. Shocked, she finally realized what she had just done. While timidly celebrating, the protagonist appeared on her system window and congratulated her on her achievement. The problem was that her fight wasn't over. New enemies were appearing to avenge their fallen comrade. As the battle continued, he explained to her that this world was full of things that could bring her joy, so she shouldn't stop here. It would be much better if she became more ambitious and desired more. Meanwhile, various donations began pouring in for her. Could she really be like that? Hiram responded yes. She was now much more confident in her ability, and even I'm excited to see what happens to her now. The kobolds charged in as a group, but the girl wasn't intimidated. She drew her sword again, ready to take them down. Impressed, the MC checked the viewer data on his library featuring Hiram's stories. It already had more than 15 views in under an hour. Actually, I was mistaken. The one viewing this was another teller, who was impressed by Yuyan's results. His name was Toden. He was impressed and at the same time in disbelief. That shouldn't be possible, even if Yuyan had gotten help from a department. Thinking Yuyan must be using some kind of dirty trick, Toden decided to go analyze this case and see what was really happening. Opening the collector's viewer window, he was simply speechless. Stammering, he began to ask himself who that woman was. She wasn't wearing any protective gear, and her sword was extremely ordinary. After seeing all types of collectors, This was the first time he had ever seen one so unusual. She was getting stronger by the minute. The kobolds, realizing they couldn't handle Hiram, began crying and fleeing, and the MC realized she had gotten much stronger very quickly. Convinced, he began asking the divine spirits what they thought of Hiram, but told them that this still wasn't everything she could do. She could still do far more than just this. The donations didn't stop. She was receiving thousands of points. Hiram called out to him, and he asked what she wanted. She asked what that was. She was standing in front of something red, like a fence, and he informed her that it was no longer the cultivation area. That was something collectors had agreed to create so they could gather points more consistently. She said she understood, but already tightened her grip on the sword. The senior teller watching the scene was impressed to see she had already reached the border on her very first cultivation attempt. Yuyan asked if she was disappointed with something. She replied yes. Now that everything was over, she felt a little frustrated. The protagonist made it clear that it wasn't over. Now that they'd made it this far, they could go all the way. Under his guidance, she would cross the border and clear that entire mind domain because they could be permanently erased once cleansed. Clearing a domain like that makes another one appear elsewhere. Few have the courage to finish these mind domains due to a lack of skills. That was precisely why they had created the border and avoided cleaning up those domains of the mind. Hiram asked if it was really okay, and he said she could blame him if anything went wrong. Besides, she didn't exactly look like someone who wanted to stop there. Excited, she asked if it was that obvious, and he confirmed it. The divine spirits agreed as well, because they were loving what they were seeing, and she decided that she would clear the entire domain, just as he instructed. While the MC was causing a commotion to rally support for Hiram, the lizard-faced teller was in disbelief over what she was about to do. Hiram readied her strike, but he didn't believe she had the power to destroy the edge. A protagonist should never give up on their goals. Hiram made just one leap. As she charged forward with everything she had, more donations came in for her, because that's what being a true heroine meant. The lizard teller was exasperated. Things were unfolding in a completely different way than usual. She had already reached 20 viewers. In the past, the story had been full of adventures, but the collectors had chosen the easier path, which made the divine spirits lose interest. Because of that, they decided to trigger an apocalypse just to try to get an interesting story. Yuyan knew how that world would end, which is why he was determined to create a future different from the one in his past life. That change wouldn't come from an outsider's intervention, but from humanity itself. These were the Chronicles of the Sword Empress, and they had reached 25 viewers in that story. Appearing before her again, the MC congratulated her for reaching the deepest point of those minds. She was happy to see him, and everyone already knows, if she blushed, it's because she's in love. But all he noticed was that she wasn't afraid anymore. Saying they were almost there, he recommended she take a break, and she agreed, sitting down and admitting she was already getting tired. Yuyan realized that despite her skills, her body still couldn't keep up. She needed to become more resilient. He asked what she thought about fighting with a sword, and she immediately replied that it was the best thing ever, and she should have started with it. No shit. Looking at her book, Yuyan noticed it was glowing more than usual. Whatever she had achieved today must have changed something inside it. He didn't intend to check it now, so he said the kobolds from earlier would be waiting for her in a group at the end of this mental domain. They most likely had a leader, since their movements were so well coordinated. Her face didn't look nervous, and the MC asked what she planned to do. If she wanted, they could stop right there. She gave a light laugh and asked if he was joking, but he wasn't. Standing up, she said she would finish it all because that was her ninja way. There was no way he'd play dumb after everything that had happened. He said he wouldn't since he takes responsibility for his words, and asked if they could go now, to which she replied yes. Yuyan was smiling slightly because he could see that now she was much more confident, and he wouldn't need to hold her back or anything like that. The warning was clear, this would be dangerous, so she needed to have a clear goal in mind. He asked if she knew how to clear domains, and she said yes. This one would be simple. The clearing condition was a raid, and the best way was to defeat everyone, but she'd need to focus on the leader first. There were several ways to clear a mind domain, but in this one she just had to defeat a specific monster, and that made her really excited. The girl was already heading toward the boss and even singing, but the MC asked her to wait. She needed to change weapons first. She asked why, but when she looked at her sword, it was completely damaged. Any impact would shatter it completely. The girl started crying and sobbing, desperate, and the MC said it had held up pretty well for a starter sword. Trying to calm her down, he opened the store window and said she had earned a lot of points along the way, and showed her the best options to choose from. She complained about the price of the swords. It was everything she'd earned so far, but there was no choice. She spent it all on one of them. The sword appeared by her side. It looked like a rapier or maybe a katana. The curved blade left me unsure. Yuyan praised the sword, but she was still crying over the loss of her points, and he said she could earn more now, so it was time to go. The kobolds were waiting for their arrival, the leader observing and waiting with his underlings. Hiram arrived already saying it was their fault she had to change swords since her first one had broken. Sweating in fear, the kobolds noticed Hiram approaching. She was a real threat they had never faced before. Charging at the monsters, the girl shouted that she had to spend all her savings on a new sword because of them. With an extremely powerful strike to the ground, an explosion is created, throwing several monsters aside. Hiram shouts that everyone there is already doomed and starts dismembering many of them while screaming about having wasted her points. The hatred was visible in her eyes, and she turned to attack the boss in a leap. It's amazing what losing money does to people's minds. Crying in despair, the kobold boss begins to scream, but it was already too late. With a single blow, Hiram removes its head from the rest of its body, finishing that domain once and for all. The scene shifts to a cafe where the girl is eating a cake so delicious she couldn't even believe it actually existed. The MC asks if it was really that good while sipping his coffee, and she confirms that yes, she had never eaten anything so good in her life. Yuyan thinks that was an exaggerated reaction, but it's understandable, considering she spent her last few years living off cheap ramen. He says she can eat that every day if she wants, as long as she keeps earning as many points as today. She just has to be careful not to get fat. Changing the subject, she asks what he meant when he said he knew what that Goryeo-era talent of hers truly meant. Yuyan asks if she knows someone named Chuk Jungyang. She makes a face like she doesn't, but the chapter ends there. In the next chapter, we learn that Jungyang was an ordinary soldier, nothing more than a low-ranking public servant. However, one day he climbed the castle walls, which were under control of the Jurchen tribe, and simply wiped the place clean. He not only took out the enemies surrounding him on his own, but mercilessly defeated tens of thousands of them right there. A rumor spread that he had surpassed human limits, which earned him the nickname Sword Master of the Goryeo era. Hiram is impressed by the story, but asks why she's never heard of him before. The MC replies that his friend's name was weird. She grows even more curious and asks what his name was, but the MC refuses to answer. Is it Voldemort or something? She insists he tell her. Yuyan gets flustered and asks her to stop because he's starting to feel uncomfortable and will report her for harassment. If she wants to know about him, she should look it up herself. She opens her phone to search, incredulous that the name could be that bad. But when she sees the name, she actually blushes hard, deeply embarrassed. I saw in the comments that it was the Korean version of King Size D. Furious, she throws the phone at the protagonist's head, calling him a pervert and saying she would be the one filing a harassment complaint. The MC says that even if he was erased from history because of his name, it didn't diminish his worth as a warrior or his strength. Excited, Hiram asks if that meant her ability was considered special. This somewhat childish attitude makes the MC wonder when she'll finally become the true Sword Empress, like she used to be in her past life. Grabbing her by the arm, he says they don't have time for small talk. It was time to put their plans into action. She follows the MC, asking what he meant, and he says they need to work on her image, but she complains that she hadn't finished her cake. Hiram asks the MC if he really thought that was okay, and he says it was perfect in his opinion and asks her to go over his instructions. Don't laugh stupidly, and be careful how you behave in front of the divine spirits. He nods and says it's time to go. The spirits begin to enter the room, and he can already see that there were more people than in the first story. Some spirits were astonished. Their reactions varied in every possible way, and that makes the MC curious. He finally understands why they were like that. They had never seen Kang Hiram properly dressed before, and she looked stunning. The MC thinks, if you ran a poll asking what's the most important trait and character, most would say strength. However, if you ask what the second most important trait is, the answers would vary more, but in his opinion, it was appearance. He knew she could gain a lot more attention by being beautiful, and he was right. Before heading to the next domain, she had something to learn. He hands her something and says it's the story he bought earlier, and asks if it was her first time seeing it, and she says yes. Despite her excellent talents, she still needed to learn how to prepare for each mission, and that would help her. The girl thanked him for it. She began absorbing the stories, and Yuyan asked her how she was feeling. The girl said she felt rejuvenated, to which he replied that was great. Most collectors felt sick after absorbing too many of them. Hiram was about to ask what kind of points he had used to get those stories, when the MC interrupted her and said it was time to go put on their show. Entering the new domain, she asked what kind of place that was. It looked like a maze, but once again she was interrupted by Yuyan. Understanding the situation, she began acting seriously, describing the area as desolate and empty, and the MC explained it was the Labyrinth of Crete. There had been several attempts to clear that place for good, but without success, and that was her mission this time. Hiram asked why no one had managed to do it before, and he replied that they'd never been able to figure out the completion conditions for that place. Walking through the corridors, she began to see several bodies of people who had passed through before but got lost inside the maze. The girl grew exasperated, but the MC asked her to stay quiet. He explained those bodies belonged to people who had entered recently. More than 100 people were already watching her story. Even tellers were observing it. He was gaining a lot of engagement. The MC understood that the tellers were trying to steal ideas from the newbie, but he didn't care. His goal was to make loyal fans for the two of them. Yudian grabbed a spool of string and handed it to Hiram. She asked why she needed to use that thread there. Mazes are tricky, and that one in particular was worse. In the myth, Theseus used a string to avoid getting lost, so she should do the same. As his final words, he wished her luck before teleporting to the story's viewing area. The system appeared to her, and he explained that she just needed to move forward without looking back, as if it were no more than a basic task. She accepted the challenge and began unraveling the string, while several donations were already coming in, all from someone named XXX. Hiram walked down the corridors among the many bodies, unraveling the string and leaving a trail so she wouldn't get completely lost. Yuyan noticed that even her mental resilience was higher than average. She wasn't panicking even in the face of that complicated situation. Turning a corner, she began observing the area more carefully, but without losing her composure. She finally managed to find what looked like the center of the labyrinth. Could the boss of this place really be the Minotaur from the Greek myth? A light started glowing from that portal, and Yuyan asked her to wait a moment. Unfortunately, it was already too late. A Minotaur at least 5 meters tall was already standing before the girl, snorting and ready to attack. The monster let out a deafening roar. Its hand was already coming down straight at Hiram, ready to crush her, but still, she didn't seem nervous. Watching everything through the system screen, he saw the monster land a massive blow on the ground. The only question was whether Hiram had also been hit. There was too much dust in the area to know if she was hurt, but while the Minotaur stared at the girl, he realized something too late. Her sword had already slashed his chest, and she was now behind him in an attacking stance. Without mercy, the girl began slicing the monster, saying that tonight's dinner would be cow head soup. What a humiliation for the Minotaur. The divine spirits asked what the hell cow head soup was, while the MC got irritated at her for using such cliched catchphrases. Yudian shouted to her that the Minotaur was way stronger than a kobold. Its skin was much thicker and tougher, so taking it down with a single strike would be far more difficult. She should use a hit-and-run strategy. Desperate, the MC kept shouting, but apparently she wasn't listening to his instructions. She didn't seem to have any intention of retreating. She dodged the monster's attacks with mastery, while it continued to bleed heavily. The monster fell to its knees, and Hiram landed on the ground right in front of it. Yuyan stared at the screen, terrified. The girl's sword began glowing with a beautiful shade of green. Kang Hiram had learned to use the Aura Sword, Kai Sword, also known as the Aura Sword, a skill only those at the top can use, allowing them to imbue their weapons with ki to wield them at maximum power. Most collectors don't have the ability to learn this technique on their own. They can only acquire it through stories. That monstrous girl had already fully developed it by herself. The protagonist had truly found a precious gem in her. Hiram prepares her strike, and the two monsters scream at each other while she charges in to slice the Minotaur in half, I think. The sword strikes vertically through the center of the monster's head, the one with horns, not the one in a dress. A massive explosion follows her attack. Her talent was simply unbelievable. Sliced cleanly in two, the monster lay several meters away from the girl, inside a crater formed by her Aura Sword technique. She gazes at her victory, still holding the sword in one hand. As she wipes away her sweat, we see that several donations had come in for her, mostly from that XXX guy. He must be a big fan of hers. Yuyan was shocked. He didn't have to do anything besides watch the massacre. Their subscribers had doubled and were growing fast. Hiram gets the MC's attention, saying something felt off. He asks what happened. She says she defeated the monster, but the domain hadn't been cleared. Even the divine spirits were wondering why it wasn't over yet. Teleporting beside her, the MC explains that the domain really hadn't ended. She's startled by this answer. Speaking to both the spirits and her, he explains why this labyrinth was never completed even after the boss had been defeated. This labyrinth doesn't end just because you defeated the Minotaur. He remembers that even in his past life, many people had beaten it. Still, none of them had ever succeeded in finishing the labyrinth, and that's why no one could figure out its rules. One day, a digger managed to clear the labyrinth, and because of him, the MC knew how to complete it. The condition was to get out of it. Hiram says she could use the thread to go back, but that was the entrance, not the exit. The MC explains this, and she asks where the exit is. Looking upward, the MC says it's up there. Hiram asks if he's talking about the ceiling of the labyrinth, and he replies with another question. Does she know the legend of Daedalus? She says yes. He was a brilliant inventor who created the labyrinthine structure, but someone managed to escape from it, which wasn't supposed to happen. The girl asks if he's talking about Theseus, and the MC says yes, because Daedalus taught him how to use the spool of thread. King Minos, in revenge, imprisoned Daedalus and his son inside that place, and even so, the inventor found a way to escape with Icarus. Showing Hiram a feather, the MC gives her a hint about how she could escape, and she gets really excited after figuring it out. There were many feathers scattered in that place, and she runs off to gather them. She returns with several in her hands, which gets the MC excited too. Tossing them in front of him, she says she thinks that amount should be enough. Immediately, the feathers begin to glow as they fall to the ground. In the next moment, a pair of wings appears on her back. She had received Icarus's wings, which allowed her to fly once a day, an extremely rare item. She was still stunned by all of it, but the MC brings her back to reality, reminding her to use the wings to get out of there. Before leaving the labyrinth, Hiram says she was really lucky. Countless donations come in for her, along with congratulations for doing everything alone. Back at her home, she asks him what he thinks of her now, because her self-esteem was sky high. The MC compliments her, but she wants more. The girl celebrates the victory and keeps asking if she looked beautiful now, but the MC tells her to stop because he didn't seem interested in that. Hiram doesn't give up and says he can't pretend he wasn't affected by her beauty. Not even the divine spirits could resist. That makes him nervous. The MC yells that if she doesn't stop, he's going to hit her, and the girl starts crying, saying he's mean. Dropping the silly conversation, he asks if she's gone to the association yet. She says not yet. Why was he asking? He says it's time to upgrade her class. She needs to move on to higher classes if she wants to earn more money. She quickly gets excited. Flying out the window, she shouts that she'll take care of it immediately, but the MC tells her not to waste her daily flight on something so trivial. He goes along so they won't take advantage of her at the association. Upon arriving, no one seems to recognize her as a collector. Everyone who saw her was impressed by her aura. She no longer seemed like an average collector, but rather someone above everyone else. She walked confidently through the place alongside the MC, and people also thought she was very beautiful. Yuyeon warned her not to even think about using her wings in that place, and with a guilty look, she said she'd never thought of doing such a thing. At the counter, an attendant began talking to them, asking how he could help, and the MC noticed he was being overwhelmed by her aura. The MC replied they were there to claim the rewards for clearing a mental domain, while Hiram was just thinking about what she'd have for dinner tonight. Whispers could be heard all around. People were in disbelief that someone could have completed a mental domain, even after all the rumors. They were angry about the domain shutdowns and wished for the fall of the MC and Hiram because of their supposed selfishness, though they had no idea who they were dealing with. Curious, the attendant asked if there was anyone else with them in that domain, and Yuyeon replied no. She had cleared it all on her own. Many there didn't believe it and even shouted that they were lying, but the attendant asked what her class was. Yuyeon replied she was class 9. Nervous, the attendant asked them to wait a moment while he contacted the person in charge, and they went to the waiting room. The whispers continued. No one believed a single person, especially someone of class 9, could finish a mental domain. He looked at her, concerned, but felt reassured when he saw she didn't seem to care much about it. A giant of man, at least 2 meters tall and over 200 pounds of pure muscle, called the MC and Hiram scammers and liars. Bending down to get a better look at the girl, he began belittling her, as if she could never have cleared a domain alone, and tried to intimidate her. Hiram just watched him, expressionless, not even interested in responding to this guy. That made the musclehead even angrier, thinking a mere class 9 was ignoring him, so he tried to provoke her further to see if she'd react. No reaction came from the girl, who continued watching him without giving any attention. The provocation backfired, and the man began shouting at her for ignoring him, and the MC said she didn't want to talk to him. He turned his attention to the MC and asked who the hell he thought he was, just a manager, but Yuyeon said he preferred to be called her colleague. Even more irritated, the man shifted his target to the MC and told him to leave if he didn't want to get beaten up, but the MC remained impassive. With a sarcastic smile, the MC asked what would happen if he didn't leave. Fully snapping, the big guy launched an attack and tried to punch the MC square in the face, but he warned him to be careful with Hiram. The man didn't listen and charged at the protagonist. At that moment, his gigantic arm was grabbed by one much thinner, yet stronger. Turning his attention to Hiram, the man asked what now. She'd better let go of his arm, or there would be consequences. Little did he know the consequences would be for himself. Everyone looked on in shock as Hiram slammed him to the ground so hard it broke everything. He was unconscious, and the girl just stood there, watching, a scene strikingly similar to the Minotaur one if you paid close attention. Yuyeon said he had warned him and crossed his legs, unconcerned with the whole scene. He had told the guy to be careful, and now we saw that Hiram had finally lost her patience. It's interesting to see how she has two sides in the story. I was wrong, folks. He hadn't passed out, but apparently he didn't have the strength to get up. nor did he understand what had just happened. Looking at her, he was in disbelief that he had been so easily defeated by a woman. What a sexist fool. Hiram, you can finish him off. He tried to get up quickly and charged at her, but she didn't lose her posture and just observed. In the next moment, the onlookers were even more terrified when she threw him down again and finished him off with an arm lock. Everyone there was shocked that a Class 7 collector had been so easily defeated by someone of Class 9. The man hadn't given up. He was still conscious, and if he was awake, he could still take a beating. He was furious after being beaten twice. Watching the MC, he finally realized that was the goal of that damned manager all along. Getting up and releasing pressure across the entire room with his aura, he began screaming and cursing at the MC, and finally, Hiram reacted differently. Yuvian also realizes that those were aerial martial arts and becomes alarmed. He wasn't as weak as they thought. The floor of the association starts to give way even more, which leaves the other regular people in despair, begging them to stop. He ignores them and starts yelling even louder at the protagonist, threatening to cancel his subscription to life. Hiram responds in kind, stepping harder on his back and pinning him completely to the ground, leaving him confused, unsure how it happened. Yuian notices that she had mastered another technique on her own, the heady body technique. She was doing better than he expected when he chose her. Suddenly, she starts blushing for some unknown reason, and even the MC is confused by it. We see that people are impressed with her technique and strength, and how she managed to subdue a Class 7 collector without much effort. Someone starts shouting, asking what they were doing there, and two men in suits approach to try and break up the fight. The MC notices the men took a while to intervene, which meant they had acted under someone's orders not to go in immediately. Another man appears, asking if they really looked that ridiculous to the two of them to be causing such a commotion. He seemed to be the one in charge. Yuian asks if he's the one in charge of that place, and the man confirms, then asks who he is, and he says he's Hiram's colleague. She was involved in the incident, but they weren't the ones who started the commotion. At most, it was a clash of opinions. The other person unilaterally began to act, and so the girl had no choice but to apprehend him. She acted in self-defense. The man didn't seem fully convinced, but the MC explains that she didn't have a single scratch and acted solely to protect herself and others around. Union adds that he should be grateful for the immediate elimination of the threat, which makes the big boss agree with him. The people there themselves agree that it was the other guy who started the fight, which makes the man smile and apologize for the misunderstanding. Getting to the point that really matters, the MC asks when the person responsible for the domain clearing rewards will arrive. The person the MC was looking for is the old man who explains they're having trouble processing the payment and asks to speak with them privately. Calling for Hiram, they head to the old man's office while people are still praising her strength for defeating the Class 7. Yuian realizes that her first public appearance was excellent for her image, but what really mattered was just about to begin. The MC's goal was to extract everything he could from the association. Looking through the old man's book, he knows that his potential wasn't as great as Hiram's, but he wasn't someone to be underestimated either. At the time of the fight, he wanted to pressure both of them, but when he saw the situation would turn against him, he decided to change his attitude. Opening the door to his office, he invites them in. The MC is already aware that the old man had a lot of experience and couldn't afford to slip up. The old man introduces himself as Choi Jonmo. He says that, however trivial, he is the one responsible for that place. The MC introduces himself and Hiram. He says he heard the two of them had cleared the 2 mine domains, but the MC corrects him, saying Hiram did it alone, which leaves the old man in disbelief. Yudian says that everyone thought the same. It was unbelievable, but she demonstrated her abilities right there, so that was proof enough. The old man agrees, but he wants to know exactly what the two of them want from the association. Speaking seriously, the MC says that all they want is what is rightfully theirs for clearing the domain. Was the association planning not to reward them for completing the mine domains? The old man's expression changes at that moment. Smiling, he explains that the decision to give out rewards lies solely with him, but the MC knows there's more he wanted from bringing them there. Yudian says he'll be honest. He already had a feeling the association wouldn't want to reward them, but the old man just says he wants to know how. The MC then tells him to stop being evasive and asks if they really have no intention of giving them the proper reward for clearing the domain. That leaves the old man disarmed, as the MC starts pressuring him to be direct and straightforward with his answers. The truth is that the government prefers to leave the domains intact and not have new ones appearing randomly elsewhere, and everyone had agreed to that. Smiling, the old man admitted they were hitting them where it really hurt, because neither the government nor the collectors wanted more work for themselves. To be clear, Choi Jong-mo said they had thrown water on a situation that was implicitly accepted, and asked if they were aware of that. Yuyan explained that domains exist to tell stories to the divine spirits and please them, but humanity was breaking that rule. The old man disagreed. For them, what humanity was doing made sense, since a new domain required money and people to analyze it. It was a risk for everyone, both economically and in terms of lives lost inside the domains, so their stance was a matter of prevention. Yudian said their excuses almost sounded convincing, and the old man shouted that they were doing it to prevent unnecessary death. He asked if the two of them would take responsibility for the lives lost, but the MC said they were collectors. They weren't supposed to take on those responsibilities. Whether people lived or not depended on their skills and their fates. Filled with anger, the old man told him to be careful with his words. The MC repeated that he wouldn't take responsibility, but the old man yelled that lives were at stake. He shouldn't be so irresponsible about it. Yudian remembered his past life and what that decision by the association had led to on Earth. Many more had died because of it. The MC said that having deaths in new domains was truly a tragedy, but maintaining the status quo wouldn't solve the real problem. Collectors were rotten nowadays, acting like cowards for the sake of their own safety, avoiding any real challenges. The old man asked if he thought he was any different. He confirmed that he did. They didn't hide, they didn't stop others, so they were better. And that's why they acted to shut down the domains. Choi Jongmo asked if he believed they should be rewarded for that. Meanwhile, Hiram hadn't spoken a single word up to that point. The old man said it didn't matter what he said. That's how society and the system worked, and that wasn't going to change. Do you understand that? Smiling, the MC asked if he wasn't afraid of the consequences of choosing that path, but the old man replied they were just two people. Brushing that off, he said that in the old man's view it might seem like that. But what if others decided to act as well? What others? Asked Choi. Immediately, the old man's face turned pale. Before him, several windows from the higher spirits appeared. The divine spirits were extremely dissatisfied with all of it. While he was still startled by seeing the comment screens of the spirits, the MC took the opportunity to introduce himself properly. He was Kang Yu-yeon, a storyteller from Celestial Body. Incorporated. The MC was live, and everyone was watching at that very moment. Choi Jongmo had thought he was just dealing with some business manager of a collector, yet he carried himself with such humble behavior. His way of taking care of his collector and his skillful handling of the negotiation was different from common tellers who didn't care about humans. The old man was in despair, trying to figure out when exactly he had planned all of this. But in fact, that wasn't the right assumption he should have been making. The man in front of him was acting as if he had anticipated the entire situation from the very beginning. Given the situation, there were no excuses they could make to turn the game in their favor. Sweat dripped onto the table next to the old man. If the image of the association were to be tarnished and bad rumors started spreading, that could be problematic for the entire organization. Desperate, the old man still thought he needed to find a way to escape this situation, and it had to be a masterful one. He tried to come up with a way out. It couldn't be that this was truly checkmate. Looking at the MC, he realized the boy looked quite calm with everything going on. Finally, the old man came to the realization that he was nothing more than a pawn in his hands. He had been defeated long ago. Trembling, he tried to rise from the couch, but his legs wouldn't respond to his command, and he sat back down again. Yudian was smiling cheerfully, and Hiram looked at him, though she still hadn't said a single word. The MC said he was happy to see that the old man still had good instincts. At that point, he had already won completely. Even after all that, the MC thought the old man could have been even more reckless, giving him more room to gain further advantages, but it hadn't happened. If he had refused to back down and fallen into disgrace because of it, the MC could have gotten much more out of him, but he was smart. The old man, who probably gained 30% more white hairs just from the last few minutes of conversation, asked what the two of them wanted. Yudian says he already made his point clear, and the old man finally agrees to reward them for clearing the domain, which makes the MC very happy. Satisfied with how the negotiations turned out, the MC asks what his viewers thought about all this, and they appreciate the negotiation. Some still think they should destroy the old man and the association, but it was a minority who just had a different opinion from the rest. Either way, he had no intention of making any of his fans unhappy with his stories, since he wanted the best outcome for himself. Even so, he receives countless donations. Even if it wasn't a heroic tale, it still brought good rewards. Standing up alongside Hiram, he says he hopes the old man deposits the money into their account by the end of the day, and the old man assures him he will. There was still one more thing, and when he says that, Choi Jong-il gets startled, asking what it was. Seeing the old man's tension, he reassures him by saying he just wants him to find someone for him. The old man asks who. He wants to know if there's someone named Choi Do-yoon among the collectors, but he says he's never heard that name before. Was he really a collector? EMC says maybe yes, maybe no. He doesn't know the details yet, but he should be about 18 or 19 years old currently, and he gives a detailed description. Either way, he'd appreciate it if the old man could investigate the boy, since he'd like to have some information about him. The old man asks if he knows anything else about the boy, and the MC says he's extremely arrogant, which leaves Choi confused. The day was still bright, and we see that Hiram was finally breathing again. She thought she was going to die from how nervous she felt. The MC praises her for keeping her posture the entire time, and she says she was scared of messing something up, but it was exhausting. Yoon says she needs to get used to this because they'll be doing it often, and she asks if she can't just go back to doing what she usually does. She just wanted to stay away from these meetings and eat cake freely, but the MC says she never can. Explaining, he says that lots of people were talking about her today. She was very charming in there, so she was gaining a lot of fame. Everyone was admiring her, most likely because she was so beautiful and impressive, just like she showed at the association. That makes her blush. He continues by saying that in the future, she'll be able to enjoy all the fame and money that'll come from what happened today. That makes her happy. Excited about all of it, she wants to go out to reward him with something, but he holds her by the shoulder and says there are still things to do. She asks what it is, but before he can respond, something catches his attention. Hiram asks what's wrong, and he says something urgent came up and he'll need to step out for a moment. She's confused, but without explaining much, he opens the system window and uses his Genesis system teleport, saying he'll be right back. She's left alone while the MC is teleported to a very high point in the city. Someone appears behind him and Yoon asks who he is, but the man doesn't respond. Looking back, the MC says he asked who he was, but all the man says is that he's a very rude brat. The man doesn't seem to think much of the MC but says someone wanted to meet him and asks if he's the new recruit. He had come there personally to give him the honor of joining their pentagram division. Without beating around the bush, the MC asks again who the man is, and he introduces himself as Jinpung, his senior. Yoon asks what he wants with him, and that makes Jinpung angry, saying he's way too arrogant for a mere rookie. The MC says he has a name, and it's Kang Yoon, which shocks the man. What do you mean he already had a name? It took him 3 weeks to get his, and this kid already has his just after joining the company. Pretending to be superior, he says the MC's name doesn't matter. He was there to invite him to the division, but Yoon immediately refuses. Furious, Jinpung asks what he just said, and the boy repeats himself. He didn't want to join the association. Hadn't he understood that yet? He tries to use his authority over the MC, but the MC doesn't back down and says it's no use trying to pull rank on him. That leaves Jinpung confused. Yoon asks if he thought the MC was already part of some division and tells him he doesn't belong to any, at least not yet. The man was still furious at his insolence, but the MC didn't let him finish talking and put him in his place because he was a nobody. To be a senior, he would need to have a good track record, and that wasn't the case with Jinpung. He wondered how the MC knew that, but the MC didn't say. Yoon added that he was there just to try and intimidate him in the end, but apparently that didn't work, quite the opposite. Wrapping it up, the MC told him to return to his division and make it clear that he would never join the same division as him. Tell that to his teller too. If someone wanted him in that division, they should at least send someone with discernment, or come ask him personally. The man trembled with nervousness at the MC's boldness and stuttered, but the boy simply told him to leave. He teleported away, but not before making a veiled threat against the protagonist. Back where Hiram was, he just remarked that everyone there was a bunch of weirdos. She saw he returned quickly and asked what the issue was that he had to resolve, but he didn't say what happened and changed the subject. Now it was time to finally get her a real manager, and that's how the chapter ends, with this perfect shot of Hiram. The chapter begins with the MC and Hiram standing in front of a building called Basic Management, but it still wasn't the place Yoon was looking for. From what he remembered, it was supposed to be somewhere nearby, so he looked to the side. He finally found the place he wanted. Hiram looked startled. That place didn't seem very well taken care of. Was he really sure that was the right place? The MC said yes. Knocking on the door, he asked if anyone was there and heard someone shouting to wait a second. After a moment, the door opened and a leg in tights appeared. It was a woman who looked at them and asked what they were doing there. The girl caught the MC's attention, but he didn't respond. It was already too late. No matter what he did, he wouldn't be able to fix the broken ties between them. Memories from his past started to return uncontrollably, and running toward a desolate place. His terrified gaze as a voice spoke to him. The voice said he should stay away from someone like her, someone who had lost her humanity, and that woman was being held by the neck. Dried blood flowed from her mouth as the voice concluded by saying it was sure it could make him an excellent offer. Another distant voice appeared, until the woman shouted hello, and the MC finally snapped back to reality. He apologized but thought that her hair was different, yet she was still the same person he had known in his past life. The woman introduced herself as Bak Suryan, manager of Bakwa Management. Cheerfully, she asked if the two of them were there to join her company. Yoon said yes, but only Hiram would be joining her company. Suryan looked at Hiram and thought she was really cool and beautiful, excited to know that a collector like her wanted to be part of her business. The MC told her there was no need to pretend there, and she immediately dropped the act, saying it was a relief. It was like a brick had hit Suryan's head when she realized the collector she thought was so cool wasn't that cool at all, just a silly girl. Looking at the MC, she said she could see Hiram was a collector. But what about him? The MC asked if she wanted to guess. She started thinking and said if he were a collector, he wouldn't have come with her to find a manager, but he didn't seem to belong to a clan either. Guessing, she asked if he was a teller, and that impressed Yu-Yun. Not even the old man had guessed it on the first try. Seeing the MC's expression, she tried to explain, saying that tellers have a different aura from humans, despite the similar appearance. Back Suryan. At that moment, she was just a small CEO of a collector management company. But when the end begins, that will change. During the apocalyptic events of his past life, she used her flawless decision-making to lead many people. She said she was sorry if she was wrong, but he said she was right, and she got excited about having a collector and a teller in her company. The two already began forming bonds, and Suryan asked how the two of them met. While Hiram told the story of their first meeting, the MC watched the girl with what seemed to be a loving gaze. Interrupting the conversation, he asks if they can see the contract, and she gets even more excited about it, and the MC says he wants to discuss the conditions. Hiram congratulates Suryan, but the MC says the contract is between the two of them. After a few moments, it was already signed. Hiram asks the other girl what a manager usually does, and the MC notices that they're already forming a bond of friendship. She explains that the first thing is to provide support for the collectors, so they can focus on their work, organizing their schedules and tasks. The collector says that's quite a lot to do and asks if she has many employees to handle it all, but she says she does everything alone. Frustrated, she says she should also be driving for the collector, but she didn't have enough money to buy a car after setting up the office, though she does have a license. Suryan says she also has a license to operate a backhoe and knows how to weld. Hiram asks why. She explains that it was her plan B in case she gave up on this job, but adds that she'll do her best, and the MC agrees. Standing up, he says Hiram doesn't need her just yet, because she still has to make a name for herself, but she asks if she can help with anything. He was confident that they'd need her soon enough, so he let her enjoy this break for now, since there wouldn't be time later. As they start to leave, the MC says they'll be in touch when the time is right, and she agrees, wishing them good luck. Before finally leaving, the MC hesitates for a moment, but asks her if she has a dream, which leaves her a little confused. In his past life, he asked her what she would do when that tribulation ended, but she says she didn't even have a good life before. But if she were to consider something like that, she answers that all she'd really want is to make a lot of money. The MC says he understands and realizes that this truly was the Suryan he had known during the apocalypse. That answer made the MC understand why she and Hiram got along so quickly. The two of them thought almost the same way. Hiram notices it too and comments that it's like they'd known each other far longer than just today, and she laughs at how strange it is. In his past life, Yu-Yen remembers that the two of them had indeed met before, so it wasn't that strange after all. Meanwhile, in another office filled with papers scattered on the floor, we see someone shouting and calling someone a bastard. It was that supposed senior who was still furious with the MC and says he'll make sure to teach that arrogant brat a lesson. Looking at his system screen, he remembers that Yu-Yen was protected by the Genesis system, but there had to be a way to deal with him. After thinking for a bit, he has an idea and realizes there is indeed a way to get him. A week passes and we see some people at a location having a conversation. It looks like the Collector Association. Hiram and the MC were arriving, and people notice it's them and start whispering that she had already cleared 4 domains. They were getting ready for another domain, and several people seemed to be going together. She asks if it was that dangerous, and it was. This domain in particular was different from the usual. One could only enter once every 3 months, and if you fail, you can't go in again. She asks if there was a reason he chose such a dangerous domain, and the MC asks if she didn't join this business to succeed. She confirms that she did, and he says the two of them share the same goal, even if they walk different paths. He also aimed for a high position. Regardless of what their reasons are, they are valid for them, and that's what matters, because they shouldn't have mediocre reasons holding them back. If she really wants something, she should pursue it even if her bones break and her flesh bleeds. Does she have the confidence to do that? Before Hiram can answer, someone yells that the domain is opening, and the portal begins to shine brightly. The MC says he doesn't want her answer now, but someday she'll need to have it, both for him and for herself. On the other side of the portal, we see the collectors on top of a wall, watching an army on horseback charging forward. The chapter begins with the realization that this domain was a large-scale war, and Hiram wonders if they'll have to fight too. She actually finds it fun, while the MC observes her through the system window. Someone from one of the armies shouts to stop them with everything they have, while the soldiers yell to charge. This was the Ottoman War. The only question is which one, since that empire fought at least 5 wars against different countries. The defending side shouts that they can't afford to lose, or the enemies will breach their walls. Several soldiers were engaged in battle, and the massacre was inevitable. The MC's mind flashes back once again to his past, making him remember people running in desperation, terrified of being eliminated. In his past, all he could do was watch what was happening, unable to take any action. He closed his eyes, trying to return to the present and not let himself get lost in those thoughts. Focused once again, he thought he wouldn't let that happen again. This was a promise to himself. We go back 1 week in time to the headquarters of Celestial Body Incorporated. The teller who had hired him was explaining how the ceremony would work for all the new tellers. Most of them were still little white orbs, but they were confused because the ceremony would take place in unison with the divine spirits. The MC, in human form, listened carefully to the instructions from the deer-headed teller, who said they wouldn't actually meet the spirits. They were already in a large hall filled with food, while many of the smaller tellers enjoyed the feast. Yuvian stood in a corner, motionless and observing, with only a glass of wine in his hand. He was still curious how he had managed to enter that company. It was one of the 3 largest teller organizations in the universe. It was surprising that he was there that day. Looking out the window, one could see a gigantic island floating in space, like a metropolis. Someone asked the MC what he was doing there, so Yudian looked down. A horned orc teller asked why he wasn't enjoying the party like the other newcomers, but the MC was more interested in his horns. Yudian replied that he wasn't interested, which irritated the other teller, who told him not to act like he was better than everyone else. The MC tried to say he didn't think he was better than anyone, but the orb interrupted and said he would surpass him soon. Then he left. He found the horned orb interesting, but then another group entered the hall, and several different figures appeared together. They were from another department of Celestial Body Incorporated, and were there to meet the newcomers. They could continue enjoying the party. Hidden from them, the MC realized that they were actually there to assess the new recruits' performance in their first missions and attempt to recruit them. Their goal was clear: take the best among the newcomers and bring them into their departments. That place had turned into a battlefield of recruiters. Thinking how troublesome it would be to get caught in the middle of that mess, the MC planned to leave. Unfortunately, he was spotted by one of his seniors as the newcomer who had transformed the moment he reincarnated. Several recruiters gathered around him, trying to recruit him into their departments, and this made the MC very nervous. He said he appreciated all the attention, but was thinking about how he could escape from there. In his field of vision, a different person appeared, someone who didn't seem interested in him, and that gave him an idea. He moved away from the recruiters and started talking to that black and green figure, saying he should have warned him he'd be there. The man looked confused, but the MC continued his little act, hoping he'd understand and play along. The man quickly seemed to grasp what the MC was trying to do and joined in, which made Yuian very happy. He began leading the man out of the room, saying they could talk elsewhere, and the recruiters assumed he'd already been recruited. They didn't seem to recognize the man, but that didn't matter. Outside, the MC thanked him for helping him escape. The dark teller didn't show any reaction or say anything, which made the MC wonder if he really intended to stay silent. Something strange. Deciding not to wait for an answer, the MC turned his back and said he had to go. He must be busy with other things too. Before Yuvian could disappear, the man said that had been very amusing. The MC immediately stopped walking. The man said he had made sure no one could detect him, so how had the MC managed to see through his disguise? Nervous, the MC asked what he meant by that. Looking back, we saw that the man's aura was completely different and quite terrifying, with a giant green snake behind him. That was very bad. The protagonist realized that man was extremely dangerous. Without showing fear, the MC asked what he wanted, but the man said he was just curious. He didn't intend to harm the MC, not yet. He asks if Yuyan is going to answer his question. How was he able to see the man? The boy says he didn't actually see him. He only saw a book floating among all the tellers. By noticing a dark book flying in the air and focusing on it, the MC became able to see the man who owned the book. Yuyan explains that this was his ability, while a black smoke hovered very close to him, as if it might suffocate him right there. The man grows curious, and the MC explains that he has a good eye and can see things others cannot, and that applied to him as well. He was a bit unsure at first, but when he looked around and realized no one else had noticed the man, he says he couldn't deny it. Yuyan says it's the truth. He was different from the other tellers. The man laughs and says he had definitely noticed that. In any case, the MC apologizes for speaking to him so suddenly, and the man asks if that's really all. Clapping his hands and smiling in a creepy way, he says it was fate that they met and proposes a bet to the MC. He asks what kind of bet, and the man says it's simple. He just has to guess who he is, and if he's right, he'll be rewarded for it. The MC asks what happens if he gets it wrong. The man says he'll have to take responsibility for interrupting his entertainment. Grabbing the book from above the man's head, he accepts the bet, even knowing the man was confident he would guess wrong. The MC tries to open the book, but he doesn't have the strength to do so, which makes him very nervous. That meant the man was so powerful that not even he could read his book. He couldn't act beyond his level, but he remembers what the teller said at the start, that the divine spirits would also be there. Knowing the divine spirits were present, but not in the same room as the tellers, he assumes the man must be one of the 5 great divine forces: the Sky of Eden, Isensoidner of Asgard, Ogdode of Hermopolis, and the Olympian Pantheon. And beyond them, there was still Pandemonium, where the highest-ranked stories resided. Judging by his sinister energy, the strange design of the book, and the cover featuring a 3-headed serpent, there was no doubt. The MC then says he is the serpent that corrupts, the red dragon that burns, the one who was closest to the light and fell into darkness. The man standing before him was the first-generation divine spirit of Pandemonium, Satan. He then lets out a dry laugh. Excited, he says the MC guessed correctly who he was. He didn't expect the boy to figure it out, and begins clapping in applause. Yuyan asks if he's going to be spared now. Satan says that was partially a joke, to be honest, but the MC had surprised him. It would make more sense to punish himself than punish the MC. The boy doesn't believe that. He thinks that Monster would have punished him in some way if he had lost. He was a man of his word. Satan then says that in any case, he lost and must fulfill his promise. He thinks for a moment and gets an idea. He knew the MC would soon create his library, and the MC confirms that he would. Then he makes the following proposal. He will be the sponsor of his library, and asks what the MC thinks of that. Yuyan begins to weigh the possibility. Getting a sponsorship from such a powerful spirit was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Satan then extends his hand to shake the protagonists, who understands that this would never happen again. If he takes that hand, there would be no turning back, but he already seemed to have decided what he would do and extends his hand to shake his. He was still nervous. Would it really be okay to form this partnership? In the next instant, he makes his decision and, apologizing, says he'll have to decline the offer. The divine spirit doesn't seem pleased, but simply asks why he wants to reject his offer. Yudian says that his sponsorship would help the library, but it would also make him lose his freedom, and he was afraid of angering the Eden crowd. Satan then says he understands his concern, but asks if it still wouldn't be a benefit for him. The MC says that it's not enough for him, and that answer sparks Satan's curiosity. He says that the spirits of Pandemonium are incredible, especially him. He was one of the 7 executives, and that makes the MC want to work with them. But there was something else. The moment he made a partnership with him, the MC would only be able to tell stories from Pandemonium, and the authority over his library would belong to Satan. Yudian believed in the infinite possibilities of the stories he could showcase in his library. The path he should follow was a different one. That was the reason behind the protagonist wanting to refuse Satan's offer. He wanted to follow his own path. Yudian said he hoped he could understand, but Satan let out a scornful sigh, cutting off the MC mid-sentence. In the next moment, the divine spirit began laughing loudly, finding it amazing that he had ambitions greater than those of Pandemonium itself. The boy grew nervous, trying to say it wasn't like that at all, but Satan told him not to worry. He was praising him because he was right. The moment he accepted Satan's sponsorship, the MC's library would belong to Pandemonium, which would force him to give up on his own potential. Satan was impressed that he was refusing the easy path, which seemed foolish, but it was a kind of foolishness that caught his attention. He said he would end the conversation there. He wasn't ambitious enough to force anyone into anything. The MC asked if that meant he had given up. Satan replied that he wasn't sure. In fact, it seemed like it had made him even more greedy to force him to stay. The MC grew nervous at that answer. In the next instant, it was as if the boy were just a small toy in Satan's hands while he made his offer once again. Yudian replied that he wanted the donations from the divine spirits, but not through such a deal. Satan said he was arrogant, but he wouldn't punish him for that. As he left, he said it wouldn't be right to let the boy walk away empty-handed after winning the bet. Since he had come out victorious, he would be receiving a gift from him soon. He was really happy to have met the protagonist that day. Before disappearing completely, his last words were that he would be visiting the MC's library in the near future. Yudian was still shocked by everything that had just happened, and he looked at his system window, wondering how much time had passed. He still had to escape from the other tellers, so he left and found a library inside the company, something he said he never expected to find. It seemed like a quiet place. No one was looking for him, so he decided to kill some time reading a book. Someone approached and said it was strange to see a guest show up there. The MC turned to the side to see who was speaking. A very bright light began to shine, leaving the MC even more confused by everything. Looking closely, he noticed a golden book above a man, very bright and beautiful. It was also a very large book, and he wondered how valuable the stories written inside that book must be. The old man asked who he was. Most people didn't usually come in there. Yuyan replied that he was a new worker, and that impressed the old man. He laughed and said he had been rude. His appearance was so complete he hadn't imagined he was a newbie, and then recognized who the MC was. The boy asked what the old man was doing there, and he replied that he was the manager of that place. Yuyan asked if he worked there, but the old man said no one managed that place anymore, but he had volunteered for the task. Impressed, the MC wondered why someone with such an incredible book was retired. He definitely had an impressive past. The old man asked if it was alright for him to be there even in the middle of the initiation ceremony, and the MC said he had been harassed, so he ran away. He started laughing and said that the same had happened to him in his youth, and that must mean the MC didn't belong to any department yet. Yuyan confirmed and said he planned to keep it that way. The old man then asked if choosing such a difficult path wasn't scary. The boy replied that he'd be lying if he said he wasn't afraid, but he still had a goal, which piqued the old man's interest. He said the MC also had an yearning. The MC was confused, and the old man began to explain. Tellers aren't biologically born, but created with some level of abilities. However, they are blank slates when it comes to their desires. Most simply follow what the system and the company tell them to do. That was a fundamentally wrong path because it meant just following the herd. Unfortunately, most tellers lack that yearning. A teller who isn't swayed by others' words, like Yuyan, was extremely rare. The old man then decides to show something fun to the MC and asks him to follow. Yuyan is astonished by what he sees. They were in a corridor that stored all the stories that had truly influenced the mixed world. That was none other than the Hall of Fame of Celestial Body Incorporated. In all those stories lay the lives of all people. It was incredible to see. The protagonist was having the time of his life there. Unfortunately, the corridor didn't seem that long, because the next moment, the old man says they've already reached the end, and the MC is confused. The old man says that 30 years ago, life had been completely cut off. He had brought Yuyan there so he would remember that place, as it was tucked away in a closet. Such brilliant stories being forgotten. If he ever disappeared from this world, he'd be very sad to know that no one else would ever get to know that place, and that's why the MC was there with him. He had been the only teller who wanted to visit that place, even if it was old and worn down. The MC admired everything he could. The other tellers are only concerned with earning points and telling the same stories, those that belong to a different generation. Still, he believed the day would come when stories with that level of brilliance and captivation would be truly necessary for the world. Yuyan simply thinks that if Duyun had lived and completed that challenge, maybe he would be in that Hall of Fame too. He wanted to be someone like that. The MC calls the old man and thanks him for giving him such an incredible experience. The ceremony would end in 10 seconds. Before being teleported back to the world, he still asks the old man what his name is. The old man takes a moment to answer, but says if he comes to visit that place again, he'll tell him his name. Smiling, the boy nods as the teleport takes him back to Earth and says he'll see him again soon. The ceremony had ended. A voice shouts Hiram's name, bringing her back to the present. In that moment of war, she seemed very nervous. Yuyan asks if she can hear him, and she replies yes, so he tells her to stay focused. Hiram asks if that was really a war zone, and he confirms it. The siege that signaled the end of the medieval era and the beginning of the modern age and brought the Roman Empire to an end. That was the siege of Constantinople. The Roman Empire was destroyed by the Ottomans in that war, so now we understand what's happening. Hiram asks, just to confirm, if they're on the defending side of the war, that is, the Roman side. Yuyan says yes. He knew it was that place that awakened Hiram's abilities and turned her into the Empress of the Sword. This event was essential for her. Nervous, she asks if the protagonist has seen all that, and he realizes her voice is trembling. He says yes, and she asks if they're going to be able to win. The MC says not even 500 collectors could win that after all. It was an army of 7,000 against another of 150,000. He was also worried. Those 150,000 were only the attacking force. If you count the support troops, the numbers exceeded 300,000. Curious, Hiram then asks why so many collectors decided to participate, even with such low chances of victory. Yuyan explains that more than 2,000 divine spirits were watching that battle. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to show the spirits the potential of collectors they didn't yet know, and possibly make them fans. It was practically guaranteed that spirits from other libraries were also watching the event. That makes Hiram feel relieved and excited. Everyone was there to promote their libraries, so if they couldn't show their potential, they could lose their viewers. It was understandable to think that the two of them were just there to show off to the spirits, but the real goal was also to clear that domain. In his past life, the MC remembers that she hadn't been able to clear that domain either. He knew it was dangerous and says they'll just try. The MC's intention was to see if the current Hiram could clear that domain, as she was already stronger than the past Sword Empress. If there was even a small chance of clearing that place, then the attempt would be worth it. A couple approaches Hiram, asking if she was planning to act alone in that domain. The guy looks a lot like Archer version Shiru Emiya, and the girl resembles Nicole from ZZZ. They suggest teaming up with Hiram. Turning to the side without answering, the boy asks if she's just going to ignore them. Nicole from Temu says to just leave her alone, claiming she had become too arrogant after clearing a few domains on her own. Hiram's thoughts were clear. She knew they probably just wanted to take advantage of her, so it was better to act alone than to team up with those two. Someone shouts at the group of collectors, saying, "Welcome, mercenaries," and everyone turns toward the voice. An old man in golden armor was standing there, clearly in command of the defenses. The man introduces himself as Constantine, Emperor of Rome. He thanks everyone present for helping with the defense. While the man continues speaking, Hiram's thoughts begin to drift. Even knowing it was all an illusion, the only thing she could think about was how real he seemed. After finishing his speech, Constantine says the preparations are complete, and the siege of Constantinople would finally begin. The system announces that they only have one chance to complete this domain, and they must defend the castle and win the battle. The Ottomans yell that it's finally time to end the war. The two who had tried to form a team with Hiram take the lead, saying this would be too easy, and charge forward. With a magic strike from the boy, the ground in front of them explodes, launching several Ottoman soldiers away as he enjoys the chaos. Confident, he taunts the soldiers to attack him. None of the Ottomans seemed strong enough to deal with the pair, and that only made him more arrogant. Watching the scene, the MC becomes suspicious, feeling like something was off with this domain. The boy keeps casting extremely powerful spells, while the girl takes out multiple soldiers with just a few blows. After a few minutes of battle, sweat starts dripping from the boy's face, and when he looks ahead, something terrifies him. There were still an uncountable number of soldiers left, and the endless waves leave him in shock. The other collectors are already out of energy, and the divine spirits are losing interest in watching the battle. This throws the collectors into despair. Yuyan notices that they're tired because they used everything they had right at the start of the defense. On the other hand, he sees that Hiram is still fighting with ease, defeating countless soldiers. She was still holding up well. Curious, the MC decides to check on the other libraries. When he enters the teller's room, he sees many of them in a panic. One of them even complains about how useless their collector is, especially because he ignored their advice not to burn all his resources at the start. The divine spirits begin to leave negative comments, pushing the tellers into even greater despair. Seeing that the Sword Empress was still doing great in battle, viewers from other libraries start migrating to the MC's library. Several spirits join his library, and the number of viewers reaches an impressive 512. One of the tellers sees the MC working on his story and gets annoyed, thinking he's acting arrogant just because he's been doing well lately. The teller starts yelling at their exhausted collector, telling him to get back to the fight quickly, as they were losing viewers, and the two begin to argue. Yuyan realizes that the tide of war is shifting and that everyone is getting really tired. Even Hiram was starting to slow down a bit. Soon she would be exhausted too, and that would become a big problem. He wonders what choice she will make when she's finally cornered in this fight. A massive explosion occurs behind the girl. Yuyan shouts to her that the castle walls have collapsed. She turns around shocked, wondering how that happened. They had used an Orban cannon, a powerful weapon commonly used by the Ottoman army. They were now advancing with full force. The collectors grow even more desperate, unsure of what to do and beginning to fear for their own lives. Constantine looks to the mercenaries, shouting for their help. Without them, victory would be out of reach. Hiram agrees. They needed to protect the Roman people inside the castle, and she turns to give instructions to the other collectors. Unfortunately, before she could say anything, most of them were already giving up and trying to flee before things got worse. The girl still tries to convince some of them to stay before they abandon the mission, but they had already made up their minds. They were going to run. One of them yells at Hiram, saying that the place hadn't been left unconquered for no reason. The strategy for this domain was to hold out as long as possible and then flee. Hiram refuses that idea and says they can't abandon those soldiers. Furious, the collector yells back at her, saying those people were just illusions. None of it was real. He didn't care about those people. They didn't even exist in the real world. But if she wanted to stay behind and die there, she could stay on her own. This surprises her, and she wonders if those collectors were really so cowardly as to give up that easily. Everyone there had become collectors with the intention of gaining recognition, so why weren't they doing that? Hiram stays behind, watching everyone else leave through the exit portal. The two armies were still clashing behind her, while she stood still, wondering what she should do. And that's how the chapter ends. The chapter begins with a recap of the start of this domain, with the introduction of Constantine and his request to the mercenaries. Not long after, all the collectors were already giving up because of the endless Ottoman army that kept advancing. Everyone flees, afraid of losing their lives, and Constantine tells himself he already knew they would do that and leave them to die. The great emperor looks upon the desolation of that battlefield, aware that he had lived through this infernal loop countless times. Despite that, he knows he can't stop fighting, so he charges toward the front lines with his army. This world was already decided. Even if he wasn't a real being, how could he watch his people be slaughtered and do nothing? If this fate was prophesied, then he would do everything in his power to fight and overcome it, no matter how many times he had to. One of the Ottoman soldiers sees the emperor and shouts for his companions to attack him and take his head to the sultan. Constantine sees that his time had come. 2 soldiers were already closing in, ready to eliminate him once again in another loop. The next moment, something quickly whizzes past his face and causes a massive explosion right in front of him, startling him. He realizes it was Hiram who had caused all that damage. She was in front of him, but with her back turned. Looking at him with a somber expression, she remains silent. The soldiers remember that she was one of the mercenaries from earlier and ask if she was Joan of Arc. Constantine asks why she didn't flee like her companions. This war was already lost. Approaching the emperor, she says she still needed to fight, and she didn't want to see him die in vain. Constantine is shocked to hear that. All the mercenaries who had come this far had fled to save their lives. Hiram asks if he remembers all of them. The old man explains that he was created in that place. After all, his real self must have existed a long time ago, and he was just the remains of that. Hiram says that's not true. He wasn't just that. She thought of them as human beings too. That was why she had decided to help, and the reason she had stayed. Constantine, in disbelief, asks if she truly thought that, and she asks if he didn't want her to think of them that way. Moved, the old man feels his heart burning so strongly it leaves him speechless. This wasn't hatred or sadness. Smiling, the old man says he wants her to see them as humans, yes. What he was feeling was joy. He says he couldn't help but appreciate the fact that she saw them as real people with value and still wanted to help them. The next moment, the Ottoman army launches a new offensive, shouting that they found a breach to strike. Constantine asks her to hold those men off alone for a moment. Once they set up their defenses, the enemy will struggle. Hiram confirms, and the emperor of ancient Rome shouts for his comrades to defend their borders. That gave me chills. Charging forward with a smile on her face, Hiram is praised by Constantine as their savior, and the battle resumes. Something catches Yuyan's attention as he watches her fight. Hiram's book was turning silver. She was becoming trapped by her past self, but he starts rooting for her to overcome it. That story had reached 800 viewers, and most of the divine spirits were speechless as she kept unlocking her potential. An Ottoman stands before the girl, yelling for her to go to hell as his sword came down toward her. The girl dodges the strike that barely grazes her neck, and her counterattack hits the soldier directly, defeating him instantly. A massacre unfolds at the girl's hands, and I, writing this script while listening to Hans Zimmer, was deeply moved. One of the MC's rival tellers asks why he hasn't told his collector to lead yet, since she's getting tired, and they try to belittle her. They keep up their passive-aggressive behavior until the MC tells them to shut up because they're just a bunch of idiots. The tiger-headed man is shocked by the disrespect. He asks what the MC just said, and the MC responds by asking if he's deaf and needs him to repeat it. They had tucked their tails and run away. Were they trying to steal something from his library, or did they just want him dead? Even more irritated, Yuyan calls them trash. Hiram wasn't greedy like them, and he didn't treat his collector like a mere point machine. The MC then asks how they even have the audacity to look down on those who aren't cowards like them. Nervous, the tiger-headed man can't respond to the MC, and he just tells the teller to stay quiet and know his place. Despite that bold posture, it was obvious that Yuyan was nervous, while Hiram continued fighting relentlessly until the final line of defense fell. Desperate, the Roman soldiers scream that their last line of defense has collapsed. They no longer knew what to do. Hiram appears right in front of them, with incredible speed, placing herself as an impenetrable wall. The soldiers looked at her like she was their saint. She was determined and thought she needed to stop that army, even if it was just one of them. A question begins to form in her mind. Why doesn't she give up? Why doesn't she stop? If she was going to die if she lost, shouldn't she run away? She didn't know how to answer that. But even without an answer, she had the feeling that if she gave up and ran away, she would lose something very important to her. An arrow hits her square in the chest, sending blood splattering across her body, already soaked in enemy blood. The Romans scream in desperation, charging against the Ottomans. They were enraged because someone managed to strike Hiram, who had fallen to her knees, trying to recover. The defense force, apparently, had gained a new motivation, and the Ottomans launched a united attack. One of the Romans falls to the ground, eyes wide open, but already lifeless, right in front of Hiram. She begins to panic and starts to think that she actually believed they could win this. Desperate, she reflects on how proud she felt for staying behind when everyone else ran, but everything had gone wrong. Tears stream down her face, and Hiram asks herself what she should do. This attitude frustrates the divine spirits greatly. Conflicted opinions start popping up in the comments. Some say she was brave for holding on this long, while others criticize her for giving up. The number of criticisms is still low compared to others, but it makes the MC extremely nervous. He considers blocking the spirits who are criticizing, but begins to hesitate. If he doesn't do something, his library might suffer. Still unsure, he also wonders what he should do as several comments start flooding the livestream. He looks up curious. Something strange had happened. All the divine spirits suddenly went silent. Looking to the side, he wonders what happened to make them go quiet, and then he sees the broadcast. Yudian is shocked. That smiling gaze from the deepest abyss had just entered the library, and the MC knows exactly who it is: Satan. Satan asks why the library's atmosphere had suddenly gotten so tense. Yudian replies that everyone got nervous when he walked in. The MC's courage shocks the divine spirits, but he goes on and says that Satan is late, but that things were getting interesting. Confident again, the MC says things are about to get even more interesting from now on. Satan donates 1,000 points and says he hopes this will truly entertain him. In the next moment, the MC is teleported into the domain. He is taken directly in front of Hiram, who is on her knees, clutching her sword. Yudian says it's over. Tired, she forces herself to look up and meet the MC's eyes. He tells her she can give up now, otherwise she might die here. Praising her, he says she gave it her all, but there were things completely out of her control. She agrees, even with a faint voice. There were indeed things that were impossible. The MC then asks if she's going to give up, but she immediately yells no. Frustrated, she says she knows she's being stubborn. She knew there were things that were impossible for her right now. Crying, she asks why he was saying something so cruel. She just couldn't give up. Everyone had already told her she was hopeless, that she should give up on being a collector, and she had truly considered it. But the MC had been different. He said she was talented, that she could do things others couldn't, and because of that, she was able to grow. That was exactly why she was there. In that moment, Hiram says she just realized this was what she wanted to do. Getting up, still in tears, the girl says she never wants to give up again because she's tired of always running away. Yudian says she's going to die, and she replies that she knows that very well. Even so, she says she doesn't want to give up. She apologizes for it, saying she's too stupid to give up, too stubborn in such a critical moment. The MC says he understands, but you all have already figured out what he did for her, haven't you? An Ottoman soldier appears, shouting for her to die as he raises his sword at her from behind the MC, calling her a witch. With her body trembling, she thinks she needs to block the attack, but she simply had no strength left to move. Was this the end of her path? She already begins to apologize to the MC. Yudian says that this is good, and that catches the girl's attention. He stands in front of her at that moment. Can he intervene in battles like this? Isn't that against the rules? What do you think? The system screen shows a message asking if he wants to disable the Genesis system, and he confirms yes. This action could not be undone. The Genesis system is disabled, and in the next moment, the Ottoman soldier is already mid-leap to slice the MC in half. Blood splashes everywhere at that moment. With a single motion, the MC draws a sword from who knows where and eliminates the soldier without much effort. This shocks Hiram. Satan starts laughing uncontrollably while watching the broadcast. What could be going on in that madman's head? Yudian says he always wanted to be the MC of his own story, the regret of not doing so in his youth, and the faith his mother instilled in him. All of these things were tangled up inside him, but Duyun condemned him to a life full of inferiority complexes. His past self believed Duyun's words and felt worthless, which made him give up on his dreams and start working for Choi Duyun. But in Hiram's case, things were different. She stood firm even in her final moments. She held her ground, confident and beautiful. The MC was very happy with his choice. The Ottomans were closing in again, and he looked back, knowing that, out of respect for the girl, he couldn't just stand and watch. Yudian raises his sword, ready to protect his collector. She yells, asking if he had gone crazy. He could die there, but he says that this is what he had to do. Charging toward the soldiers, he tells her that he's just as determined as she is, and then begins cutting down several of them with ease. The system window reports that they had already surpassed 1,200 viewers, and he says that's great for the two of them. She laughs at his joke about how that stage was a great debut for an actor who didn't even have a name yet. Hiram is thankful for the MC's help and says she'll leave the rest of the fight to him. Blocking a spear strike, he says that's fine, and in the next moment, asks to open the domain store. Most tellers don't interfere in the situations they're watching. That's the general mindset shared by both them and humans. But should they really just be spectators of these stories? There were no rules against taking action, contrary to what many might think. Yudian had decided to step into this fight for exactly that reason. He was going to create a story no one had ever made before and enter a stage. The Ottomans shout to kill the witch. Doing so would win them the battle, but in the next moment, something slashes past their neck. The protagonist's blade was too fast, and he replies that he won't let that happen. The soldiers are stunned by this new fighter, and the MC shouts that no one will get past him as Hiram watches everything. Grateful, she begins casting a spell, saying that he gave her the courage she needed, the courage to move forward. Terrified, the Ottomans couldn't handle the MC's strength. No one could pass him without losing their life. The MC, confident and smiling, says that's because he's strong, even if he's just one man. Several magical inscriptions are surrounding Hiram as she still thinks about how brave he was to give up his blessing just to help her. That's why she would return to the fight too. A sword is driven into the ground. It's Yu Yan's sword. He was also nearing his limit. How much longer would she need? Seeing that he had stopped to rest, the enemies charged forward, shouting that this was their chance to win the battle. But before they could get any closer to the MC, one of them shouts, pointing upward and asking what that was. Yu Yan looks back, and an incredibly bright light is emanating from Hiram, leaving even him impressed. The system announces that she had successfully unlocked complete unison between her body and sword. She had a serious expression, and a tremendously powerful aura was surrounding her as she reached the path of the celestial sword. Terrified by what they were witnessing, the Ottomans decided to retreat, but it was already too late. Hiram brings down her sword with all the strength she had left. A powerful slash cuts past Yu Yan without hitting him, but leaves a massive trail of destruction in front of them both. Looking to the side, all he can think is that he never expected her to become so strong so quickly, and he feels happy to see it. Constantine appears behind them, thanking them for their help. It would give them more time to fight back against the Ottomans. Yu Yan warns that this is only temporary. They will return, and they will fall. Constantine says they no longer have the strength to continue this battle. He had lost hope, but the MC says there's still something they can do. This war won't end like the others, and he knows it. Raising his sword in front of him, the MC says they need to kill their leader. That's the only way they can win. The old man asks if that's truly possible. Yu Yan says it seems impossible, but it's not, especially because they had Hiram. At that moment, the Ottoman army was retreating. The big issue with this battle was their overwhelming numbers, and it would be hard to return alive from this mission. Yu Yan says they need at least 300 men for this mission, and asks the old man if he can provide them. But he doesn't answer immediately. Looking to the side, he sees that many men had already volunteered for the mission even before he asked. Even tired and wounded, they still recognize the old man as their emperor. Grateful, he says everyone there was giving their lives and everything they had for the good and protection of their nation. He owed them a great debt. He also acknowledges that he had said the gods would help them in this battle, but that would not happen, so the responsibility of protection was theirs alone. Ending his speech, he asks those men to defend their homeland until the very end. Those who joined them for this mission could stay. It was neither a command nor a demand. Those who wanted to leave had the right to decide that for themselves. Was there anyone there who wished to accompany their emperor on this kamikaze mission? He bows with closed eyes as he makes this plea. Several soldiers step forward without hesitation, which moves Constantine deeply. He thanks everyone who's there. Apparently, none of them had decided to run from battle. Yu Yan then says it's time to go, and they all begin this quest. A large army watches from afar the destruction that had occurred in Constantinople. Mehmed Diu, the emperor of that era, merely comments that Draguses had no intention of giving up. His mind wanders a bit. Things seem different this time. His reinforcements should have retreated by now, yet there were still some left. A soldier shouts that the Romans are approaching. Constantine, Hiram, and Yu Yan are on horseback while the others march on foot. Mehmed asks what they're planning. While some soldiers already look alarmed, Constantine shouts for the attack to begin, and the battle resumes. The archers release their first volley of arrows toward the small detachment of 300 men. The shots are coming, and the old man yells for someone to stop them. Several soldiers are struck, horses too. The casualties are enormous. It looked like a senseless battle. It reminded me of the 300 Spartans. Hiram screams in desperation at seeing so many deaths, but the MC yells that she must not look back. She tries to protest, but the MC says they came knowing their fate, and to honor them, she should protect their nation and families, not pity them. If she truly feels bad about everything happening, she must complete this mission, no matter what. Someone manages to clear a path for Hiram to advance and break through the army. A spear hits one of the soldiers behind her, killing him almost instantly. She looks back, terrified. Despair was starting to take hold of the girl's heart. She wanted to stop and help him, but someone shouts out, calling her a saint. A soldier says they will take care of things there, and she shouldn't worry about them. This battle is amazing, isn't it? Constantine shouts, warning that they've spotted the Sipahi, a type of commander of the Ottoman cavalry, and they were approaching. Jumping off the horse, Yu Yan shouts for Hiram to do the same. The two land on the ground, still standing, already ready to fight again. They would stay behind, and the MC yells for Hiram to keep moving forward without looking back. She has rage in her eyes. The two manage to get past the cavalry, and were heading straight for the Sultan. One of the Sipahi notices and panics. Several low-ranking soldiers move in together to try to stop them, but she tears through them with ease, shouting at them. She massacres everyone who stands in her way, trying to stop her from reaching her goal. Fast and strong, the two pushed past countless soldiers. This was a battle for survival, and there was no other option. Their synchronization was incredible. They were there to save others. Yu Yan shouts that they're almost at the Sultan, and they launch another joint attack. In the MC's mind, it was too late to gather soldiers to protect Mehmed Yu, but he sees a shield on the ground and has an idea. He yells to Hiram, saying he's going to grab a shield and use it to launch her toward the Sultan. She's a little confused, but he had already picked up the shield and positioned it so she could use it as a springboard. This was the moment. With a leap, she reaches the shield and the protagonist propels it upward. She reaches a height that no soldier or archer could match. Everyone could only stare upward, mouths agape as she passed. Yu Yan shouts for Hiram to fly, and at that moment, she opens her wings, becoming an angel that clears our vision. I'm emotional, everyone. Someone yells for the archers to fire and try to stop the girl, and they prepare to rain arrows down on her. With incredible speed, she seems to dodge the shots and was already closing in on the Sultan to end the war. Watching what was coming from above, all Mehmet Yu could say was that it was incredible. Dragusis was his arch enemy, but this moment was worthy of emotion. An explosion hits the Sultan's location and the chapter finally ends. Hiram was kneeling on the ground with Mehmed cut diagonally in half. This is going to be a problem, but it's fine. Yu Yan watched that scene in disbelief. It was insanely impressive to witness it live. Everyone there begins to fade away, and Hiram, standing, had her somber expression once again. Raising her sword high, she yells that they had won the battle. All the Romans cheer and celebrate the victory. Constantine watched in silence, just as stunned as Mehmed had been. He starts to tear up, thinking they had finally achieved that goal. That's what he had wanted to see. Everyone joyful before him. Hiram and the MC were looking at each other when the old man arrives to thank them once more. Removing his helmet, he bows, saying he would never forget their kindness, even if they were mere creations of that domain. The MC disagrees. He was also crying from happiness, wasn't he? The old man is confused, but the MC says they're also real people. He shouldn't belittle himself like that. A simple thank you was more than enough. That makes Constantine emotional and happy. Constantine says he'd like to reward them somehow, but nothing so mundane as money, so he would grant them knighthood titles. Yu Yan is shocked by this, and Hiram asks what's wrong. The MC explains that back in ancient Rome, a knight title held immense meaning, and in a mixed world like theirs, it was even better. Being knighted gives them even more power when telling stories, a gift not even infinite points could buy. In the name of Constantine Dragusis Palaiologos, the old man says he will grant them the title of Distinguished Knights, an incredible buff to their abilities. Fading away, the old man leaves his final words. I wish that pure glory lies ahead of you both. The soldiers also thank the saint, moved, and say they'll never forget her. They were truly grateful, and they too vanished. In the end, they had accomplished the ultimate goal, says Hiram. Yu Yan agrees with her. The girl was emotional. She thought they were going to fail, but they had succeeded. The system announces that they achieved a feat no one else had ever accomplished, and were rewarded with 10,000 points. Crying with joy, Hiram sees that their names would be celebrated forever in the mixed world, and she begins to laugh. Several more rewards appear for them, both from donations and achievements. The MC was happy to fight alongside Hiram, and says that no matter what happens, they'll always fight side by side. She smiles, still emotional, saying that was all that mattered to her. Their names would be engraved across the entire world. Everyone used to say they were useless, and that had been true for a while, but not anymore. A book appears in front of the MC, his book. That was his first story, the story of the fighter teller and his sword empress, the story that would set the stage for this world. We return to Bakwan Management. The CEO is answering a phone call and asks how she can help. The person on the other end wants an interview with her, but the company's schedule is completely full, so it won't be possible at the moment. Looking closely, the MC notices that even though she's visibly busy, she's very good at her job. She hangs up for a moment and speaks to Yu Yan, asking if he's really going to give up his Genesis blessing. Hiram throws herself into the MC's lap and says he'll give it up so she can touch him, but he doesn't really like that. He tells her to get off him, but she doesn't listen. Surian asks if this isn't dangerous, and he says yes, but at least he's with Hiram. Now that they were fighting together, she could consider him a collector too. Hiram seems to really enjoy being close to the MC. She starts saying the two of them have a very close relationship, but he punches her on the head, saying he already asked her to get off him. Yu Yan asks Surian if she's not tired, and she says yes, but she's happy to have been working so much in recent days. She's still in disbelief that the two of them managed to clear a notorious domain alone. She never imagined they could pull it off. AMC asks her not to accept every request that comes in, and she agrees. She had already rejected requests from clans, but the press was tricky. They had even received some commercial offers, but the MC immediately tells her to reject them unless they're really good. The system opens to show some messages. Several divine spirits were interested in making donations to them after that battle, but he blocks all those messages. As great as it was to have many subscribers in the library, they needed to set some rules soon so things wouldn't get out of control. Even though things seemed calm at that moment, the MC shows why and makes an apple appear in his hand. Hiram asks what it is, and Surian screams, asking if that's the fruit of life. He says she knows it well, and she replies it's her job to know. Yuyan explains that he received it right after the Battle of Constantinople. Many spirits are shocked to see it too. The one who gave it to him was Satan, and he did it precisely to mark territory and drive away other spirits who might be interested in the MC. Still skeptical, Hiram doesn't seem too impressed by the fruit, but Surian explains that it's one of the 2 most renowned fruits in the world. The MC confirms it, saying that even though it's small, it's something that can't be bought, not even for 10 million in gold, but he had to be careful. Consuming something like that at such a low level would cause his body to explode. Giving that to someone who couldn't use it was a real low blow. A new message appears, but the MC finds it strange because he had blocked all of them. The one who resembles shimmering lights would like to have a private meeting with Yuyan. He stands up, saying he has an important guest to receive and that he needs to leave immediately. The 2 girls are confused. Before they can stop him from leaving, he accepts the meeting request and is teleported away. He's now in a very open space, flying as if in the sky. That place was certainly different. He had never been there in his past life. Someone welcomes him, and he turns around to see who it is and is impressed by the person. But we don't yet know who it is. The scene changes, and we see that strange teller who tried to threaten the MC, shocked by what had just happened to him. In disbelief, he asks how the MC managed to defeat Constantinople. He himself couldn't achieve such a feat. He even survived a battle without his blessing. Desperate, he begins to think of how to crush this boy, otherwise the department would punish him. Thinking a bit more, he realizes that now that the MC no longer has his Genesis blessing, he could attack him without consequence. Even if he couldn't defeat that sword girl, if things went the way he was imagining, the story would completely change. Laughing, he begins posting several negative comments, bad-mouthing the Empress and even asking for the MC to be eliminated since he has no blessing. Blinded by revenge, all he can think about is making the MC pay for giving up his blessing so recklessly. And the chapter ends. Starting the new chapter, we see who called Yuyan to the secret meeting, and it was none other than the Archangel Michael. He thanks the MC for coming, who says he didn't expect a direct request from Eden, but had no issue showing up. Conjuring a table and chairs, Michael asks the protagonist to sit, and he's impressed by the display of power. Michael asks if he's not amazed, and the MC replies by asking how he couldn't be. He was someone important who wanted to meet him. The Archangel says he seems a bit too calm, but quickly changes the subject and says he called him there to verify some rumors he'd heard. Calmly, he asks the MC if anything comes to mind when he mentions the rumors, and Yuyan seems to know exactly what it's about. He responds that Michael must be referring to the gift he received from Satan. The 2 had always been arch enemies, and the MC knew that. Reassuring the Archangel, he makes it clear that he is not affiliated with Pandemonium, which makes Michael say that's great news. Yuyan continues, saying he didn't think Eden would even notice his library, but Michael says only fools are swayed by rumors alone. After checking things properly, he says he realizes the MC really has no ties to Pandemonium, but there was something else. He asks if it's true that he and Satan knew each other quite well. The MC wonders if Michael is trying to gauge the level of their relationship. Yuyan then explains how they met, giving a brief summary of what happened during the rookie teller's initiation ceremony. Michael asks if he really gave the fruit of life to the MC just because of that. The boy says Satan seemed interested in him and that he even had to turn down his offer. Michael then asks why he refused. Weren't those sponsorships usually very beneficial to tellers? Yuyan agrees, but says people have different values. In his case, he felt that his goal was more important than any sponsorship. In the end, that decision only made Satan more interested in him. Michael understands and says he just wanted to confirm that rumor. He says it's safe to assume he's not on Pandemonium's side after this conversation, but he'll take the opportunity to ask him something. Glowing brightly, Michael asks if Yuyan would be interested in being sponsored by Eden. The boy had already imagined that might happen after all. The one who came to speak to him was Michael himself, not just any angel. Undoubtedly, Eden was one of the greatest divine forces in the mixed world. This was truly an incredible offer. However, the MC decides to decline the Archangel's offer. Michael asks why he turned it down, and the MC explains it was for the same reason as before. His goal was bigger than any sponsorship. He wasn't interested in having his library aligned with any side. Michael asks if his stories would show both sides, good and evil. Yuyan says it wasn't that simple. He just wanted his stories to be free of any influence, a story that had never been told before. He might seem arrogant, but if Michael found his feelings questionable, he could simply watch the path he intended to follow. Wasn't the Archangel curious about the direction and ending of a teller's story, the one who chose to decline Eden's offer? The MC's words moved Michael, who, even if he wasn't selfish or greedy, had a heart burning for good stories. The Archangel asks if he's saying he wants to have both Eden and Pandemonium at the same time. The MC gives a small smile, but doesn't answer. Standing up, the Archangel says Eden will respect his wishes, and his story had captured his interest, so he would follow closely. Either way, he wanted to show his gratitude for taking the time to meet him. The MC is confused and asks what that meant. The Archangel gives the same answer Satan gave the MC at the start of the story. It would look bad for Eden not to give him anything in return. With an egg in his hands, he hands it to the MC, saying it was a personal symbol of his gratitude, and asks Yudian to take it. Apparently, the boy recognizes it because he looks slightly uneasy as he receives the gift. Back on Earth, he shows the egg to the two girls, who ask if he got it from a client. They're curious about what's inside. Yudian theorizes it might be a dragon that will be tamed for him once it hatches, but that's just a guess on his part, I believe. His mind, in truth, knew it wasn't a dragon. For angels, dragons were symbols of evil. But the egg begins to crack. Interrupting his thoughts, Hiram starts shouting that it was about to hatch, and the three of them stop to watch the egg closely. A small owl emerges from the egg, but she looks a lot more like Philo from Shield Hero. The MC recognizes it as an owl, and the girls are already completely in love with her, eager to pet her. The owl quickly flies onto the protagonist's head, which frustrates Hiram. She thinks the owl doesn't like her. Symbolically, the creature representing Satan was a snake, and owls were their natural predators. That was a clear message. He realizes that even the little owl, who had recognized him as her mother, had a skill book he could read. Hiram suggests the name Ool, but the other two think it's awful, though I admit I didn't understand why. Surian asks what kind of name the MC would give the owl. He thinks for a bit and decides to name her Bekio, which means white owl. The little pet seems to like the name and makes a cute face at the three of them again. We shift to a scene near a portal surrounded by some people who appear to be collectors. A blonde woman approaches and asks if everything went well inside. The hooded man says it didn't go as expected, but it was enough. Something catches the attention of the two who were talking. Hiram and the MC were approaching that domain, and they are recognized. Everyone is surprised by their presence. Their fame had arrived. The truth is they didn't like Hiram much, as she ruined most collectors' plans by clearing domains instead of just farming them. They nicknamed her the Farm Destroyer and rush into the domain to try to get something before she clears it. Watching this scene, she says it just makes her want to clear the domain even faster. The MC notices she had gotten used to the nickname. He asks her to wait and hold Bekio for a bit, as he wants to make an announcement before opening the library, and she agrees. As soon as he opens his library, several divine spirits immediately begin to enter. The number of viewers was already close to 2,500, and he already had nearly 1,200 subscribers. The numbers were impressive. Welcoming them, he announces that they are in the library of the Fighter Teller and the Sword Empress, and the spirits greet the MC in return. He had barely started the live stream and things were already getting out of control. People commenting all kinds of things alongside donations. At that moment, he even misses Satan, who used to keep things in check, but asks everyone to calm down because he had an announcement to make. Since things had become harder to manage ever since he started fighting, a few rules would now be put in place in the library, and they all agree. The rules are no clicks in the library, no mentioning other libraries to avoid dumb arguments, and hate speech will result in a ban. Many viewers complain. One even makes a donation to say they're leaving, and the MC takes the opportunity to block them right after. Most of the divine spirits are impressed by the protagonist's attitude, but it was actually a strategy to put them in their place. A spirit named the White King of the Sunset Sea makes a donation of 1,000 points and says he'll keep donating, but asks the MC to ease up a little. Even though it was a big donation, Yudian explains that rules are rules, and there would be no exceptions. Before he can explain anything else, the Divine Spirit makes a donation of 10,000 points and asks if that would change things now. All the other Divine Spirits are shocked by this donation. Even the protagonist gets irritated by such behavior. That bastard was trying to control his library with a bribe. The MC looks at the donation without saying anything. He starts to think about the donor's name. A great power with that nickname, someone who could donate that many points. It could only be one person, the one affiliated with the celestial domain, the White Dragon of the West. He had imagined that some famous divine spirits would eventually find his library. He just didn't expect it to happen this quickly. Yudian says he's surprised that one of the 4 dragons of the sea was in his library, which makes the donor raise his chin in arrogance. He makes another donation of 10,000 and tells him not to be so harsh. How much did he think spirits talked among themselves to form cliques? Trying to be a bit more diplomatic, The MC chuckles and repeats, in a questioning tone, what he meant by moderately. Quickly, returning to his usual serious stance, he says he can't do that, which leaves all the divine spirits in total silence. The King of the Sunset Sea asks what that was supposed to mean, and the MC replies that no means no. Was his answer not clear enough? A third donation of 10,000 arrives, with the king asking how much it would cost for the MC to bow his head to him. His pride had been wounded. Yuyan remained unmoved. No matter how much he donated, he would make no exception to the rules he himself had created. He couldn't be bribed with points, power, or authority. He would not be coerced, and he wouldn't change his decision for anything. The divine spirit grows incredibly furious at that answer, but all the MC says is that it's up to him to accept that or leave his stream. In the real world, Hiram sees a red light appear above her and the MC's pet, and wonders what that was. Noticing the red sky, the MC thinks he must be so furious that his power is crossing realms, enough for even him to see it. Suddenly, the Genesis system activates as a powerful red lightning bolt crashes down onto reality itself. As long as this system exists, the divine spirit will not be able to release his power irresponsibly. A new donation of 10,000 arrives, along with a message from the Sea King, saying he just has to crawl like he wants. Money buys everything. He keeps making more 10,000 point donations, asking if that's enough, but the MC doesn't flinch. Opening the block window, he thanks him for the donations. He had made a hateful comment toward the teller, so he would now be upgraded to blocked by the library. The system reports that the King of the Sunset Sea has been removed from the library, which leaves the other spirits stunned, but the MC smiles. He says rules are rules, but if everyone follows them, things will be better. Suddenly, a red light appears again. Appearing behind the MC, a red message screams and calls him a bastard. Lightning bolts erupt from it. The divine spirit had returned. The MC is shocked. How did he manage to bypass the system block? To think he had that kind of power was both incredible and terrifying. Yuyan says he understands his anger, but he had crossed a line. This makes the white dragon even more furious, and he insults the MC. Being banned after so many donations was a humiliation from the MC that he could not tolerate, and he makes a clear threat to the boy. Calmly, the MC says he never insulted even the 36 heavens, let alone the white dragon of the west. He only removed a guest who violated a rule. The divine spirit yells at the MC, asking how he dared to speak to him like that. A new window appears. Michael had entered the library. He makes a 100-point donation and asks what's going on. Yudian and the divine spirit are both confused to see Michael there, and the Genesis system activates once again. The system announces that an anomaly has been detected and confirms the target, the white dragon, for using an excessive amount of power. According to the system's rules, a standard procedure will be initiated. A bolt of lightning strikes the divine spirit's window, making him scream in pain. This amazes the MC. The system was able to subdue even one of the most powerful divine spirits in the mixed world. Finally, the King of the Sunset Sea is forcibly expelled from Yuyan's library, and the system window vanishes. Despite the commotion that had just happened, the MC says following the rules will prevent incidents, but anyone with complaints may speak now. None of them dares go against the library's rules, and some were still watching Michael silently. The angel had an effect on them. Calling out to Hiram, he says that since there are no more complaints, they can proceed as usual, and tells her they'll be clearing another domain today. Clearing another domain like Constantinople would be too much, so today they'll do something easier, which leaves the spirits a bit disappointed. He tells them not to act that way. They're not entering a mental domain just to mess around, and everyone is happy to see Hiram. Once ready, they enter a forest called Theodolant Wetlands. That place certainly looked very different from what they were used to clearing, and the spirits agree with the comment. First of all, they needed to find where the boundary line of the area was, and he says he'll do the briefing with Hiram. Before they could start talking, someone calls out to them, and both turn around to see who it is. 4 collectors were there, and the one who seemed to be their leader asks if the 6 of them could hunt together. The man asks if it's just the 2 of them, and the MC replies that it is. He says they usually hunt in groups of 6, but they lost 2 companions under certain circumstances, since hunting with just 4 was harder. Hiram finds that strange. It was as if they didn't know who they were. Did they not hear the rumors or her nickname? They were there to clear the place once and for all, so teaming up with people who only wanted to farm wasn't the best idea. The girl was about to reject the offer, but the MC steps forward and says it was perfect. They were actually looking for a team. Looking at the group, she's confused about why he decided to team up with those guys. Looking more closely, she notices a very beautiful blonde woman with them and starts thinking, a blonde that's stunning and with a body like that. Hiram starts to get nervous and forces herself to admit that she really was beautiful, and the MC had never reacted even when Hiram touched him. She panics, wondering if that was the type of woman Yoo-hyun liked, and I couldn't stop laughing at the fact that she clearly likes him. After the deal between them is finalized, the MC calls for his collector, who had already regained her serious demeanor. With a scary expression, she says it's a pleasure to meet them all, which leaves the group's leader a bit confused by how she spoke. They step away, saying they're going to grab their things, and the MC agrees he'll just wait for them there. Satisfied, he looks at Hiram, who's still serious, and she says she understands that everyone has different tastes. She was truly annoyed. The girl starts tearing up, saying that if she goes on a diet, she could look like that too, but the MC doesn't get it and tells her to stop. Yoo-hyun suddenly moves closer to her, making her a bit flustered. Blushing, she asks if he really wants to do this in a place like that. She's not complaining, but there were lots of divine spirits watching. Ignoring the girl's nonsense, he asks her to listen carefully to what he has to say. That group is made up of corpse looters. She hears that and is speechless for a moment. The scene shifts, and we see the group looting a collector who hadn't survived there. Could that have been one of the two they said they lost? Their leader seemed quite satisfied with what they pulled off the body, and that's where the chapter ends. These thieves made their living stealing stories and texts from other collectors because they were too cowardly to create their own. Hiram asks if they got close to the two of them just to steal their stories in the end, but the MC says it wasn't just that. Among those looters were not only thieves but also some murderers, people who were only there because they enjoyed killing. The girl agrees with what he's saying and says it's probably true, but she still has a question. How did he know those guys were corpse scavengers? Even the divine spirits were curious about that. He remembers that the leader had said it was hard to hunt in a group of 4, but their clothes were way too clean for people who'd been hunting. That place was a swamp. The water reached up to people's knees, and any movement would splash mud everywhere. They shouldn't have been that clean. What was even stranger was how they approached them, as if they didn't know who the two of them were. Even if they didn't, it was still suspicious. To approach two strangers and ask to team up was extremely suspicious. She asks why he didn't just reject the proposal then. He asks, what fun would that be? Then he speaks to the spirits about the villains who approached them, thinking they were easy prey. If people like that approached them, would they just avoid them? What would the others have done in the MC's place? Everyone there, including Miguel, agrees that he shouldn't let this slide and that the two of them should crush that group of villains. The plan was to pretend to be clueless, do what the villains expected them to do, and then strike when the moment was right. Wouldn't that make a great story? Hiram asks if they'll really be fooled by this, and the MC answers with another question. Do you know what kind of person is easiest to deceive? The answer was, those who think they know more than they really do, and who believe what they see is the entirety of the world. Those who are drenched in superiority and think their knowledge is the only truth. Those were Yoo-hyun's favorite prey. A Shopi Bulbasaur is found and immediately defeated. The ghoul leader compliments Hiram for defeating it in one strike, and the blonde girl also starts flattering her. Nervously, the leader wonders why the Empress of the Sword was so strong. They simply hadn't gotten tired of hunting monsters this whole time. Yoo-hyun was stepping away a bit when the leader asked where he was going, and the MC replied that he needed to take care of something quickly. The leader said it was dangerous for him to go alone and asked a boy named Yongwon to go with him, assuming the MC was just going to the bathroom. Nervous, the silver-haired boy accepted the order and said he would go with him. Yoo-hyun just watched this. He didn't seem like he would object. Through telepathy, he warns Hiram that the group will probably act now that they're separated and tells her to stay alert and intervene if needed. The two moved away from the main group. Yongwon looked uneasy, as if he wasn't comfortable with the situation. Noticing this behavior, the MC asks if everything was okay with him, which makes the boy even more nervous. Yoo-hyun says that if something is wrong, he can tell him, but he's already thinking that he knows everything. He had seen in their books that the 3 who stayed with Hiram were total scum, but this boy was different. He seemed normal. With a trembling voice, he asks the MC if his name is Yoo-hyun. Still nervous, he whispers to the teller to run away as far as possible, and this action surprises the divine spirit. Sweating bullets, he tells the MC that the 3 others were assassins and that he had been forced to stay with them. He had even suggested they eliminate 2 more people. He tried to refuse but felt he'd be killed by Woo-hyun if he said no, and now in the end, he was one of them. Wanting to help the MC, he begs Yoo-hyun to escape and says he would lie and say he killed him, to try to help Hiram too. But the MC was curious. He wanted to know why that group wanted to eliminate them. The boy says a teller from a famous division had requested it, and the MC grows more interested. The divine spirits are moved by the boy, because he was really trying to help the MC and Hiram. Yuyan is also pleased by this attitude. Yuyan then decides to stay right there instead of fleeing, which scares the boy, and the MC explains that he already knew everything. Even more nervous now, the teller is reassured by the MC, who says he doesn't need to worry. He's proven himself to be a good person. Yongwon is about to ask if the Empress of the Sword would be okay, when the two of them hear a scream from where she was. The MC says he thinks it's almost all over. Arriving at the location where the other four were, the three ghouls were sprawled on the ground like trash bags, defeated. Yongwon is shocked. How had she managed to defeat three collectors on her own? And the MC says there's not even a need to tie them up. Looking at her, he thinks he expected her to pretend to be weak when he told her to fight alone, but she simply followed his command. The three start to wake up, and the MC tells them to hurry and get up. It's not like they were killed by the Empress. Wunyan was still dazed but regaining consciousness until he realizes what's happening and sees that Yongwon is fine. He shouts at the boy, asking if he ratted them out, and calls him a traitor, but they say nothing. Yuyan steps in front of the boy, who's still being insulted by Wunyan. The MC steps on the arm of the gang leader, making him scream instantly in pain, and says he's going to explain the situation he's in. That man, Baek Wunyan, a Class 7 collector involved in the murder of more than 10 people, along with involvement in other crimes. Yuyan says he had plans to eliminate a nameless man and the Empress of the Sword. Wasn't that right? Now comes the important question: who hired him? Panting, the man tries to act tough, saying he won't say anything, but the MC asks if he's not afraid of the law and justice. He screams that the worst that'll happen is that he'll go to jail, and the divine spirits say the MC should just eliminate the criminal right there. The MC says nothing, which makes Wunyan more confident in his threats, and he yells even louder, but the MC interrupts him. Drawing his sword, he pierces the bandit beside Wunyan without the slightest hesitation. Looking to the side, Baek is confused to see that, and the MC smiles, saying that was enough. Shocked, the other two look at their companion, now lying lifeless in the waters of the mental domain swamp. They are immediately seized by terror and start screaming, begging the MC for mercy, but he simply smiles without saying a word. The girl, shouting, begins to plead, saying it wasn't her fault, that he was the one who made her do what she did. But the MC raises his sword. Hiram grabs the MC's arm. He looks at her, wondering if she was trying to stop him from eliminating another bandit. Maybe she thought he was a horrible person for doing that. But then she also draws her sword. With a diagonal strike, she slashes the girl, who sprays ketchup everywhere and collapses on the other side of Wunyan, also lifeless. Yuyan watches the scene in disbelief. Little does he know she only did it to vent her jealousy on the girl, and that made me laugh a lot. Satisfied, the MC says he may have underestimated the girl. Meanwhile, Wunyan stares at his companion, horrified by the scene. Hiram then says she'll take care of him, and the chapter ends like that. Subarashi, don't you agree with me? The chapter begins with Hiram already in clean clothes. I think the author forgot what happened at the end of the last chapter. Approaching Wunyan slowly, she says she realized something during the Battle of Constantinople, the one thing she needed to do. To reach her goal, she must be ready to do whatever it takes. The man screams in desperation, begging to be spared. Now that he knows he's not getting out of this alive, he starts trying to talk his way out of it. Bandits are all the same. Wunyan says they'll regret killing him, while the MC asks if he knows something. He doesn't even have the right to negotiate anything. Trying to win through words, the man says that if they kill him there, they'll never find out which teller hired him in the first place. Yuyan says it was Jin Poon, from the Pentagram Division of Celestial Body Incorporated. Hearing that name crushes Wunyan's hope. Desperate, the man asks how he knew, and the MC then asks if he really thought he didn't know about the secret deal between them. Turning his back on the scene, Yuyan says he'll leave the rest to Hiram, and she finally ends up covered in ketchup again. He screams even more in desperation, begging her not to come near him, and also cries out for someone to help him. Wunyan screams for Yongwon in desperation, begging him for help, but the boy was also shaken by what he was witnessing. Unwavering, Hiram stood before the bastard who tried to harm her and her future beloved. Yes, I'm already rooting for them to be together. Tears start to fall from Wunyan's face. He already knew there was no turning back. His final glimpse was of the MC's back, and when he looked at him, his face wore a grotesque, psychopathic smile. Then finally, with just a single swing of the sword, his head is separated from his body. Yuyan was satisfied. Watching the downfall of those who thought they knew everything and looked down on others was deeply satisfying. He knew this might be a distorted form of justice, but it was an unavoidable aspect of his human nature, an unremovable mark left after enduring that terrible first world. It might even seem a little strange, but he couldn't help it. It was who he was, and he was happy and enjoying it. Looking up, The MC simply says he hopes that Jinpum from the Pentagram Division entertains him as much as those three just did. Excited, the divine spirits say the story was spectacular, even if some still wanted more. Yongwon watches the scene stunned. Falling backward, he couldn't process what he had just experienced. Wunyan's head lay beside him, and seeing it leaves him so horrified that he ends up vomiting from the disgust and despair. The two look at him as he questions what he'd done. When he thought he could help someone for the first time in his life, this happened. And to think that his supposed courage had meant nothing, as he'd been deceived by the two of them from the very beginning. He then wonders why. Screaming at the two of them, he asks why they killed his companions, but the MC says if they hadn't, they would have died instead. Yongwon shouts that if they had just run away, no one would have had to die, but everything felt like a joke to him. Tellers don't care about humans. He yells that the MC doesn't know anything. He never had to suffer in life and has nothing to fight for, which is why he doesn't care. Yudian says everyone has a unique role in life. They simply refused theirs because they wanted more, so they risked their lives chasing it. To Yongwon, it might seem like they were chosen, but in truth, they were just like the boy there. Trembling and crying, the boy asks why. Then he was the way he was. Yudian replies that he accepted his reality, while they are chasing the reality they want to create in the end. Furious, the boy shouts, asking what he can even do if all his efforts end in failure, no matter how hard he tries. Yudian watches the boy's desperation but simply says that the human world is small. He gets confused, believing that everything he sees and feels is all that exists, and when someone labels him a failure, he believes it as the truth of the world, and he only thinks that's the whole truth of the world because his focus is entirely on himself. The boy still seems confused by these words. The MC explains that the real world doesn't care about him, doesn't blame him for anything, doesn't even know he exists, nor does it try to. If he wants to change things, he needs to start by changing his view of the world around him and show others who he really is. That might be difficult, but it's a better path than simply giving up on what he wants without even trying. After that speech, he decides to leave. Hiram asks if it was okay to leave him like that, but the MC says it's fine. The boy will be okay. Back to clearing the domain, the girl goes on destroying everything in her path with ease until they reach the final boss called leprosy. With a massive jump, Hiram puts herself out of reach of the plant monster, and with a strike of her sword, she finishes it off. That was way too easy. They earn several different rewards for clearing this domain and the story of the weed puller, along with the boss's resin. The domain begins to fade, and something catches the girl's attention. She finds it interesting that all the grime from the domain vanish after beating the boss, and he explains that everything disappears except the wounds and rewards. After the MC's explanation, she wants to talk about another subject, saying he's been lost in thought since earlier. The MC keeps thinking that he used to believe people couldn't change, but seeing that boy's book change color shifted his perspective. Maybe there really were some people who could change their own fate. He tells her it's nothing and says it's time to go. Returning to reality, they're met by several collectors crying because they couldn't enter the domain before them. The divine spirits were amused by the collectors' despair as they cried, wanting compensation for their loss. Unbothered by them, the MC says he already got everything he wanted from there and calls Hiram to leave. Back at Suryan's company, Hiram starts to relax, saying she's tired, while the other girl asks how work was today. Hiram says there was nothing special, but they received several rewards for fully clearing the area. Curious, the MC asks the girl to show him her status window, and she agrees immediately. Analyzing the data, he looks a bit frustrated, and noticing his expression, she asks if something's wrong, and he says everything there was too vague. It was as if all her abilities were overly simplified, even though she was growing at a rapid pace. The girl agrees it is strange, but he says it's very problematic, because it leaves them in the dark about her true potential. In the MC's past life, the status metrics for all collectors were much more detailed, unlike now. He asks the girl if she worked hard to grow, and upon checking her status, saw that, how would she feel? She answers, desperate. That was the problem. It was as if this was intentional, to demotivate collectors using unclear metrics. There was someone behind this. Until then, the MC thought the apocalypse was caused by collectors who got lazy, but the real cause might go deeper than that. It was too early to suspect anything, but if his theory that someone might be behind this turned out true, things would get interesting. Yuyan begins to laugh quietly, but Hiram hears it and grows concerned. The MC reassures her, saying it's nothing, but he's thinking that those in the shadows trying to control everything might come after him. That way, he'll be able to truly enjoy it when he brings them all down. Suryan had stepped out for a moment, but she was already returning to the company. Hiram asks where she had gone, and she replies that she went to a meeting with the magazines and says she'll be doing an interview soon. The girl panics, and Suryan explains that it was time for her to start exposing herself to the world. Collectors are like celebrities, explains the MC, and these things are part of life. For her to get known, an interview is a great idea. Hiram is annoying and doesn't want to take part in interviews, but the MC says the money will come in like water pouring down a waterfall if she does it. She immediately changes her attitude and asks how much she'd get. Yuyan says a few $100,000 would be little, and she agrees to everything. Changing the subject a bit, Suryan asks what the boy was doing, and he says he's working on a weapon. Hiram finds that strange since it was just an old, cheap sword from the system shop, and the MC agrees with that. He asks her to open her system window and check the sword's information, and she says it was an ancient sword of some Salio. Was that supposed to be good? The MC explains that this name is relatively famous in the mixed world, an empire known for its magical engineering that made history. That sword was an ancient relic from this Salio empire. The MC knew that, but the current world he was in didn't yet have that knowledge. This was a hidden item that couldn't even be found within the domains of the mind. Union tells Hiram that she needs to start training her main attack skill, which leaves the girl confused. Pointing at her, the MC explains that she will soon become a mid-class collector and needs a skill that matches her physique. It turns out she had skipped the process most collectors take years of suffering to develop, doing so at an impressive speed. That was why she needed to develop a technique worthy of a mid or high-level story. Hiram asks if those stories aren't too expensive, and the boy replies that there's a way to get them almost for free. He asks her to open her shop and search for a low-level story called Thunder Steps. She finds it, and we see it costs 100 points. Next was the internal skill Thunder Berserker in the mid-level stories, and finally, Storm Fury in the low-level stories. Hiram was supposed to buy those 3 stories, but Suryan asks if those weren't known for being trashed. No one could handle the speed granted by Thunder Steps. The Thunder Berserker skill was so strong it made the user's body contort all the time. And finally, in the case of Thunder Fury, it was an extremely useless sword skill. These 3 skills together were known as the 3 useless brothers. That leaves Hiram shocked. Was it really safe to learn them? Yuyan asks the girl if she doesn't trust him, and she instantly decides to buy them because she's in love with him and obeys him unconditionally. After acquiring the skills, she asks if she should learn them all at once, and then inserts them into her body. Lightning begins to surge from the girl's body, startling Suryan, while the MC immediately steps in front of her. He places the sword between the lightning that was emanating from Hiram's body, and the sword begins to change its blade. Suryan is scared by that transformation, and we see that it became a completely different sword, even impressing the MC. Surprised, the girl asks if that was the sword's original form, and Yudian hands it to her, telling her to be careful with the lightning. Looking at the blade, he thinks he knew it was a beautiful sword when he heard about it, but in person it was even better. Hiram had a serious posture now. It looked like she had finally absorbed the stories she bought. He asks if she's feeling any discomfort, but she says she's not feeling anything special. Now it was time for her to open her status window and analyze the skill she gained from combining those 3 stories. The 3 lightning skills had disappeared from her talent tree and were replaced by something called Celestial Lightning Sword. This hidden piece was capable of letting her control lightning that falls from the sky. It was a skill greater than any other of high rank. Hiram was even more in love with the MC, and she jumps in to hug him, but the boy notices the move and dodges quickly. He tells her he can't touch her until she learns to control the lightning, or else he'll get shocked, and the girl cries. Standing up, she asks how he knew about that hidden piece. If he had shown it to the spirits, they would have loved it. The best option was to do it without them seeing it, otherwise too many questions would be raised, and that would be problematic. He explains that he didn't want any trouble coming from it, but tells her to forget about it and throws the sword into her hands to absorb its lightning. Without her needing to do anything, the sword starts dimming the brightness of her body, which catches Suryan's attention. Grabbing the MC by the arm, she asks to speak with him in private. This time, he doesn't try to escape. What a rascal. Annoyed, she asks if he used Hiram as a battery to create the sword, and he says that in the end it worked, and it was all to help her. He's curious since she seems so concerned about Hiram, and she, trembling, says she's worried something might go wrong. If anything happens to her, her office could be reduced to ashes, so really she's just worried about the money. Still irritated, she tells the MC to inform her in advance if he ever plans to do something like that again. And that makes Yudian remember that this girl wasn't normal either. A message arrives in his system, and it surprises the MC. The sender was the old man from the association saying he had found Duyun. The MC quickly says he needs to leave and tells Hiram not to move away from the sword because he had something to settle right then. Running to the association, Yuyan starts wondering why he's going there in the first place. He had no reason to get involved with that guy, but why was he so focused on him? Would he get angry when he saw him? It's possible he might not feel anything at all in the end. Either way, he wanted to try meeting him at least once, and arriving at the location, he says he wants to speak with Jonmo. Before the receptionist could call the old man, he was already there, asking the boy to come with him, startling them both. Alone in the meeting room, Jonmo asks what the relationship between the MC and that Choi Do-yoon was. Yoo-yeon replies that he doesn't know him, he's only heard about him in rumors, and that seems to satisfy the old man. Putting his hands in his robes, he says that thanks to the information the MC had given, he was able to investigate the boy, and it wasn't even that difficult. Taking out a photo and handing it to the MC, he asks if that was the Choi Do-yoon he was looking for. Overwhelmed, the MC shouts that he is indeed the one he's been looking for and asks where he is now. The old man then explains that 10 years ago, when Earth was added to the mixed world, something happened on the day of unification. No one had any information about where that boy was, he had simply vanished, and that leaves the MC shaken, ending the chapter. The chapter begins with the MC still stunned by the information that Choi Do-yoon had vanished. Jongmo explains that he was one of those who disappeared during the 99 days of revolution. When Earth joined the mixed world, there was a massive collision. Every barrier of reality collapsed and stories became real. That day became known as the Day of Unification. Does that mean Earth was forcibly added to a syndicate? Many people vanished from the face of the earth that day, and to this day, no one knows what caused these disappearances. It was all a mystery. It was known that they had gone to some other dimension, especially since a few managed to return, but only as corpses. Those who returned alive from that other dimension came back as monsters. In the future, some of the missing would return whole and be known as returnees from another world, but that wasn't the case yet. Looking at the photo, the MC thinks that Choi Do-yoon's disappearance was truly a surprise. Maybe it had happened in his previous life. The power and judgment he displayed during the end of the world had been shaped by his adherence to the rules of the other world. Interrupting his thoughts, the old man tells the MC that Do-yoon has a mother, which confuses the boy. He explains that she's been looking for him since the day of his disappearance, and now she wants to meet the MC. Yoon is even more surprised, and the old man asks if the boy is interested in meeting the woman. It was understandable that she would want to meet the MC, considering he might be the only clue about her son after years of searching. Standing up, he says he'll meet her later and asks for the old man's help again if needed, and the man replies that if it's him, anytime. Holding the photo more tightly, he wonders if his own parents were still alive in that reality, but he was afraid to know. If he existed in this world, what would have happened to his past self? Could there be another Kang Yoo-yeon in this world? If that were the case, could he still call his parents parents? How would they feel seeing a teller in human form? And what if they thought the MC was an imposter? Someone shouts his name, pulling him back to reality. Hiram was standing in front of him, holding the sword. He asks what she was doing there, and blushing, she says she followed him because he looked troubled when he left, and she got worried about him. He apologizes for leaving her like that but says he's fine. It wasn't anything serious like she had thought. She says he really does look fine now. The girl invites him back to the office, and he looks confused. Curious, she asks if he still had something to do, but the MC doesn't answer right away. He had decided to become the main character of his story in this life, and the biggest influence on that decision came from his parents. So even if they didn't accept him as family, there was no reason for the MC to be afraid or run away from his goal. Yoo-yeon says yes, and asks if she would like to go with him. The girl gets extremely excited and asks where they're going. Smiling, the MC says they're going to meet his saviors because regardless of everything, they were still his parents. On the bus, Hiram says the MC is really interesting, a teller who doesn't mingle with others and has a mysterious past. Yoo-yeon says she's wrong, but she doesn't believe him and says one day he'll tell her his story. The girl asks who these amazing people are that he calls his saviors, and the MC agrees, they really are amazing. That answer makes Hiram wonder what kind of people would make him speak with such respect. She really wanted to learn more about Yoo-yeon's past, since she knew nothing about it. Looking at the girl, the MC wonders if Hiram has a family. He could find that information in her book, but he decides to do something better. The boy asks Hiram if she has a family. Excited, she asks if he wants to know because he's interested in her, but the MC says no, and that it's okay if she doesn't want to answer. She says she only asked that because she was happy he asked her something, then says she doesn't have any family, which surprises the MC. Smiling, she says she had one in the past, but she can't remember her father, who ran away right after her mother gave birth to her. Maybe that's why her mother abused her so much as a child and said she wasn't her daughter. Until one day a tragedy happened. She was arriving home, and when she opened the door, she was faced with an unforgettable scene. Her mother was hanging lifeless after deleting herself. After that, not much happened. Eventually, she ended up in an orphanage where she was bullied even more by the other kids because she was shy. The MC was shocked. She was about to say it was okay now, since her life was different because of him, but he suddenly shouts her name. Smiling, she asks what it is, but he ends up saying it's nothing and comments that her life was very hard too. The girl says she doesn't care about that. Thanks to him, she found what she wants to do with her life and no longer lives like a failure. Looking at her up close, she seemed on the verge of breaking inside. The Sword Empress he knew wasn't like this. But the truth is that he never had the chance to know the Sword Empress from the past. He didn't need to compare the two. Even if her mind was about to break, depending on his actions, the girl had the potential to completely change her life. He tells her that it's okay, because he will never abandon or leave her. Blushing, she smiles and says she'll never do that either. These two are so cute, I admit. Finally, the two arrive at the bus stop where they were supposed to get off. The MC's face was pale from being there. He starts recognizing all the places he used to go as a child. Everything looked just like it did before. The only thing that was different there was him. There was a playground where he used to skip class, and his mom always found him there when he did that. Someone shouts at another person named Kang Yura, saying she's skipping class again, and the girl yells back that she'll go tomorrow. She walks past him, and when the MC sees her, he's startled. Here we see proof that the multiverse really exists, because it was the female version of the MC, and that leaves him dazed and confused, ending the chapter. The chapter begins with the girl and Yu-hyun staring at each other, slightly shocked. Once again, someone shouts Yora's name. The person yells that they've already told her that anyone who runs from their responsibilities can never succeed. Yora complains, telling her to stop nagging, while the MC stares at her, speechless. That person in front of him was his mother. The woman notices the MC's presence, and he approaches her. She apologizes for speaking so loudly in that place, but he wants to call her mom and whispers it as he gets closer. Reality finally crashes into him, and the boy wonders what the hell he was expecting to happen. Kang Yu-hyun doesn't exist in that reality. Someone else is already in the place where he should be. Interrupting his thoughts, the woman asks the MC to excuse her. Looking at him, she asks if the two of them know each other because he reminds her of someone. Yura points at him, asking if she's the only one who thought that and if the MC knows her father. The next moment, she notices Hiram's presence. This makes her blush and get excited, shouting that that was the Sword Empress, the one Yura had told her mother about. In awe, the girl walks up to Hiram and asks for an autograph, while her mother tells her not to scare the Empress. Yudian says maybe it was fate that the four of them met like that, and asks the two to have a little chat. They all go to a cafe where they sit together. Yora's mother asks the MC what his name is, and he apologizes for not introducing himself earlier. He was Kang Yu-hyun, a teller from Celestial Body Incorporated. Yora is ecstatic to meet a teller for the first time, and her mother notes that he looks a lot like her husband and thought they might be relatives. Yu-hyun realizes that his mother noticed something about his appearance, and he even wants to tell her the truth, but unfortunately he can't. Almost jumping out of her seat, the girl then confirms if the MC is really a teller, and he says yes. She wants to know if he could turn her into a collector, and her mother scolds her, saying that was very rude. The MC laughs and says there's no harm in asking, and the girl giggles, saying that he said it was okay, but her mother is still annoyed. Answering her question, it's impossible to turn an ordinary person into a collector. They can only make contracts with those who already are one. The mother says that's a relief. She thought Yu-hyun might agree to make her a collector, which makes the girl furious. Also irritated, the mother yells that she needs to recognize her own limits and accept when something is beyond her control. Biting her lip in frustration, the girl starts to tear up. She runs off as her mother shouts her name but decides to let her go wherever she wants. Sitting back down, the mother apologizes for her daughter showing her worst side there, but the MC acknowledges it as part of her age. All young people must think being a collector is cool, but the mother says she only sees the glamorous side of it, and she's worried about her daughter. The worst part was knowing the girl had no talent to become a collector. That sentence catches the MC off guard. He remembers going through the same thing when he was a child, his mother telling him he had no talent for what he wanted to do. Calming down, he asks Hiram to go find Yura and give them a bit of space to talk, and she agrees. As she leaves, Yu-hyun says no one should give up on their path just for lacking talent, and his mother agrees, everyone should dream big. But there was more. She had learned in life that dreams aren't achieved just by wishing. Yu-hyun replies that even so, she was still her daughter. She agrees and wants the best for Yura, but the collector's job is tough. She just doesn't want the girl to get hurt and wants her to grow well. The boy says she wasn't wrong, but she shouldn't crush her daughter's dream, no matter how difficult the path may be. Annoyed, she asks if she should just let the girl go, but the MC simply suggests that she show the girl reality, just how dangerous it really is. If she still doesn't give up on this path, then there was nothing else to be done. This leaves his mother confused. The MC explains that it means she would be walking this path fully aware of the difficulties. Did she think the girl's determination was weak? A simple phrase or act of encouragement can change a person's fate. Yu-hyun believes that an honest conversation between the two of them could bring more clarity. He hopes she can believe in her daughter's dreams at least one more time. No matter how hard it is, she needs to dream big. If Yura follows her dreams, she can become the protagonist of her life. The mother recognizes the words the MC used. No matter how dangerous the path may be, if someone's goal lies at the end of it, they cannot be stopped. He asks once again for Yura's mother to believe in her daughter's dreams. The woman finally gives in and says that maybe she had stifled Yura's potential out of concern. Changing the subject, she finds it amazing how much he looked like her grown-up son. Even though it was the first time they met, it was fascinating. The MC gives an awkward laugh as the cafe door opens. Looking to see who entered, the two turn to look. Yura and Hiram were there, but the little girl still looked very upset. Yuyan excuses himself to her mother and says he would like to talk to Yura in private, and she agrees. The boy then asks if she'd like to talk with him for a moment, and still upset, she seems to agree. He asks why she wants to become a collector, and she asks if he's going to laugh at her answer. He says he won't. Yura says they always seem so cool and confident with amazing lives. He probably thinks that's a silly answer. Yuyan says no, because he had a similar dream too. The girl is surprised. The MC says anyone can dream. What matters is determination. Then he asks if she's willing to risk her life for that dream. She looks confused, and Yuyan explains that Hiram was on the brink of death several times for her dream. Was Yura willing to do the same? Frustrated, she can't answer, but the MC tells her she doesn't need to answer now. Just that one day, she'll need to have an answer to that. The girl then asks if the MC really thinks she has the potential to reach her dream. If she truly wanted to become a collector and had the determination for it, did he believe she could succeed? Smiling confidently, the MC says yes, she can do it. He thinks that if someone had said the same to him, his life would have been different back then. He could assure her, as a teller, that she could succeed, because he wanted her to change too. Above the girl's happy, smiling face, her book glowed with increased potential. That was enough. As they say goodbye, Yura thanks them for everything they did for her that day and says she wishes she could stay with them a little longer. But it's time to go. Yudian says he hopes everything she wishes for comes true, and that it was great meeting her, and Yura says she already knows everything will work out. They finally say goodbye, but the MC's mother says nothing. The MC and Hiram are waiting at the bus stop for it to arrive, and the girl notices he seems very happy, but he changes the subject. The next moment, someone calls Yuyan's name, and he turns to see who it was. Yura's mother was approaching him, and the boy asks what's wrong. Getting up, the MC asks Hiram to wait a bit so he can see what happened. As he gets closer to the woman, he asks what it is, and she says she had something to tell him before he left. The next moment, she hugs the MC and says he worked hard all this time. That takes Yuyan by surprise. His face begins to blush, and tears waver in his eyes. He needs to tell her he's not her son and set clear boundaries. She keeps hugging him, but he can't stop it, and in the end, he returns her hug, saying yes, he worked hard. Letting go of the boy, she says she'll be rooting for him forever, and the MC thanks her as she walks away from his life for good. All he wishes for her is peace in the remaining days of her life, since his parents in his past life died at the beginning of the end. He's not going to let that happen in this life, not lose his parents, nor allow the apocalypse to begin. The scene shifts, and we see a jar of ink spilled on top of a table. Someone yells in disbelief at something that had gone unexpectedly. Watching through the system screen those three useless fools who were defeated by the MC and Hiram, we realize it's Jinpung, furious that his plan failed. He had only one last option to deal with him, but he didn't want to use that method since even he might not be able to endure it. Rejecting the idea, he yells that he can't do it and then closes the system screen. Someone behind him asks what it is he says he can't do, and this startles the man. Looking back, he sees a small fairy, whom he calls Argyle, and asks what she's doing there in his library. She says she's there because she was wondering what her Jinpung was up to, and if he had completed the task she had assigned him. The teller is horrified to hear the fairy complain that he hadn't completed the mission she had given him. She says she's very disappointed and that she believed in him, but he had proven himself untrustworthy. Jinpung tries to say that it wasn't like that. Dramatically, the fairy says she feels very sad about his actions and for him trying to eliminate a colleague. Jinpung protests, saying he could never do something like that. Argyle then puts on a psychopath-like expression and asks if he's saying she's lying. The next moment, Jinpung is thrown to the ground by an impressive gravitational force that brings him to his knees. He collapses to the floor with such impact that it cracks, and he asks how she's doing that to him inside his own library. The fairy explains that when he was hired by the department, he gave up control over the library and could only regain it once he became a senior. Until that day comes, he has no control over his workplace, which means he could die right there, in the supposedly safest place possible. Releasing him, Argyle says she's a very generous senior and will give him one more chance to deal with Kang Yuyan. This time, in fact, he'll even receive a special service and support with points. Stammering, Jinpung asks if she really wants him to do that. Argyle nods and says she wants him to promote a story battle, a wager between tellers using their libraries as stakes. Nervously, Jinpung says that a battle against the Sword Empress would be impossible, but the fairy says he'll receive a collector worthy of the challenge. There was a collector in the department who was being secretly strengthened and wasn't yet known to the public. The divine spirits would be thrilled to see a collector capable of defeating the Sword Empress, and that gives Jinpung hope. Back at Suryan's company, we see a table filled with cotton swabs and other materials. The MC was making modifications to the sword, which had been charged thanks to Hiram, as that sword had yet to reveal its full potential. He begins engraving some mana circuits onto the blade. The sword begins to shine and emit a great deal of energy, transforming it from an ancient relic into a powerful piece of magical engineering. In addition to earning 100,000 points for accomplishing this, he also received the story of the engraver. This was the true form of the ancient relic of Salio. Numerous extremely powerful stats are displayed on the sword, so many that I won't even list them here. Even so, the sword still had other abilities that were locked, and the MC couldn't see them yet. Something in the description catches his attention. The sword had a massive ego, which leaves him very confused. The weapon begins trembling in his hand, and the sword screams that it was finally free, startling the MC and his pet. Looking down, we see a small head with a book on top, and the MC is just as shocked as I am to see this thing. That sword wasn't just talkative, it had its own personality. It reminded me of the manhwa about the boy who hears the voices of swords. She asks who her master is, and the MC introduces himself as Yugyun. The girl is startled to see that he's a teller and asks if he's going to sell her. The boy explains that he intends to use the sword instead of selling it, which makes the little girl very curious. The MC changes the subject and asks her name. With a very cute face, she says she spent so long sleeping that she ended up forgetting her name and asks Yugyun to give her one. He doesn't understand, and she explains that since he was able to awaken her, he must be talented as an engraver, so he might have talent for naming as well. Looking at the weapon, he remembers his little owl, since both were very white. The MC then decides to name the little girl Bakrina, which means White Lotus. She likes the name and accepts it. Emitting energy once again, she says that he is now her master, and then she transfers some skills to him. Yudian acquires the story of the one who inherited what was forgotten, and gains the title of Recorder, while his story is also transferred to the sword. The little girl lets out a scream that startles the MC. He asks what's wrong, and she then asks what's this about him being someone reincarnated? That question catches the MC off guard. Shocked, he realizes she read his past because of the contract they made, and the MC starts stammering, trying to explain who he is. She watches him closely while he decides to tell the truth, since there was no point in hiding anything from her at that moment. After explaining everything, she asks if he found her because he knew of her existence in the future, and he says yes, but no one knew she had an ego. The girl then explains that because he had the recorder ability, he was able to fully awaken her, while the other owner could not. In any case, she was excited to know that her master was a teller, because she was curious about the stories they tell. Smiling, the MC says that from now on, she'll see many of those stories, and he extends his finger to greet her and seal their friendship. The scene shifts, and we're in a wide open green field. Only the MC and Hiram are there, and the boy asks if she's ready. She confirms. He opens his library and several people enter immediately, reaching a total of 2,163 viewers. Yuyan greets the divine spirits and says that after a few days of rest, they could return with a new routine of live streams. This makes the spirits very curious, but the MC says he'll show them little by little and asks for their patience. First of all, he was going to explain what kind of story they were going to tell that day. Before he could continue his explanation, someone says his name, catching his attention. Turning around, he wants to know who called him, interrupting his broadcast. Jinpung was there, saying he had a request to make. He wanted a storytelling battle against the MC. This challenge call sends the divine spirits into a frenzy, intrigued by the completely unexpected event. The White Lotus appears asking what that was, and he explains that it's a battle between the stories of the tellers from Celestial Body. Noticing her presence, he asks if it's okay for her to appear in front of everyone, but she says only the MC can see and hear her. In any case, he explains that these battles focus on the collector's skills, and the winner gains the rights to the loser's library. That second part makes the sword nervous. It was way too dangerous, and Jinpung asks why the MC doesn't accept the challenge. Was he scared? The MC hints that he could accept, but in the end says he won't, and laughs in the other teller's face. The divine spirits are disappointed, and Jinpung is furious with the refusal, but the MC stands firm in his decision. He had the right to refuse. The sword asks if it was okay to turn it down, but the MC simply doesn't care. Others accept it out of pride, but not him. Jinpung scolds the MC for not accepting the challenge and asks if he has no honor, but Yudian says he's not the one to talk. It was obvious to the boy that he had planned to issue the challenge right as he opened his library, this was just an intimidation tactic. He thought Yu-Yan would be too embarrassed to decline in front of his viewers, which angers the spirits due to the teller's arrogance. Even Jinpung's own subscribers were unhappy with his behavior. They even wanted to file a complaint about him in his department. Trying to calm things down, Yu-Yan says there's no need for scandal and pretends to be worried about him like he's a newbie. The boy knows he can't treat him too coldly, since it could hurt his library. Meanwhile, the spirits say they want the battle. Multiple donations start pouring in for both of them, as everyone gets excited to see this storytelling duel, and the MC notices this behavior. Approaching the teller, he says he has a condition, to which Jinpung asks what it is. Yu-Yan says that the winner will gain everything the loser owns, including the right to their life. Jinpung is startled by this, but soon after believes the MC willingly walked into his trap. The boy says it's a great offer for them both, and laughing, the other teller accepts the proposal. Confident, he says it was the MC who suggested it, so he couldn't take back his words in the end, and thus, the deadly battle was set. All of this made the little fairy very intrigued and excited. She had already been curious about the MC for becoming famous so quickly, but he was proving to be far better than she expected. Seeing him refuse to conform to the environment and openly ignore it, letting that slide would be terrible for her department. In any case, it was fine. Now that he had become such a coveted prey, the fairy could simply devour him. The scene changes and we see Hiram looking worried, asking if the MC will be alright. He replies that he's only doing this because he knows everything will be fine, and it's also a chance to show off his sword's power. Yu-Yan asks if she's worried about him. She hesitates a little, and the boy reassures her. Some divine spirits were also questioning his actions, especially for making such a risky bet. The White Lotus complains that they don't even know what they're going to do on the other side. He's simply insane for going against an entire department alone. The MC explains that, as he's said before, the easiest people to fool are those who think they understand the entirety of reality. She asks what that has to do with anything, and he says it's the same case. Everyone in that department behaves arrogantly. Hiram asks if he made that bet on purpose, and the MC says yes. He had a method to defeat all of them at once. The sword calls him a psychopath, and he thanks her for the compliment, but she calls him crazy for thinking that was a compliment. Startling the protagonist, the system pops up, announcing that only 5 minutes remain until the storytelling battle begins. The MC then picks up his little owl and thanks it for its services, tossing it out the window. The little creature flies off. Determined, Hiram asks if they can go now, because she wants to see the stadium before fighting. But the MC has something to discuss with her first. He wants to ask her something, and she looks at him, curious about what it might be. Jinpung was confident in his victory. Even knowing that the opponent was the Sword Empress, they were far too arrogant. Not even she would be able to defeat the collector he had received for that special occasion. And to think the department would assign someone that powerful to him, it made him excited. To him, it was obvious that the department recognized his abilities, otherwise, they would have never given him someone that strong. With only 1 minute left before the battle began, the teller calls the collector to go. He seems a bit lazy, but obeys Jinpung. The time has come. Both teams enter the arena, and cheers erupt throughout the stadium. The audience was thrilled. If you look closely, they all seem like test dummies. The author must have been too lazy to finish their designs. Jinpung orders him to go into battle, but the boy says not to keep bossing him around. He was going to do it anyway, and that was annoying. This irritates the teller, but he tries to stay calm because it was necessary to win the battle against the MC. The collector starts talking about how his opponent is the Sword Empress and how excited he is. He wonders what it will feel like to slice her. Shouting, Jinpung warns that she's approaching, and we see a silhouette appear in front of his collector. The teller's expression is far from satisfied. He looks shocked, and that look alone tells us what happened. This also seems to catch the fairy by surprise as she looks at the system screen and lets out a sigh. The collector looks at his opponent and asks what happened. Standing before them was the MC with his sword sheathed, and he gives a confident smile. The two were standing in a Dragon Ball Z style battle arena, with Jinpung outside like a boxing coach. They were facing off, not making any sudden moves before the fight began. The test dummies were watching. Some seemed frustrated with what they were seeing. Could they be divine spirits? The next image answers that question. They're avatars of divine spirits, and the one speaking is Satan himself. Impressed, Jinpung's collector asks if a teller is allowed to do that, fight in the collector's place, and he replies that there are no rules against it. In the end, it didn't matter to him. Even if the MC surprised him, this was a great opportunity to finish the boy off. He then orders his collector to eliminate him, but the collector says he was already going to do that. There's no need to keep repeating himself. White Lotus asks if it's really okay to do this, but the MC doesn't seem too worried. Emitting a frightening red aura, the sword then tells him that Guy is not ordinary. Grabbing his book to read, the MC says there's nothing to worry about. We see the book is silver, so he must be average. Opening it to read, Yuyan gets a very unpleasant surprise. Those abilities really weren't normal. That guy was none other than Jack the Ripper, a serial killer who will appear a year from now, eliminating collectors in the real world. Unfortunately, in his reality, no one discovered Jack's identity until the end of days when he revealed it himself. In the end, he was eliminated by Duyun after becoming the killer's target. Drawing his sword, the MC sees that this threat needs to be eliminated as soon as possible, or many innocents will be harmed. The pentagram was involved in this, just as it had been in his past life. They definitely have some connection to the apocalypse. Hiram was in a room watching the battle. She was really nervous, thinking she should have been the one to fight there. If something happens to Yuyan, she'll never forgive herself. We go back to the scene where he tells her she can't go, and she explodes at him, saying there was no reason for him to go in her place. The MC explains that this fight is his. She doesn't need to be involved, but she protests that she's his collector, so she should fight. Yuyan says that if he were a regular teller, then yes, it would be her who should fight. That doesn't satisfy the girl. The protagonist notices this and says he understands her concern, but she doesn't believe in his potential. Even though he's grateful for her worry, she's only worried because she thinks he's going to lose. Nervously, she admits to herself that it's true. Yuyan believes in her, but she can't believe in him. Suddenly, the boy puts his hand on her head, catching her by surprise as he tells her not to worry. He says he's not as weak as she thinks, but she's blushing too much to think clearly. Confident, he says he's going to prove to her that she's anxious over nothing, and prove those who laughed at him were wrong. Back in the present, she admits she's still nervous, but that she will believe in her teller. The battle is finally about to begin. The scenery changes completely. Several old buildings appear around the MC, and we see they copied Shumatsu no Valkyrie. He was in an area similar to the Whitechapel district in London. White Lotus calls the MC's attention, asking him to look ahead. Jack had disappeared the very next moment. He had been right in front of them, but now he's gone. He was probably using camouflage. Watching from above, we see Jack already atop one of the buildings, wondering how he should eliminate the protagonist. He was planning his attack when the MC turns and looks directly at him, catching him completely off guard. Entering his camouflage again, he wonders if he was seen, but assumes it was just a coincidence. Trying a new approach, he begins planning his attack again, when the MC once again turns to face him. That really shakes the boy's confidence, making him question if Yuyan is actually seen through his camouflage. The little fairy monitoring the collector asks if he wasn't supposed to be confident in his camouflage. That question makes Jack nervous, and he tells her to shut up. He'll deal with this in his own way. Even if the MC can discover his location, he won't be able to do anything if he's attacked from a blind spot. He thinks the MC won't be able to block an attack from behind, but the MC once again turns to face him. With a simple movement, he parries Jack's strike, which further shatters his confidence. How did he do that? Once again, he hides in the shadows, and the MC just watches him retreat. We get a view from the MC's perspective and understand why he can see Jack. His book was glowing above his head. White Lotus asks how he can see the boy, and Yuyan simply says he has his ways. Realizing the boy knows the MC can see through his camouflage, she asks what he'll do now. He replies that he's going to act. With a leap, he charges toward the Ripper, who now has a terrified expression. The boy blocks the protagonist's strike, but he's not happy at all about being seen. This completely shattered his expectations. Frightened, Jack shouts, asking how the MC found him. The MC scoffs that all he can do is hide. This offends the collector, who yells that that's not his only ability. Disappearing from in front of the protagonist, he reappears right behind him, ready to land his final blow. Hiram screams in desperation as the dagger nears his back, and the collector shouts for the MC to go to hell, but he dodges easily. The two lock eyes for a mere second, while the MC smiles. In the next instant, Jack had already distanced himself from him, and Yuyan asks if he's finished. Raising his sword and even more confident in his skill, the MC says it's now his turn. Up in the stands, we see the MC's owl flying closer to the divine spirits. It lands on a wall and listens to the spectators' comments. Despite being impressed by the MC, they still underestimate him. A magic circle appears beside the owl as it carefully observes the spirits. The MC is able to hear their conversations through his pet, and hears the spectators still belittling his abilities. He tests out this skill from Baekyo, and it turns out to be an impressive ability, nothing less than expected from that gift. In any case, it's clear that the divine spirits still believe he's weak compared to the other collector, and that excites him. This was the perfect opportunity to show them that things were completely different from what they thought, and he leaps into the attack. Getting ready, Jack tries to figure out from which side the sword will come, left or right, so he can parry it. Something suddenly catches his attention before he can even think. He dodges one of the MC's strikes, but it wasn't a sword in his hands. Just a second ago, he had a sword, but now he was holding a spear. When did he change weapons? Several blows are delivered by the MC, but Jack manages to dodge them all. He had been scratched, but he still had the ability to overpower the protagonist, even with his change in stance. Not long after, he already manages to analyze the attack pattern and range of the weapon. It was time to take that fight seriously. Yudian jumps backward with the spear, ready to strike Jack from above, but Jack figures it won't reach. Jack yells, calling the MC an idiot. He'll be stabbed before his spear even gets close. Unsurprisingly, the spear hits the boy's shoulder, catching him off guard and making him drop one of his blades. He looks at his wound, shocked and on the ground. He asks how the MC did that, but the MC says he wasn't seeing the full picture. His failure to predict that last attack was obvious. The spear had become much longer and now far exceeded the MC's height. Shouting, the boy calls Yudian a cheater, but the teller simply says he has a skill issue, and that was on him. Completely losing his composure, he tells the MC to shut up and leaps for his attack. All he needed was to get close enough to the MC and eliminate him in the most painful way possible. He was about to pull it off. A blue light emits from the protagonist and hits the other collector directly in the face. Shocked, he sees that the MC now has a shield in his hand. He finally realizes that the MC wasn't switching weapons. His weapon was transforming, and once again, it becomes a sword. Yudian attacks with a vertical slash, but the collector manages to block it with his daggers. Immediately, the MC prepares a second vertical slash, and Jack gets ready to parry it again. The weapon changes once more, now into a flail that strikes the ground right between Jack's legs, which he narrowly dodges. The MC swings the weapon for a lateral blow, and by then, it had already transformed into an axe, while Jack ducks. Apparently, the MC manages to land the strike as a small explosion is triggered by the impact. Jack is terrified. How could a weapon like that exist, and how could he wield it with such skill? Was he really a teller? The divine spirits wonder where he got that weapon. One of them theorizes it was either heaven or pandemonium that gave it to him. They were still just rumors, but one of them had heard that both Deep Darkness and Michael had appeared to him. Satan is listening to this and is impressed by the MC's ability to draw attention. In any case, he gets annoyed that he's referred to as Deep Darkness instead of by his actual name. Jack really had been hit. He's lying on the ground, bleeding with a sizable hole in the wall behind him. Yudian doesn't give him time to think and already advances for his final attack, which catches Jack completely by surprise. He quickly reacts and manages to dodge to the side, avoiding being sliced in half by the strike. Jinpung and the little fairy ask what Jack is doing, which irritates him even more. He tells them to shut up, that he'll handle it. Getting up, Jack says he'll give him credit for cornering him so well, but he had left his guard wide open. Strange letters begin to spread across his body. He was turning into some kind of monster, his body growing and emitting electricity. The fairy gets excited by this, saying she didn't expect him to use that against a low-level teller like Yudian. Snapping, Jack screams that things won't be so easy for him anymore. With impressive speed, Jack leaps into the air. He moves all over the area he created with incredible agility. Not even the protagonist seems able to follow his movements. The divine spirits are shocked. They can't even see him moving. They didn't know anyone so strong and fast. Appearing next to the MC's face, Jack screams that it's too late to regret what he did. The next moment, Yudian asks who he's talking about, himself. He grabs the collector's arm and throws him against the wall with even greater speed, making it explode on impact. Jack is stunned and seems to pass out too, and the fairy watching everything from the sidelines can't believe it. Yudian says he would have finished the collector off much sooner if he'd known the fight would be this boring. On the ground, unable to move, Jack is in disbelief over his defeat. He screams, asking what the hell the protagonist is. That was supposed to be his story. He was supposed to be the main character of it all. The MC was supposed to be nothing more than a sacrifice to make him shine even more in others' eyes. How could he have lost? Placing the blade to the boy's neck, the MC says he was drunk on his own power and lost because of his pride. Yudian tells him to take a good look at the one who defeated him. He was the victor. His words are, "I am the true main character of this stage." The boy whispers for mercy, but it's too late. Raising his sword, the MC says that this was his power, the value Jack had underestimated all along. All we see is blood spraying as Yudian claims his complete victory. The chapter begins with Jinpeng shocked by the entire fight. The divine spirits were also in disbelief over the MC's win. He sheathes his blood-stained sword as the system announces his victory. The area will soon disappear. Someone begins clapping timidly, but is quickly followed by others, who are ecstatic about the battle. Blushing, the MC starts laughing, seeing that everyone is enjoying his performance. Hiram is emotional, having watched the whole fight. The boy had really defeated a tremendously powerful collector. Even so, she's frustrated for not having been able to believe in him until the very end. But she will change that attitude and says she believes in him now and will never replace him with anyone in this world. Was that a love confession? I think so, because she calls him my light. Miguel is shocked and says that Yuyan is incorrigible. After all of this, more and more divine spirits will want to sponsor him from now on. Smiling, he says he'll expect even greater feats from him, and it seems he's accepted that he'll never be able to control someone like the MC. We return to Jinpung's library, where Argyle is screaming at him, furious over his defeat. She yells, demanding he say something, but at that moment he's being strangled by the power of his senior, coughing from lack of air. The collector she gave him was defeated by a rookie teller, as if it were nothing. Jinpung protests, saying someone must be behind him. Someone had to be helping him. Argyle cuts him off, saying there are no excuses. Nothing would change the current situation, and now there's no turning back. She needed to find someone to take the blame for this situation, the person who caused all this chaos within the pentagram. Jinpung screams in desperation, begging her to have mercy on him, but her face was livid with rage. He had failed his mission, and there was no forgiveness. Nothing he said could fix it. The losses he caused were so great that he couldn't repay them even if he worked his entire life. The teller was in despair, and that only made Argyle hate him more. He had lost the rights to his library because of his defeat. Eliminating him was the best option. She was already being merciful by doing so, because his life would be far worse if he remained alive. Jinpung was in complete despair, not understanding how things had ended up that way. That bastard Kang Yugen had known he would win from the start. He knew everything, and Jinpung had never been the hunter in this story. Tears begin to fall from his eyes as he was already seeing his inevitable end. The teller vanishes into the shadows after being eliminated by Argyle. A sound is heard, and the fairy looks back, still wearing her expression of pure disgust. Yuyan was opening the door. She quickly changes her expression and begins speaking to him cheerfully, introducing herself. The MC introduces himself to her as well. She says she loved watching his fight because it was amazing, and he pretends to be embarrassed, saying he doesn't know how to respond to such praise. The MC asks where Jinpung is, but with a sad face, she replies that he no longer exists. Since he lost the storytelling battle, and his life was part of the agreement, he was destined to be eliminated from the beginning. The MC finds that strange. Even if they had bet their lives, he never ordered Jinpung to die. Argyle says he doesn't know that because it was his first battle. Dropping the act, he asks seriously if she could stop talking nonsense already. She turns to him, asking if she misheard what he said. Yuyan says she heard perfectly. He wants her to stop talking nonsense because she got rid of something that belonged to him, and that was wrong. Argyle says that even if she was wrong, she's still his superior and deserves respect, but the MC says she abused her power in the end. Returning to her friendly demeanor, she says she really did make a mistake but will compensate him accordingly. The fairy transfers 800 points to the MC and asks if that's enough to settle things between them. The MC looks at her and says he already knows who she is. She was a psychopath who laughed at the deaths of people dying right in front of her. She had been harassing them the entire time. The image of her gathering people who refused to take part in a challenge just to cause a massacre was something the MC couldn't forget. The way she looked at all those corpses like they were worse than insects, there was no way to forget that. Confirming that he received the points, the MC says it does seem to be enough to cover his loss of Jinpung and compliments her for how she dealt with him. Excited, she says he knows how to flatter her and claims to be a benevolent person. Provocatively, the MC asks if she knew about something. There was a rumor going around that a particular department was in contact with the Exodus. This catches Argyle's attention. The Exodus was one of the forces that controlled the mixed world. They thrived on the despair and anguish of the smaller world. It was very likely that the Pentagram department was in contact with them, even in his past life, when several departments were shut down and they all pretended nothing had happened. Argyle asks why the MC is saying those things to her. Someone might hear and think that the Pentagram department sides with the Exodus. Raising his hands, Yuyan says he's just warning her in case they do get involved with them, but he apologizes for the misunderstanding. In any case, he was going to leave now to claim the library he won from Jinpung, while the little fairy waves goodbye. When the MC finally leaves the room, we see Argyle's true face, and she was not at all pleased with the situation. Yuyan notices it. He knows she's different from Jinpung. Dealing with her won't be easy. She knows how to hide information about herself and her department. The very fact that the Pentagram department has ties to the Exodus says a lot, and creating someone like Jack in secret illustrates that very well. It definitely won't be simple or easy to deal with these people alone. However, he had a way out. Pulling out a book, he tells himself that things will be different from how they were last time. Back at Suryan's company, she says she would like him to give her information ahead of time about what he plans to do. She scolds him because they had gone out to make some money and suddenly ended up in a storytelling battle. The two apologize to her, and Suryan says she'll stop there since they were remorseful, and they even came back with a win from the battle. Hiram says the MC was amazing, and Yuyan says the capacity of his library increased greatly and the divine spirits were satisfied. Looking more closely, he notices that Suryan is a bit too happy and comments on it, which startles her. Excited, she says she didn't want to say anything, but since he was too curious, she would tell him. The MC says he never asked, but it was too late. Suryan yells that today is payday, glowing with excitement. I get like that too when my paycheck hits the account. Hiram gets curious, but it was pretty obvious what it was about, and Suryan tells her to check her account to see how much she received. The girl opens her phone and her face shows complete shock and embarrassment. Overwhelmed, she screams to the MC, asking what she should do. She was now totally rich, but Yuyan says it was still not that much. Suryan also explains that, in addition, after Hiram became famous, they got many more commercial deals, totaling 200 million. The two of them were completely ecstatic over the money and already planning some simple upgrades to the office. Yuyan and his two little companions look at the scene with an expression of disgust at the girl's simplicity. Lotus asks why they were acting like that, and Yuyan explains that they should leave them be because both grew up poor. In any case, the Bakwa office was full of life now. The two were absurdly happy. Yuyan asks if they couldn't just buy the side dishes at the store, but the two think that's something only rich people do. The scene shifts, but we're still in the office. Suryan looked quite busy with her tasks. The MC notes to himself that she was like that because of all the interviews and offers Hiram was receiving. He had work to do too, but his system notifies him that Celestial Body had sent him a message, though he hadn't seen it earlier. The system window informs him that he had earned a promotion and was now a senior within the company, receiving some rewards for it. This made him really happy. He was finally being recognized for his hard work. Reading the rest of the notifications, he sees that he wasn't officially a senior yet. He would need to undergo a promotion ceremony, which he hates. Still, he thinks better of it, since he'd have to go there anyway soon, but it would take more time now because of the ceremony. Noticing the MC's distraction, Hiram asks what's wrong, and he says he apparently got promoted, and she congratulates him. Suryan also congratulates him, and he thanks her, but also asks how her work is going. She says she already dealt with most of it, but there was still a lot left to do, which leaves him overwhelmed just hearing it. Yuyan says she must be overworked, but she says it's fine. Hiram needs to be in touch with business people now. Taking the opportunity, he asks if she has time to talk about that now. She says yes and asks what he wants. Yuyan invites the girl on a date, which leads her completely surprised. She even drops the pen she was holding. Outside, Suryan says he was being very sneaky. Was he really okay saying something like that in front of Hiram? He said she was way too calm, so he wanted to tease her a little, though the result was even better than he expected. Changing the subject, he asks if she's having trouble finding someone to handle negotiations with other companies, and she says yes. The MC was eager to solve that, and he knew it was hard for a no-name company like hers to build trust and close partnerships. He had invited her out because he wanted to help. If a teller appeared in person, even the big companies wouldn't be able to look down on her. Suryan thanks him and says there was a company she had been considering, but there was a problem. She asks him to listen carefully for a bit, and he turns to give her his full attention. They stop at a cafe, and then the girl begins explaining that her family was relatively well off and peaceful. Even though she grew up without a mother, things were going fine, and she had a brother who was a collector and was becoming well known in the field along with his team. But one day, her brother died in an accident, and all the problems started right after that. Several collectors, even some from major clans, were also injured or killed in that incident, and they sued her brother. He was dead and couldn't respond to the lawsuit, so her family lost a lot. The MC starts thinking about that story and the injustice caused. Suryan believed in her brother's kindness. He was a good person like no other and valued his family, but he saw something wrong in society. Yuyan asks if he thought mental domains shouldn't be preserved, and the girl confirms it. That makes the MC realize it was the same situation he had experienced with the old man from the association. That's why her family was sued. He even starts to think that her brother's death might not have been a mere accident and decides he'll investigate the situation soon. Someone calls out Suryan's name, and she seems to recognize the voice as she's startled upon hearing it. An old man recognizes her and says it's good to see a familiar face around there. He greets her, and she greets him back. The old man then says he was saddened by her departure from the clan, but heard she had opened her own agency. Was she at least making any money? Yuyan asks the girl who that man is, and she replies that he's a senior from her previous job, John Kwangshuk. He belittles the protagonist, saying he looks weak, and asks Suryan if he's a collector under contract with her. Surprised, the old man compliments her, saying most personal agencies don't last long in the business, and asks how she managed to get a collector. Still provoking the girl, he asks if she's capable of handling a collector properly, but the MC cuts him off and calls out the old man's name. He approaches the boy and introduces himself, asking if he was already familiar with her agency. The MC introduces himself politely. The old man says he hadn't heard of him before and asks his rank, but the MC interrupts again and tells him to get lost. This angers Kwang-suk, who demands to know how he dares to speak to him that way. He looked so young. Did he have no manners? Yuyan replies that what he really wanted to do was beat the old man up, but he was holding back out of respect for Suryan, though the old man had been rude. The girl stands up and asks the MC to stop with the provocations, but Kwang-suk was already angry and begins insulting the boy. The MC looks at Suryan and says that insulting her was the same as insulting him. Didn't she want him to do something? The old man then asks what their relationship was, suggesting there was something between them. He says that if he had known about her talents, she could have come to him at work too. Laughing, he adds that way he could have had some fun as well. In the next instant, the old man's head is spinning backward from the blow the protagonist landed on him. The old man is thrown back, and his companions panic when they see it. The two men ask if the MC had lost his mind, while the old man is still lying on the ground like a piece of trash. He gets up, shouting that the boy was a criminal for attacking a civilian. Being a collector, he would pay for this. Kwang-suk tells one of his men to call the special unit, but the MC says it's useless, even if they do call them. Yuyan wasn't a collector to begin with, so he hadn't broken any laws. The old man looks confused and asks, "What?" In response, the MC asks how he plans to punish a teller using collector laws. With a trembling voice, the old man is startled to realize the boy is a teller, and the MC tells him to go on, keep saying what he was saying earlier. The men begin to surround him, saying that even if he's a teller, he crossed the line, and if he didn't stop, they wouldn't just stand there. Smiling, EMC asks if that's really what they want to do. He says they can use their weapons, but the moment they do, they'll be eliminated. Yuyan had a terrifying expression on his face as he threatened the lives of those fools. He tells the three of them to get out of there before he wipes them off the face of the earth, and they are terrified by his words. The three of them run away like a bunch of clowns, while the MC just watches the pathetic scene. Suryan is impressed, and the MC asks what she thought. He was pretty reliable, right? Breathing a sigh of relief, she says she can't stop him. Back to their conversation, she asks why he chose her, as we see the poor staff member cleaning up the mess. After the incident, she ended up blacklisted by the clans and could never partner with other companies again. Yuyan asks if she held a grudge against her brother. The girl replies that at first, yes, but after thinking it over, she knew he wasn't a bad person. He just messed with the wrong people. The boy asks if she's going to accept that injustice without doing anything, and she asks what she could possibly do against those people. He agrees with her concern, but says that's exactly why he wants to help her, which surprises the girl. Smiling and standing up, he says he wants to turn this world upside down and prove to all those idiots that they were wrong. That might sound absurd at this moment, but soon enough he would change the girl's mind, and he invites her to start looking for partners right now. Extending his hand, he says he'll help her, which leaves her completely speechless at first, but soon she becomes really happy. Grabbing his hand, she says he might end up regretting it, but he says he's the kind of person who acts first and thinks later. The scene changes and we see an old man thanking them for the deal. Leaving the place, Suryan finds it surprising that the agreement worked out and says it was thanks to the MC, but he says he just did what he could. Frustrated, the girl asks why he would even need her as a manager if he was solving everything by himself, but he says they need to help each other grow. Looking at her, Yuyan says they were all in the same boat and that she might be weak in this area, but she was extremely strong in others. Now it was time to laugh. If they didn't return soon, Hiram might start saying something, and Suryan asks if they should buy something for her. Back at the office, the MC was waiting outside for something. Screaming is heard from inside the room. One of the girls was telling the other to keep her head up so she wouldn't waste her makeup. The two girls come out of the room, and we see that Hiram looks stunning in her dress. She asks the MC what he thinks of her look. The MC replies that he knew she was pretty, but today she was even more beautiful, which sends her over the moon with joy. It was time to go. As they enter the building, Hiram comments that the place is huge, and Yuyan says it's one of the biggest magazines in the nation. Reaching the reception desk, he says they were there for an interview, and the receptionist directs them to the 7th floor. Yuyan thanks him while we get a beautiful view of Hiram in serious mode, trying not to show off too much. That leaves the receptionist totally flustered. while Surian and the other two decide to go separate ways since she had something else to do. The two leave while the receptionist is still blushing. I get him, I'm afraid of pretty women too. Arriving in the room, they're greeted by a woman who says she had been waiting for them. She asks who Yuyan is, and he introduces himself as Hiram's manager. He was there to support her. Happy to see that Hiram had another manager besides Surian, she introduces herself as Shin Garyon, a friend of Surian. Starting the interview, she says they were doing something no one had done in years and asks what their goal was in clearing mental domains. Hiram calmly responds that she doesn't need a reason to do it. As a collector, she's simply doing what she should. The interviewer asks about her future plans and what she thinks of being called the Empress of the Sword by others. The girl gives her answer. We don't get to hear it, but it seems it excited the interviewer, who says there's nothing to worry about. Changing the subject, she looks at the MC and says there's something she heard recently. She wanted to ask about the teller who was with the humans, something very uncommon for them. Finding that interesting, she mentions the story of someone giving up their protective blessing to become a collector, and the MC realizes she knows it's him. Owning up to it, he says he's the teller that the rumors are about. Even more excited, she admits she had a feeling he was the famous teller. The girl apologizes if it sounds rude, but she wanted to ask something purely out of curiosity, not just for journalism. Yuyan asks what it is. He could answer as long as it's not something problematic, and she wants to know why they clear mental domains. He says it was just to gain popularity faster, but she questions if that's really the only reason. Understanding the situation, the boy says it doesn't matter, but yes, he had a bigger goal in mind because he saw something others didn't. Standing up, he says the interview would end there. After all, the real star was the Empress of the Sword, not him. The interviewer seems to catch the hint and agrees to end the interview at that point. Teasing Hiram, she says she'd also like to have the kind of relationship where she could contact Yugian personally, which makes Hiram jealous. Back in the building lobby, they meet up with Surian, who greets them. She asks how the interview went and says the interviewer is very playful. The MC says it ended well, though Hiram's face says otherwise. Looking around carefully, he notices the place was packed and very noisy. Someone famous must have been there. A popular collector, he was there with two women serving as his security, and many people were thrilled by his presence. White Lotus asks what the deal was with that guy, but the MC wasn't the least bit interested in him. Yuyan tries to get Surian to leave with him, but she seemed too excited by the collector's presence to hear him. Once again, the protagonist tries to get her attention, which startles the girl and leaves her confused about what she had done. Curious about the situation, he grabs the collector's book to see what he was doing to attract so much attention from women. One of his traits was called Casanova, and he wonders what the hell that even meant. Did the guy just have some kind of sex appeal? The collector starts walking toward the MC, and Surian warns him, as he's still distracted with the book. He steps up to Hiram and says it's a pleasure to meet her, introducing himself as Ju Kyungsu, but she doesn't seem to care at all. Kyungsu says he had heard a lot about her and came hoping to get to know her better, then starts flirting. Hiram's expression is one of pure disgust, which makes the MC realize that not even the guy's skill could break her mental fortress. Irritated, Lotus says he was only there because of Hiram, which makes the MC want to act before he gets any closer to the girl. He steps between them and says Hiram was uncomfortable with his presence, introducing himself as her manager. Conceited, the collector says it's absurd that a mere manager like him was standing in his way and claims he's famous and known by all. Yuyan says that's irrelevant. He doesn't want that guy near his collector because she doesn't like it, which makes the girl blush a little. The man laughs and says there's no such thing as a woman who doesn't like him or who hasn't heard of him. That attitude makes both the MC and White Lotus even more irritated and eager to wipe the floor with him. Before they can do anything, Hiram asks him to stop because he's being a nuisance. He accepts it but still invites her out. She apologizes but says she has to turn him down. She doesn't have time for that kind of thing, though he keeps pressing her. Hiram pushes his hand away from her chin and asks him to step away from her immediately, and that seems to make him more serious. Smiling again, he says he tried talking to her nicely, but apparently that's not going to work. Taking off his gloves, he tosses them to her, which leaves the girl completely confused. He then says he wants to request a duel with the Empress of the Sword. The NPCs behind the collector start getting excited at the idea of seeing their idol duel and hope he wins. Lotus asks if it's okay for collectors to fight each other, and the MC says the government has no issue with it. It's better than them scheming in secret. Still, Lotus notices that Hiram doesn't seem at all interested in declining the challenge, which actually makes the MC happy. He looks at her and says she can accept it if she wants. She didn't seem interested in avoiding the fight. Hiram smiles and says that's great. She would accept the duel with the pretty boy Casanova. The collector is thrilled, confident that victory is guaranteed simply because Hiram is ranked lower than he is. There was nothing a rising rookie could do against him, a member of the great clan Hesiod. Grinning, he keeps thinking about how easily he's going to put her in her place, practically drooling at the thought of taking her down right there. Yuyan whispers something into the girl's ear, and she tells the pretty boy she won't duel him now, but in 3 days, which leaves the man a bit confused. Believing she wouldn't improve at all in 3 days, he accepts her conditions. As he walks away, he says they can use a venue from the association itself for the battle, and that he'll be waiting for her in 3 days. Still holding his book, the MC already knew he was from the Hesiod clan, but he also knew exactly how he would crush that pride. The interviewer shows up behind them, asking what all the commotion was, and Suryan says that Kyungsu passed by. She makes a huge face of disgust, and the MC asks if she knows him. Saying yes, she replies that he makes her uncomfortable with his stares. It was clear she too was unaffected by his ability. The girl also explains that, on top of everything, there were rumors that he used his clan's power to do bad things, and asks what he did to them. Yuyan says that the man requested a duel with Hiram, and they had accepted. This shocks the girl. The news worried her, since the guy was strong, but the MC reassures her, saying he has a plan to defeat him. It was just a matter of thinking about it. If the Empress of the Sword wins a duel against him after the interview, it would become a huge journalistic scoop. She asks if he was trying to take advantage of the situation, but the boy says he'd be grateful if she could bring more media attention to them with it. Sighing, she says she already figured he wasn't an ordinary person, but now he was proving to be even crazier than she thought. Either way, she says she'll do as he asked and tells them they'll meet again another time. Hiram thanks the MC for letting her take part in the duel, and he says he only did it because he's confident in her victory. She asks why he requested to postpone the duel for 3 days, and he responds that they need to make this event as big as possible to attract media. Journalists started gathering in front of Suryan's office, wanting to interview Hiram about the duel, and the situation was exhausting the girl. Garyong had really managed to bring a lot of attention to them. The MC knows that even though Hiram is recognized by the spirits, regular people still didn't know her. They needed this exposure. Still, she seemed calm, just sitting and practicing her cultivation, even amid all the fuss about what she would do in the duel. She still had the potential to become even better than she was in her past life, so he couldn't allow her maximum potential to be held back. From the MC's perspective, they needed her to become stronger than ever and transcend to her true peak. This battle was meant to help her grow even more, not just in strength, but also in fame. The day of the duel finally arrived. We see the Coliseum where the battle between the MC and Jack took place, at least I think so. Snack vendors were already selling their goods, and the stands were starting to fill up with people eager to see the fight. It was clear that this battle was highly anticipated. The place was beginning to get packed, which even startled Suryan. Yuyan asks if she's nervous, and she yells at him, overwhelmed by how much attention was focused on this fight. Everything was at stake. He was impressed by the media traction Garyong had gathered, but it was also plausible that it was thanks to the artist collector too. These battle events weren't that common, so people got excited whenever one was happening. Suryan starts to feel sick from the nerves, and the boy asks if she wants to go to the bathroom. She yells at him, saying it's just a stomachache. In any case, the place was packed. Even members of great clans and famous collectors were present. The nerves were understandable. Lotus comments that he doesn't seem nervous, but he denies it. He just wasn't showing it. This battle wasn't his. It belonged to the Empress of the Sword, and we see that, although meditating, she also seemed nervous. Only 3 minutes remained before the duel would begin. She opens her eyes in a contemplative state. Yuyan asks if she's ready, and Hiram stands up and says yes, though there's a hint of hesitation in her voice. He gives a gentle smile, but in the next moment punches the girl on the head for no apparent reason. Crying, she asks why he did that, but he says he didn't hit her with the intention to hurt. He asks if she's less nervous now than before, and it seems to have triggered something in the girl. She realizes her nervousness is gone. Still, she complains to him, saying he should have warned her, but the MC responds that if he had, it wouldn't have had the same effect. Yelling, she says just wait until he gets nervous, she'll do the same, but right after, she thanks him for being by her side. The battle was about to start. The system orders the fighters to enter the arena and also informs them that the divine spirits are excited about the fight. There were already 4,500 viewers watching the duel, and all of them were cheering for the Empress of the Sword. Both were now in the arena. A field is generated around them. Trees begin to appear, and they now find themselves in a place resembling a forest. The rules were as follows. The battle would end if one of them surrendered or became unable to fight. There would be monsters present that would grant them points when defeated, and each monster had a different point value as well. They had 3 hours to complete the duel. If there was no knockout within that time, The winner would be the one with the highest score. Killing was prohibited. Anyone who broke this rule would be punished according to the association's regulations. All the rules were explained. With cheers from the stands and spectators, the system announced that the battle could now begin. A massive explosion occurred the instant the match started, earning him 150 points. He looked excited and energized for this duel. A spectator begins to cheer for him with excitement, while another asks what the Empress of the Sword was doing. She was standing still with her eyes closed, leading the man to wonder if she was already giving up before the fight had even begun. We quickly see that the electric aura around her body starts to take form. She was deeply focused. Opening her eyes, we now realize the real battle was about to begin. She was finally ready. The artist looks behind him to see what happened and wonders about the sound he just heard. Something was rushing toward him. Before he could understand what was happening, Hiram was already in front of him with her sword, ready to slice him into sashimi. Even so, he wasn't weak and manages to block the attack, though it was clear he struggled to do so. The hatred on his face was clear, and he thinks she's a damn brat for going after him instead of the monsters right at the start of the battle. Excited, the commentator remarks how the battle had already kicked off with a clash between the two, rather than a search for points. An electric dragon is summoned by Hiram. She wasn't there to play games. Her objective was crystal clear. Losing it, the artist shouts, asking how she dared to underestimate him. At that moment, his aura also intensifies, turning red. The fight between them was absurdly intense. Their auras clashed. It looked like two Super Saiyans were fighting. Even though he was strong, the artist realizes he was being overpowered by the Empress of the Sword. Her strength was overwhelming. Without losing composure, Hiram delivers a vertical slash so powerful it causes the ground beneath the artist to sink several centimeters. The crowd was shocked by such strength. They knew she was strong, but this was far beyond their expectations. Hiram thinks to herself that this was exactly what she wanted, the feeling of crushing someone who had underestimated her. The artist's face was pale with fear. The feeling of unleashing her full power, along with the freedom to do so, was thrilling her to no end. She makes a horizontal slash that cuts through everything around them. The forest is flattened in an instant, but the artist still hasn't been cut. A thin line of blood runs down his face. He had been hit, but was still standing and not seriously hurt. Terrified, he touches his face, still in disbelief that he had actually been struck. Finally snapping, he charges at the girl, having completely lost his mind over his beautiful face being wounded, and screams at her. With just one motion, we see a sword flying into the air, spinning at high speed. Hiram had disarmed the boy with her sword. Now he only had the other blade left in hand. Rushing in before he could react, she drives her knee directly into the bridge of his nose, breaking it instantly. The boy falls backward, blood gushing from his face, and he's already unconscious. The girls in the stands are completely shocked to see their idol being defeated so easily. He regains consciousness just before collapsing completely, returns to the fight, and begins thinking that he can't lose to a low-ranked collector. Analyzing his situation, he thinks he needs to calm down, otherwise he won't be able to read her attacks and respond properly. He had to react the right way. Hiram approaches again for another strike, and the artist finally spots an opening. Quickly, he moves to counterattack, but with a graceful movement, Hiram dodges, catching him off guard and slipping behind him. Furious, he realizes she was just playing with him, so he pivots his foot to keep her in sight. Leaping toward her, he yells that he won't let this slide, but with just one punch, Hiram knocks him out again. Suryan and Yuhyun watch the scene in horror. The boy was being mercilessly crushed by the Empress of the Sword. Trembling and with his face completely wrecked, he starts to stammer that he wants to give up, but she lands another punch. Hiram was deliberately stopping him from surrendering and continued to beat him up with conviction. The girls started to completely lose their admiration for the artist, since he was so easily subdued by another collector. Someone from the stands yells, asking why they weren't stopping the fight, but Hiram wasn't letting him declare surrender, so they couldn't stop it. Finishing her combo, she raises her arms for a final blow so strong that it explodes the entire area where the two of them stood. As the dust begins to settle, she observes the scene, and we see that the boy was completely defeated and unconscious. Impressed, the announcer finally declares the battle over and crowns Hiram, the Empress of the Sword, as the champion of the duel. The battlefield is finally deactivated, and they return to the Colosseum arena. Argyle was in disbelief and at the same time disgusted by everything she had just witnessed. Most likely this whole mess was caused by her. Realizing that Hiram had shown her true strength at that moment made her even angrier, and she understood that it was the MC who had given her that order. All she wanted now was to tear Yuhyun apart, but she couldn't act recklessly. An opportunity would come soon. Meeting up with the others, Hiram is welcomed by Suryan, who asks if she was okay. Extremely happy about her friend's victory, she praises her performance, touched by everything she had seen, and the girl thanks her for the kind words. The MC calls out to her, saying she was impressive, which sends her floating on air once again. She blushes more and more each time. and you know the rule. As cheerful as can be, she thanks the MC for his support. Someone slams a table, furious, saying things can't stay like this. The scene changes, and we see a meeting room where people are yelling that they can't keep losing mental domains because of the Empress of the Sword. Someone else asks what they can do, but a third person says they're being too emotional. His name is Lim Gunwoo. The leader says that even if he was there against his will, he should focus on the meeting, but Gunwoo doesn't seem very interested in it. Apparently, he also thinks that mental domains shouldn't be kept open, just like the Empress and the MC believe. Back at Suryeon's office, she comments how amazing it was that Hiram was the talk of the moment. Everyone was talking about her. While the two chatted excitedly about the next foods they would buy with their money, the MC sat deep in thought. Hiram notices and asks what he was thinking about. The MC finally says that he made a decision, but the girls still look confused. Yoo-yeon wants to recruit a new collector, completely defying their expectations and making them scream in disbelief. Hiram starts crying that she's being abandoned. The MC approaches her, who's sobbing on the couch, and asks when he ever abandoned her, but she yells that he lied, saying he only needed her. He begins to explain that it can't be just the two of them clearing mental domains forever. Things would get harder soon. It wasn't urgent yet, since both could still handle the domains, but that would change soon and they needed to prepare. Besides, now that her rank was about to rise, wouldn't it be great to have a junior just for her? That definitely caught the girl's attention. Her attitude shifts quickly, and she says there's no helping it. She should let it go and show the generosity of a senior, now visibly excited. Suryeon asks if the MC had someone in mind, and he replies that he hadn't thought of anyone yet. That wasn't entirely true. Remembering his past life, he could think of other collectors who were known as the miraculous generation. Lotus suggests he use his knowledge of the future to find someone. He says he has many candidates, but it wasn't the right time yet. Some hadn't even awakened yet, and finding an unknown person could be harder than expected. Lotus ends up complaining about that. The MC then remembers that there will be a competition tomorrow, which would be a good opportunity to find a hidden gem. Most likely there would be someone interesting in that competition who hadn't become famous in his future. A system window pops up for the MC, catching his attention and interrupting his thoughts. Someone unidentified was trying to start a video call with the MC. He decides to see who it is. Someone with a demonic appearance appears in the window, asking if the MC could hear her. When the MC confirms, she says she heard he had recently been promoted to senior. She finds the MC's stoic reaction strange and says she thought he'd react differently, but congratulates him. Suryeon asks who it is, but he doesn't know. Annoyed, he tells them to back off so he can have a bit more privacy. Carefully, he notices the horns on the girl's head. He finally remembers it was that horned guy he saw during the new teller's initiation ceremony. This makes the girl furious, and she says she's not a guy. Her name is Alicia. He thinks to himself that she actually looks really beautiful now, but doesn't say anything and asks how her career as a teller has been going. Excited, she says she got help from the seniors in her department and is currently working in a world called Altland. The teller girl is already convinced she has beaten him because she's reached 500 viewers in her library and praises her collector. The MC asks if he's a bad boy noble, and she asks how he knew that. Yoo-yeon gives a detailed description and startles the other teller. He's satisfied to have guessed the story of her collector and realizes she picked an interesting archetype, but she wants to talk about something else. She asks if he's seen the teller's forum recently. The MC says he hasn't checked it in a while, and she tells him to look because something interesting happened. Without giving more explanation, she says she's busy and ends the call, leaving the MC curious about what was strange on the forum. He opens the forum window to check the posts and sees something that startles him. There was a discussion about a teller who tried to copy the MC, giving up his blessing and fighting alongside the collector, but ended up being eliminated for it. Opening the video linked in the forum, he watches the scene of his end. He had tried to abandon the collector, but still didn't survive. Watching the video with him, Lotus comments that she didn't think it was real, but she's impressed to see that footage. Several people commented on how irresponsible it was to give up one's blessing, but the MC sees it as a good thing. It brought him more attention. Either way, many tellers started giving up their blessings trying to imitate him. Lotus asks if that worries him. Instead, he thinks it would make an interesting story. A teller who gave up their protection blessing and struggled because of it. The next day, we see Hiram looking disappointed, asking Yoo-yeon if he really had to go alone. He says yes, there were still too many reporters in front of their office because of her duel, and he needed to deal with that as soon as possible. Asking her to understand, he activates his invisibility ability and says he'll be back as soon as he's done. The boy passes through the crowd with no trouble. All the reporters wonder when they're finally going to come out. Arriving at the location of the collector graduation ceremony, we see many people coming in and out of the place. Lotus is shocked by the crowd, and the MC comments that it's possible people from the major clans were there to scout for recruits. The sword asks if he'll be able to find someone competent in that place. Surely the major clans already have information he doesn't. The MC explains that he's not necessarily looking for the best among the collectors. After all, Hiram was far from that in the beginning. He understood that those with the highest rank were often more talented, but there were still hidden potentials that only he could see and awaken. Lotus didn't have that ability, but she ends up accepting his explanation, and they start looking for a collector with great potential. The whole day goes by. Lotus is already tired from searching alongside the MC, but he still doesn't seem to have found anyone truly interesting to call. All the collectors he saw were very average. He was hoping to find someone with at least golden level potential. Something catches his attention and makes him take off running, scaring Lotus, who's left behind. The sword tries to run after him and even calls out his name, but he doesn't listen to her and runs until he turns a corner. Yuyan looks stunned, wondering if he had seen it wrong. Catching up to someone, he shouts, asking for a second of their time. Looking at her, he's left speechless. The girl he called turns around, but she doesn't seem very happy to have to give attention to the protagonist. What he sees above her is simply astounding. 3 books with various colors, like a rainbow. Yudian couldn't react. Normally, a person only has 1 book, but she had 3. That could mean a lot of things. But what exactly? She turns to leave again, but the MC calls out to her once more. Approaching her, the MC introduces himself and asks for her name, but she tells him to go away or she'll eliminate him right there. The boy doesn't seem to hear her, as he's extremely excited to meet someone with a power potential as strong as hers. Once again, he introduces himself to her as a teller and says he's from the Baekwa office. She then asks what he wants from her, and the boy replies that he would like to make her a great offer. Uninterested in the offer, she turns to leave, saying she's busy and doesn't want him bothering her, but he places a hand on her shoulder. Turning only her head to face the MC, she warns him that if he doesn't let her go, she'll end his life. Yuyan finally gives up and lets the girl go. Apparently, he wasn't going to get anything from her. Lotus arrives and asks if he was there because of that girl. She must be really talented or someone he knew from the future. Which one was it? The MC replies that he doesn't know her, but he thinks she must have been famous in his past life. It was strange that she was a complete unknown. Giving up for now, he tells Lotus they should head home, but that he'll find her again. Lotus asks how if he doesn't even know her name. Showing that he has one of her books in hand, he says not to worry, he knew he'd see her again soon. Back at the office, the MC asks Suryan to find someone named Kwon Jia, who had recently graduated. The girl asks if that's the person he wants to recruit, and he confirms that yes, she is. He had thought he could find her just by using the book he got, but 1 book wasn't enough. Suddenly appearing behind the protagonist, Hiram asks if that was a woman's name, and he replies that yes, it was a woman. Devastated, she starts crying and throwing herself on the floor in jealousy, but the MC explains that he didn't choose her because she was a woman. Hiram won't listen. Suryan finally finds her, but is shocked by the information she discovered. The MC asks if there was a problem. She explains that the girl graduated near the bottom of her class, and even though she had great combat skills, she was terrible at teamwork. Apparently, she even got into a fight at school and was almost expelled, so she barely graduated. She was truly powerful, strong enough to beat up several high-ranked students, but because of her personality, no one wanted to hire her. Suryan confirms with the MC if this is really the person he wants to recruit, and he replies yes, without any hesitation. All those books about her were proof that she could become even stronger than Kane Hiram. Poor Hiram, she's going to be replaced. Yuyan walks off for a bit, and Suryan asks if he's going to hire her now, but he says there's no rush. Actually, he was leaving because he had to go somewhere to meet someone. Arriving at the place, we see a sign that says, "Waiting at the door, street food." He thinks the restaurant's name is strange but decides to go in. The name becomes less strange once you know who owns the place. The door opens and a woman looks back to see who it is. She welcomes the MC and asks if he wants a table for 1, but he simply asks if she's Choi Do-yoon's mother. A bit startled, she asks how he knows her Choi Do-yoon, but he replies that he's the one who contacted her a while ago. Sitting at the table, she then asks if the MC knows where her son is, but he replies that he doesn't. If he doesn't know where he is, but knows his name, then that must be proof that he's alive, right? The MC quickly responds yes, Do-yoon is alive. Hearing that news brings her great relief and emotion. It was a massive comfort for her pain. She asks for the MC's name, calling him her savior, but he asks her not to call him something as heady as savior. Yuyan explains that he's just a teller who was curious about Do-yoon's family, and his mother asks how he knows her son. The boy replies that tellers work in various worlds and hear stories from different dimensions and planets. The truth is, the MC didn't know what Choi Do-yoon was doing in the other dimension. He only knows that the boy is alive and will return in the end. That makes him remember how he seemed like a sad person when he returned, but his personality ended up becoming distorted afterward. Maybe it happened because his mother had died in that reality, which made him hate everything that had happened and the imminent destruction of Earth. Interrupting the MC's thoughts, his mother says he had always been mature for his age. He was born without a father, but it never bothered him. Maybe that's why she had always been so apologetic toward him. In the end, he was just a child who wanted to be one, but she couldn't do anything for him. The day he disappeared, it was as if her world had completely collapsed. Losing him and feeling powerless was devastating. She says that if he's really alive, maybe he's better off in that other world than with a poor mother, but the MC doesn't let her finish. Firmly, he says she might feel guilty for his disappearance, but he's definitely working hard to come back to his mother. He said the boy is alive, but never said he's happy where he is, and trusts that she understands what he means by that. The MC knew that even with power, fame, and fortune in the other dimension, he chose to return to Earth, not for grandeur. His reasons were much simpler than anything else. He just wants to reunite with his family when he goes back. Emotional, Choi Do-yoon's mother agrees with the MC and says he's right. In the end, they were family, and her son definitely wanted to see her again just as much as she wanted to see him. She thanks the MC for everything. Wiping her tears, she says the boy seems to know her son very well, but he replies that he only heard about him from others. Understanding the situation, she says she just thought her son had found a good friend. Mothers really do have great instincts, the protagonist thinks. The woman was about to offer him dinner when someone storms into the restaurant, shouting, interrupting their conversation. 3 very strong-looking men show up, saying they had told her to shut the restaurant down before, but she didn't obey. Standing up, Do-yoon's mother asks who they think they are to say that, but they start to subtly threaten her. She asks them to leave, saying she had a customer there, but they scoff at her and say no one would want to eat in that dump. The argument starts to escalate, but the MC still hasn't moved to do anything. He just watches everything silently. Thinking out loud, he says he didn't really want to do anything good for that guy, but helping his mom wouldn't hurt, which irritates one of the men. Furious, he tries to punch the protagonist, yelling at him to leave already. The scene shifts to the outside of Do-yoon's mother's restaurant, and in the next moment, the 3 men are being thrown out. They scream in pain, their arms and legs broken, as the MC also walks out of the shop toward them. Panicked, one of them shouts in desperation that a collector can't lay hands on civilians, but the MC says that threat is meaningless. He's not a collector. Yoo-yeon drags the 3 away from the restaurant, commenting how people like them always say the same things, like bots. The 4 of them reach a deserted alley, and the MC looks at them lying on the ground and asks where their office is, but they refuse to talk. They even think the MC is going there to apologize for hurting them, but all he wants is to fix the problem at its root. He pulls one of their books and, reading the information, discovers the location of their hideout, leaving them in a panic. One of them screams, asking who sent him to mess with them, but the MC says he's not going to do anything more to them. He has something else in mind. His plan was to go to their hideout, stir up chaos, and then say it was them who gave up the location so easily. They still try to threaten the MC again, but he doesn't get intimidated and starts walking away from them, to the point they start swearing at him. The MC then turns back to the 3 and says he loves being called a bastard. What a weird fetish Yoo-yeon's got. Leaving the alley, he carves a silence inscription there so no one else can hear their shouting and cursing. Back at the restaurant, Do-yoon's mother asks if he's okay, but the MC says he already dealt with them. It was easy for him. After all, he's a teller. He also inscribes a seal to prevent intruders from entering and says they won't be coming back there anymore. She could rest easy. As he leaves, he says goodbye to her, and the woman thanks him for everything he did for her today. The MC's intention was to head to the bandits' hideout and take care of another task he had in mind. The chapter opens with hurried footsteps and people shouting that there was an enemy nearby, asking who the bastard was that was doing this. Yoo-yeon was standing still, while everyone who had tried to attack him was lying on the ground like garbage bags. Several other men were still standing, and one of them asked how he found that place. He replied that one of their subordinates told him. Rushing at the MC with a baseball bat, he yells, asking how the kid dared to show up there. But Yoo-yeon doesn't even flinch. In the next instant, he dodges the bandit's swing, which hits the ground so hard that it explodes. The MC realizes that guy was a collector and concludes someone bigger must be behind them. Someone rich enough to have a collector working for them. Excited, Yoo-yeon says he just unexpectedly caught a really big fish. Someone yells to eliminate the protagonist, and all the bandits charge at him together. The MC quickly counters and knocks one down with just a single kick, leaving the others terrified by his strength. Another pulls out a knife, cursing at the MC, and charges in to try and slash him. Effortlessly, Yuyan grabs the blade with one hand. It felt more like grabbing a broomstick than a sharp weapon. The man is startled and asks how he didn't get cut doing that. Taking the knife from him, we see that Yuyan had used the night combat skill, which enhanced his physical abilities and defense. He punches the man square in the face, dropping him instantly. The bandit is sent flying backward from the impact, while the others just watch the scene unfold. Yuyan then turns to the rest, still standing, and calls them all at once, gesturing with one hand to come at him. A middle-aged man with a cut across his face is trembling in fear while holding a metal briefcase. All the other bandits had already been defeated. One had even turned into a human pina colada right there. The man asks who the MC is, saying that collectors aren't allowed to harm civilians, but Yuyan replies that he's not the first to say that today. Terrified, the man starts to think the protagonist is a known assassin collector, assuming someone had sent him to take him out. Desperate, he yells that he'll give all his assets to Yuyan. He just wants to be spared. The MC is confused, but decides to play along. Yuyan crosses his arms and tells the man to hand over the assets. He opens his briefcase and shows what's inside. Besides money, there's a notebook, which immediately catches the MC's attention, and he grabs it. Inside, he finds proof that two major clans were colluding with these criminals: Hanwol, who had expelled Surian from the clan, and an even bigger one, the Twilight Curtain clan. Most of that clan's collectors were part of the Pentagram department. Did that mean their involvement too? Why on earth would that clan be involved in real estate? Business linked to collectors in that sector was incredibly suspicious. Suddenly, the protagonist has an insight. Maybe the goal was a mental domain in that area they were trying to hide. A mental domain even the government didn't know about, and a clan trying to keep it secret to monopolize it. The MC interrupts his own thoughts and tells the man to open the safe behind him, but the man refuses, terrified. Yuyan knew the refusal only confirmed that whatever was in that safe was truly important, and he needed to see it. He uses his system to teleport the safe into his library, causing the bandit to fall backward from shock at its sudden disappearance. Panicking, the man asks where the safe went, but the MC changes the subject, saying he couldn't leave the bandit standing while the others were knocked out. He turns to the MC, confused, and asks what he said, but with just one punch, the bandit is knocked unconscious. In the observation room, Yuyan is staring at the safe he brought from those bandits. It didn't look like he had enough strength to open the thing without causing major damage, so he starts considering other options. Remembering his engraving ability, he begins to completely alter the safe's configuration to reduce its security to 0. In just a few seconds, the vault opens on its own, and inside there's a notebook titled Top Secret. Reading its contents, the MC tells himself that this was much bigger than he ever expected and wonders how he can use that information. The three idiots who got beaten up by the MC in the previous chapter are on their knees, begging their boss for forgiveness over what happened. Yelling at them, the boss says that if they hadn't revealed the location of their hideout, that lunatic wouldn't have gone there and wiped everyone out. A group of 3 men arrives at the gang's hideout, and this greatly alarms their boss. It's the superintendent, saying he heard the news. He asks if it's true that their most sensitive piece of information was leaked because of an idiot. The gang leader tries to deny it. Quickly trying to explain, he says the MC took the vault, but he was confident he wouldn't be able to open it because it had several layers of security. Approaching the 3 idiots, the superintendent asks if they're the bastards who leaked the location, and the boss confirms they are. He says he understands, and makes a small gesture with one hand. Blood splatters everywhere, and the heads of the idiots are separated from their bodies. They were no longer alive, and the boss is horrified. Leaving, the superintendent says he'll spare the boss's life since it was his first mistake, and the man thanks him. Before actually leaving, he asks if the boss remembers the intruder's face. The boss says yes, and starts trying to describe it to the other man. He tries to recall it, but his memory is too foggy. He can't manage to describe the man's face to the superintendent. Realizing what happened, the superintendent explains that the intruder is very skilled and blocked his memories. The vault would have been easy for him too. It was time to shut down all offices in that area. If anyone reveals what happened there today, they'll show up again. The superintendent was furious at the audacity of the one who dared to meddle with the Twilight Curtain so boldly. He would make the intruder pay. The scene changes, and we see Lotus's face full of awe. They were in front of Celestial Body INC, and she says it's her first time there. Seeing 2 armored soldiers, she asks if they're tellers like the MC, but he says they're just guardians and different from him. Their armor granted them incredible power to fight enemies. It was like a suit of power. Depending on their rank, the level of the armor varied. He was explaining all this to White Lotus when something happened. A pair of frightening, yellowish eyes fixated on the MC, and he felt the heavy gaze. Looking upward, he tries to understand what happened, but can't see anything and wonders who could be staring in that direction. Lotus calls his attention. The promotion ceremony is about to begin, and they can't be late, and he agrees. We see the outside of the celestial body ANC building for a moment, then the smile of a very old man who recognizes Yuyan. He looks like a villain and is very interested in the MC. Someone as entertaining as him hadn't appeared at the company in a long time. The eyes that looked upward and the flaming desire within them had him excited. This old man only hopes the boy can show a story interesting enough to set the mixed world ablaze, and the chapter ends. At that moment, the boy gets chills and mentally comments to Lotus. She asks if he's nervous, and he mentions the gaze he felt earlier. She says it wasn't just a feeling. She also sensed that strange stare when the MC looked upward, though she hadn't said anything at the time. This surprises the MC. This wasn't just a weird sensation, and he starts thinking about who could have cast that gaze on him. His thoughts land on one of the first tellers, the CEO of Celestial Body ANC, Junwang Lapiut, or at least that's what he managed to read. He starts to worry that this guy could one day be his opponent, but ends up pushing that thought out of his mind. At the moment, the best option he had was to simply ignore him. If that really was the case, that man would be far too powerful for the protagonist. Someone calls for the MC's attention, telling him to hurry. Lotus was calling him, saying the promotion ceremony was about to begin. On stage were two tellers alongside the protagonist, and someone was asking the audience to applaud them for their achievement. Some already recognized the MC, especially for giving up his blessing and still earning a promotion in record time. Almost all the tellers were staring at Yuyan, and he was aware of it. Was he already becoming the target of potential envy? Everyone there seemed interested in him, including the company's CEO. That would have been impossible for his former self. The truth was, he was satisfied with this new life and wanted to keep moving forward with it, working even harder than before. The ceremony ends quickly, which frustrates Lotus a bit because of how fast the promotion happened, but the MC already expected this and wanted to leave. Lotus complains, asking why he wants to leave so quickly, but he just didn't want to stick around long enough for the departments to try and recruit him. The sword asks if he had somewhere to run off to, and we see he was returning to that old man's library. Confused, Lotus asks what kind of stuffed-up place that was. He reaches the spot where the old man was, who at first doesn't recognize him and asks who he is. Quickly realizing who it was, he greets the MC and says it's been a month since they last saw each other. The MC asks how he's been. He replies that he heard the boy got promoted, and it makes him feel embarrassed. Changing the subject, the old man comments that the reason he came must be because he wanted him to fulfill the promise he once made to the MC. Yudian says he doesn't want to keep calling him old man forever, and he agrees. Gallias, his name was Gallias, and this shocks the MC. That was none other than the guardian of the Dragon King. Surprised, Lotus asks who he was, since she didn't even recognize the name. Yuyan explains that there are many stories in the mixed world and asks if she had heard of the great divine dragonic force. It was the power of the divine dragon spirits who gathered many dragons of different species, and among them were 7 of the most powerful. They were known as the Dragon Kings, naturally powerful by nature. They were strong from birth and only got stronger as they aged. Among all species, they were the most fitting for the title of king. Unfortunately, among them was one who had been weak since birth, the White Dragon King Shuriel, who became the guardian of the Dragon King's story. Unlike the others who were born already hailed as kings, the fact that this dragon was born physically and mentally weak was already considered a sin. He was exiled from his group because of it, but with great effort, he eventually reached the Dragon King stage with the help of a teller. This became a shameful event for dragons, who despised tellers because they never fought and only observed everything. The difference was that this particular teller did the unthinkable. He raised the dragon, the MC of his story, to the title of king. This impressive feat earned that teller the title of Dragon King's guardian, and that teller's name was Gallias. The old man becomes shy about being recognized and says that's all in the past, but the MC asks why someone as famous as him would be in such a forgotten place. Smiling, the old man gives a very simple answer. He was there by choice, because those who run endlessly without rest end up going mad. Yuyan asks if he should work there when he retires. The old man asks if he's being serious, but the MC was just joking. Laughing, the old man says that was a silly question to ask someone who's still in the middle of the race, and that catches the boy's attention. He says the old man could still keep running too, and that leaves him a little confused. Motivationally, the MC says that age doesn't matter. The moment you decide to do something that ignites your passion, that's your best moment. That leaves Gallias a bit thoughtful. The MC's words clearly struck a chord with him. A system window pops up, informing them that only 10 minutes remain until the end of the teller promotion ceremony. Realizing the situation, Gallias says it's time for him to go back. He'd spent too long with the old man. The MC agrees but says he'll return. That makes the old man happy. He wanted to have more conversations like this with the protagonist in the future. Yudian seemed truly impressed to be in front of someone so important. It looked like a really good friendship was forming. Trying to return discreetly, Lotus and the MC scan the area, looking for the station so they can head back to Earth without drawing attention. It was at least funny seeing someone who liked attention so much trying to go unnoticed, but something makes him go on alert the next instant. A very tall red-haired woman appears in front of the MC, startling him for a second. She wore an eye patch over her left eye and asks if he had just come out of the recording room. She looked quite serious. A bit annoyed to find Teller still in the room, he admits he was inside, but when he looks up, he's startled. The woman had a golden book above her head, which makes the MC wonder if she's the head of some department. Curious, she asks if he had a good relationship with the old man from the room, and he says yes. He even knows his name, which impresses her. Quickly, she realizes he might be the famous Kang Yu-hyen and asks if that's really him, to which the boy confirms yes. That makes her extremely excited, like a child thrilled to meet her idol, and she finally introduces herself as Celestina. The MC seemed fascinating to her, and she asks if the rumors about him giving up his blessing to fight alongside his collector were true. After confirming it's true, she smacks the MC on the head, even more excited to see such a brave Teller, something rare these days. After exchanging introductions, she says it's great to meet him and invites him to her department, but he says he's from the storytelling office. Laughing, she says she invited him because she's also from storytelling, specifically the Department of Celestial Beings. The MC had heard of them, a department that only had the elite of the tellers, a place where very few were recruited, as they were all high-ranking. It was quite uncommon to have a department like that within the storytelling office, where size is usually a display of power. The MC asks why she invited him so quickly to such an exclusive department, and she says she's the head of it, and he's not an ordinary teller. Yu-hyen starts thinking it over, and that excites the woman, since the other departments had all been quickly rejected by him before. It was a great offer. He'd have fewer restrictions than in other departments, and it would suit him well, but the MC decides to decline. His decision was not to affiliate with any department and to do everything on his own. That seems to irritate Celestina a little, but not truly. Turning her back to him, she says he passed the test, and she now sees why he's close to the old man. He was passionate like no other teller today. The MC thanks her for the compliment, and she asks if making the offer again would bring the same result. He says yes, but that's not the end of it. Even if he's not part of the department, they could still work together if she wanted, and that makes Celestina curious. Yu-hyen says he can work as a freelancer for them. She thinks he was bold to say that. Did he think he was better than her department? Any other teller saying that to her would get beaten up. But coming from the MC, it sounded fun, and it was a good idea to partner with him. Of course, that didn't mean she would help him unconditionally. After all, every favor must be returned, and he fully agrees with that. As she leaves, she says if an opportunity comes up, she'll reach out to him, and now she needs to meet with the old man. He thanks her for the conversation, and she remembers something else to tell them. If he knows about the pentagram department, he'd better be careful. Those guys wouldn't leave someone like him alone. Yu-hyen says he does, and thanks her for the warning. He was already hostile toward Pentagram, so he was on high alert all the time. But that was even better, because his goal was to destroy them completely. And with that, the chapter ends.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.